I'm live now.
Sweet.
Should be live. What, did they hear me say they've put me on tilt? Is that the first sentence
Yeah.
they fuck's sake?
The first sentence, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know
Uh,
me. You've seen my tweets. You know about what my opinions of the Labour Party are at this point. I'm made it pretty well known. So
yeah, we will not be on the Labour media channels anytime soon. That is for sure.
I said, I've open to dialogue with these people. If they want to come and debate me, they're welcome to come on and chat. But I don't think they will. I guess they probably think I'm just like a nut bar crank leftist, which to be fair, I probably am. But even so, my criticisms are grounded in things like, facts and economics rather than just red team good.
Yeah, I can't lie. I watched something today actually. If I remember, I'll mention it later, which did make me laugh a fair bit with what one of them said. But like I would rather they're more open to dialogue. But to be fair, I clowned one of them last time, so it did not go well for him. Let me put it that way.
True, it did not.
Because I actually did the reading and I had an expert and he had Belarus, and Belarus is not swinging big. That's all I'm saying.
True.
Plus his example didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Because who would we be a vassal state of? So yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me know what time you want to start because I've got some people come into my stream as well.
I'm good to go. I've got like 15 viewers already, so.
Oh, that's a flex. I ain't got 15. I think I'm at 10.
I think to be fair, mine's across both YouTube and Twitch.
Oh,
so
I see.
I mean, of course, actually, no, it's just Twitch, 100%. Yeah, no dual streaming happening whatsoever here. If any Twitch TOS monitors are looking,
But yeah,
just only Twitch here.
we don't dual stream here.
No dual streaming whatsoever.
I can't really see your comments on things. I think your ones come through a delay, but I guess I'll keep an eye on it. If you see anything interesting, let me know.
Well, that's a good point. I'll bring up your stream so I can have a look what people are saying in your chat.
Yeah, it's a bit. I wish there was a better way to do it, but there really isn't.
Hey ho.
But yeah, yeah, it's all good, I guess. What's that?
That's right. I should probably start by saying I've got you tagged on my YouTube stream, so if people are watching, go drop Big Maj a sub.
Yeah.
And to respond to Dalek in stream, yes, indeed, this is an actual friend of the show. I am not being ironic when I say friend of the show here.
I don't know. I don't know if we're friends. I don't know. I've only been with. You're the first guest I've had on the channel. I think, like, first YouTube guest. That's like not someone I've known like outside of YouTube. So that's a big achievement, I guess. The first
Well,
one.
it's true. Well, fair enough. I'll take it. Because you've got like more than double the number of subs I have, so I guess you're technically platforming me.
Yeah, but you're on Twitch, innit? So like it's a different
That's
platform.
true. It's true.
I'm
That
not
is
on
true.
Twitch.
Yeah.
But yeah, we
Because
can.
I mean, you do promote yours as all prepared content with the occasional stream, whereas mine's just all streams. So
Yeah, I don't. I can't lie. If I clipped up the stuff that I say, it would just take forever because I'm just reading comments most of the time.
yeah,
But
that's
yeah, I
fair.
think you do a mix of both, which is quite cool. But yeah, I guess we can go to the first topic, which is why the Tories suck. And I guess, do you want to do it so you answer first and I answer, then we can just like then switch around if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, the issue with the Conservative Party, really and truly, is just that since time immemorial, what they are is just an election-winning machine, right? That's what they exist to do. That's what they always existed to do, and that's their raison d'être, right? It doesn't really matter. They've never really been interested in the goals of governance, really and truly, because first of all, they want to win elections because they like being in power, and they like being in power because that's the way in which that they can financially benefit from pandering to the interests of the people who donate to the party. And when you look at every single thing that they've ever done over the past however many years through that specific lens, everything just starts making so much sense. When you realise, yes, of course, they told us we had to do austerity whilst continually increasive quantitative easing, and they used the quantitative easing to put money into the pockets of their mates in the financial sector, who then used it to inflate asset prices, which has basically led to the gigantic levels of inequality we have at the moment, which, we'll come on to wealth taxes later. But that's one of the big reasons why everything is so unequal in our society specifically, like compared to like the remainder of Western Europe or Europe in general. Obviously, we are the most unequal country, and it's not because people get paid significantly differently. It's because asset prices have inflated so much that the haves of 30 years ago have this enormous wealth gap between those people and the ones, the younger people today. When you just look at how late as people are buying houses. And also, there's obviously been specific economic policy that's led to this point. In the, of course, when you are an election winning machine and that's all you exist to do, you have this continual short termist attitude of what is the policy that I can do now that wins me the next election. And in a post financial crash world, 2008 onwards, right, or 2010, I guess, once the Tories got into power, it was how do we prop up the housing market and create new homeowners, which of course are new conservative voters. Obviously, in the 80s, their new homeowner policy with right to buy. But once all the council houses go, you've got to have another thing, which is, of course, just make sure we have like a decade-long liquidity trap so they can justify making sure the interest rates are incredibly low, so house prices skyrocket and mortgages are cheap, which has led to us to the mortgage crisis we have right now. And it's just because they are intent on just destroying the country for their own personal political gain.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's a party that's always existed for the owner class. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're right. They are an election winning machine, and the problem is like with certain media outlets is, like papers like the Sun have made a loss for such a long time now, and the reason they exist is so they can get tax cuts for their mates and for themselves. I think that's one of the major problems, and because of the fact that they are the party of the owner class, they managed to, they've got a lot of wealth on their side, and they've managed to kind of manipulate people. If you look at certain political groups like the IEA and things like that, there's a reason why they exist, and the fact that they're classed as educational charities is probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Like genuinely, what do they educate people on? The biggest group of frauds I've ever seen, but. I think that is it pretty much. They are, the party of the owner class, and despite people who think that they're the party of the aspirational, they're really not because of the way that they tax. You spoke about national insurance the other day, but it's the amount of tax that we pay, that people pay as low earners is ridiculously high compared to the tax people pay as high earners. That's one of the big problems. So how can you claim you're aspirational when you tax the shit out of people who don't have much money? Like, how do you get out of that? Social mobility is dead in this country. It's been dead for a while. Definitely after the financial crash, I would say definitely. You cannot get out because all your money goes on just basic living, especially now. Like it's really bad now. Like the Tories' biggest mistake was not dealing with the energy costs and the mortgages, honestly, because that's really fucked them over with so many people. If you think how many people are not freehold properties in this country, it's a lot. And so what that means is like they've been hit real bad with mortgage increases. People that rent have been hit massively with rent increases. So those ones that are aspirational to kind of buy a house, they got no chance. Absolutely no chance. People had their I think agreements in principle pulled by banks and things like that. I can't imagine being in that situation where you can actually get the house that you saved up for probably 5 years to a decade, and then Liz Truss is like, "Psych, you ain't buying shit," and they just pull it. So yeah, 100%. They've conned people into thinking that they're the party of, if you want to get on in life, work hard, and it's kind of the capitalist mantra. It's the American dream of, if you work hard, then we are the party for you. Whereas if you don't want to work and you want benefits for labour, when realistically we know that is not true. Like they have no incentive for you to get on in life because they want to keep as much as they can.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
That's the gigantic irony of kind of the liberal, like the neoliberal mindset, is this idea that the way in which you create a country full of aspirational people is through deregulation, through, making work pay, which really means not actually changing the way work pays, but making sure the people who aren't in work get punished rather than workers, right? You create this us versus them mentality. When really and truly, like, if you want to create an aspirational society, the data will bear this out as well, is that you actually want, under a capitalist system, is you want a social democracy, right? Social mobility is at its highest when there is a strong welfare state, when the markets are regulated, when there is large amounts of state ownership. You look at the Nordic model, right? You look at Norway, Denmark, Sweden, right? If you want people to have the biggest chance of being successful in, for example, in the entrepreneurial spirit, like specifically just a liberal lens, right? If you want people to be able to be entrepreneurial, to be able to create a business, to be able to become successful through their own hard graft, you need there to be a social safety net for the people that fail so that they can afford to take the risk. No one can do that in Britain at the moment. Who the fuck has any ability or any spare capital, given how much people pay for their housing at the moment, to be able to invest and then you move through class strata. Of course, I'm a socialist. I want to see the rising tide lift all boats rather than you create, a two-tier society of achievers and non-achievers. But even through the liberal lens, the economic precepts of conservative aspirationism doesn't even make any sense based upon the results that we've seen. And what it is that the reason why we're in this point, like actually David Willits does a really interesting lecture on this, despite his policy being completely opposite to this, but his analysis of the situation was true, and that it was this kind of the short-termism of conservative policy making and their electoral gains has been a function of how large the baby boomer cohort is and was, in the these people have had a monopoly on our political system forever. So as long as they just keep getting thrown freebies by the government or by conservative governments, they will continue staying in the conservative camp, right? But time's run out, right? But these people have started dying off, right? They've had, part of what was so aspirational for boomers was giving them property through right to buy, giving them properties through low interest rates after the crash. And now loads of these people have mortgages that they can't pay. And, this cohort are going to move out of being the largest voting cohort, which is slowly happening right now. Millennials are taking over, and there's just nowhere left for them to go.
I did see a few Tory MPs did mention the fact that, that they need to appeal to younger voters. I'm like, it's over for you guys. Like, you've had a decade to do it, and you fucked it. And I think the issue is, like, with what the Lib Dems did in 2010 to 2015, people don't like them. And I think a lot of younger people our age and probably Zoomers, will look at the Tory party and think, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly, 100%. I mean, and if they'd have started on this 8 years ago, right? If they'd have, or if they'd not done austerity first of all and screwed over an entire generation and the entire economy, let's be real, like, obviously Liz Truss has loads to blame. So I actually think when you look at the mini budget, it mainly really hit pension funds. And because I think my parents were telling me they lost like £65,000 off of their pension value over the course of the mini budget weekend, because it's the inflationary period that's caused the massive increase in interest rates that's hit mortgage holders. So Liz Truss can only really slightly be blamed for that. If she had better fiscal policy, maybe, but the real thing that she hit was pension funds with the mini budget. But there was probably some time if they'd have started on trying to appeal to younger voters earlier for them to fix this. But now that, because there's this, I don't know if you saw the chart from that John Byrne Murdoch, the data editor of the Financial Times, posted on Twitter from his article that he did, showing that millennials are getting more left wing as they get older.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I think there's this kind of this point when you're in like your late 20s where a lot of your political opinions kind of get more solidified, and then you move towards that. It's probably it's pop psychology, but I think it's broadly true. And if conservatives had started on millennials and tried to think about appealing to them at that, during that time period, they may have been able to have saved themselves. But they've just completely they've screwed the pooch. And now that we've dealt with, as a millennial myself, I've dealt with my 14 years of my working life or my adult life of continual decline of every single part of my living standards, from how much I earn, how much I pay for everyday goods, how much I pay for housing, how much I pay for energy, right? I've never seen an increase in living standards in the entirety of the time I've been an adult, a tax-paying adult. And now I've got to this point where I've reached that, and I was like, yeah, my political opinions are solidified. Neoliberalism is bad. I'm a leftist now. And I think that's just going to be encompassing for a whole lot of the millennial cohort, because they've never seen the gains of capitalism, especially the ones that they were promised, right? Yeah. Millennials were promised for the entirety of the Blair years of Thatcherism light, of getting the aspirational mindset, because Blair basically didn't fix any of the problems with Thatcherism whilst he was in power. And we were told, if you go to university, we'll get loads of university places, you'll get a good paying job, we'll have a high wage economy. And that's just never materialised. We're completely soured.
I think the problem is because
the supposed benefits.
They killed manufacturing. I think that was one of the major problems where, like, instead of boosting things like apprenticeships, like Germany, apprenticeships are quite coveted over there, I think. We could have had it all in a sense, or had a lot of it, but whereas they wanted, people to get, university degrees, and I have a degree, and it doesn't help with employment, because everyone's like, do you have experience? You're like, no, and they're like, fuck off. That's the problem. And so, like, it's not built it's not built well at all. Like, yeah, I've got an arts degree, I can write an essay, and they're like, cool, thanks, bye. So it's just frustrating. So yeah, I think sorry, go on.
Well, I think going on the demise of manufacturing is because it's identical to what happened in the United States. when you look at the Rust Belt states voting for Trump, for example, that's all a result of Clinton, right?
Yeah.
Clinton and Blair at the same time when we're going through kind of the throes of globalization and selling and just deporting all of our manufacturing to China and to Taiwan or to Bangladesh. And I'm like,
You leave
yeah,
Bangladesh alone, okay? We don't badmouth Bangladesh in this house, okay?
oh, I love Bangladesh. I mean, don't get me wrong, but that's where all our manufacturing is now,
Yeah.
apart from of course with China and places like Indonesia, and that is where a lot of the economies of our red wall seats were. They were manufacturing seats now. It's ironic that the Conservatives have screwed this up so badly. In that, if the Conservatives hadn't screwed this up, they probably would have kept all these red wall seats because they were already turning blue. Because they're aging in red wall seats
Yes,
because
because they
there's no
move out.
jobs left.
Yeah,
Because
they move
yeah,
out. Yeah, and I think it's a good point. I think if they had done, pushed the leveling up thing and done a couple of other things, especially keeping the culture war in, I think they might have held on. Like people gambled on the Tories, and in the end, they just let them. Excuse me, they just let them down massively, didn't they? In the end, because they realised the Tory party is for their members. It's for the donors. It's not for them. And I think that's one of the harsh lessons kind of the Red Wall learn in probably the worst way possible, because they're not going to get the investment they need. Like the fact that the Tories have pushed HS2 since 2010 and then said, no, actually, Bradford, you're not going to get anything. You're like, what was the point of all this? Especially when Boris is like, we'll give you something better. It's like, you've had 13 years to come up with something good, and you're like, actually, 13 years down the line, billions of pounds wasted. Now we have something better. It's like, where was this the whole time? Did it magically appear? The fact that we can't have things like other countries have is just nuts. So yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's just the fact that they don't plan for long. I think it's not enough consensus in the country, like with the political parties, of how to deal with things like public infrastructure, amongst other things. And they just made it so easy to privatise that, with Labour privatising parts of the NHS and the Tories just continuing it to a rapid extent. Like the fact that the government used companies like Carillion, which literally just outsource stuff. So they would get a government contract and just outsource it and just pocket the money. And you're just like, why do you exist? Why are we using you as a company? Like, I get occasionally sometimes private sector can do things better if they've got, the expertise and the machinery and whatever. That's fine. But if it's the case, like, you have to set up, everything new, why would you not just go with that? Why would you not just set up like a PLC or whatever, some sort of company in the government's name, and just go with that? Like, what they're going to do with trains eventually. They're going to try and nationalise a lot of the routes once the contracts end. And it's like, why do we have like the worst version of capitalism in this? It just doesn't make sense, honestly. So
it's terrible. It's absolutely
frustrating.
terrible. Yeah.
It's frustrating to no end, because it's like, it's not even like, you can't even argue it's capitalist. You can't say it's a competition model. It's kind of, I think, what China do is government capitalism in that sense. It's just authoritarian capitalism. It's we're going to give you ridiculous amounts of money. You're going to gouge customers, and we're going to give people the worst service possible because there's no incentive for you to give a good service. And if you go below the minimums, we're going to do nothing. Same with the water companies. You have a monopoly. You have an absolute monopoly, and how do you run it so badly? Like, everyone needs water. Like, how do you run your company at a loss? What are you doing? Because you haven't invested in the pipes.
Yeah, because they don't need to bother, because they know that if anything goes wrong with regards to in like cash input, they can just jack up prices because
or they'll bail out.
There's
The
nothing
government will
that
bail them out.
consumers can do.
Well, the government
Yeah,
will just bail
exactly.
them out.
Government. Yeah,
Because
exactly.
like we can't let this company fail. Look how many people they provide water to, and you're like, just buy them out then. If they're so important, just buy them out.
I mean, at this point, right? Of course, buying them out is something that we theoretically could do, and we could negotiate down on share prices a la Northern Rock, like we did in 2007. But really and truly, I mean, I've been saying this for ages. If at the point where we're at, where not only are water companies being asset stripped by private equity because they know that they have no desire to ever give a good service to the end user because they have a captive market, and on top of literally pumping actual human shit into our rivers.
Yep.
So the entire groups of like triathletes, who I think it was,
Yeah.
getting sick because of the shit in the water. I'm like,
there's drugs in the water. There's crabs and stuff on LSD. Like, that's not even a joke.
It's crazy. It's literally it's utterly insane. It's completely insane. And at that point, I think there is reasonable justification And not only is it reasonable justification in terms of of what's happened already, but I think it's something that's so justifiable. I don't think that the papers could even have an argument against it in the way they would do against leftist policy. But because Therese Coffey, ironically the theoretical savior in all of this, is the one who changed the rules so that the government can now issue unlimited fines to the water companies. Fine them the entire share price. Fuck it, right?
Yeah.
Tank the value of the shares to zero and then buy them all. I don't give a shit anymore, right? There's because obviously I think Nick Ferrari on Question Time talking about sending these people to jail, and I think that would work. It would be very cathartic.
Base Nick Ferrari.
But if we want to actually gain the assets back, just issue unlimited fines. Fuck it, right?
Yeah.
Fine these people out of business.
I find it just insane, honestly. The way they've kind of like the way they've run these services is just mad. And this is the problem. Like it was like that under Labour as well. There was a consensus like it should be run like this. Not as badly, obviously. There were still rules in place, but these companies still made profits off things that should be nationalised 100%.
And not just profits. It's not just profits off of like the government contract as well, and that loads of them made profit off of PFIs as well. Like literally, someone in my comment section on Twitter was saying, "Oh well, actually, what when the Labour were in government, we had this. They followed Tory spending plans for 3 years, and then we had the biggest investment and reform of public services in decades." I'm like, yeah, they reformed it with PFIs and left them debt strapped for like 20 years with like not just government debt, which is like illusory debt, real toxic debt. They're still paying back now after a gigantic amount of austerity as well. I'm like, if you wanted to give me some kind of positive view of the Blair years, talking about how they managed public services through the changing of the funding model and the reform they did after sticking to the Tory spending plans, is literally the worst argument that you could have done.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's going to be worth discussing when we get to Labour. I think just going to say shouts out Phil because I think he gifted a load of memberships on your end of my end. So
he did indeed. Phil McCracken, yeah, he's a new. Actually, I've only recently seen him in my chat, but he's been an absolute legend with contributions and also contributions in chat as well. So thank you, Phil.
Yeah, what a baller. Yeah, I think if we talked about why the Tories suck. Do you think under this lot under I guess post Boris and
sorry, before we go ahead, sorry, I just want to say thank you to SK Crusader for the raid. Cheers. Please refresh your screens, new viewers.
Nice. So I'm not familiar with that person, but yeah, shouts out to them. Cool people in the space, some of them anyways. Hopefully need more people, honestly, because it's a bit of a joke at the moment.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, like, do you think kind of Boris Johnson, Sunak and Truss are worse than Theresa May and David Cameron?
I think that David Cameron is the worst post-war prime minister.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely the worst.
Worse than Anthony Eden? Like, actually, wasn't he the one that led us into the Suez crisis?
He was the one who led us into the Suez crisis. It was obviously like a national scandal, but I think that was recoverable from. Whereas I think the austerity period has basically destroyed the economy, and I don't think it's
worse than Thatcher. I think it's, would you say David's worse than Thatcher?
Almost, I think Thatcher did more like institutional damage because of the things that she did and the reforms that she made. But I think that I can give her some amount of benefit of the doubt because I think that she thought that she had a plan to make the country better, right? I think she was someone who had a genuine plan and idea about how she could influence the economy to change the country for what she thought was the better. I disagree with her methods, of course, in complete opposite, but I think she was someone who had principles and was sticking to them. Whereas David Cameron and George Osborne were just chancers who followed neoliberalism like scripture because they didn't know what else to do and they had no other plans other than just get into power and use their power for profit. And following the Thatcherite playbook without rhyme or reason. And I think that is more embarrassing. And also Brexit. Like the Brexit referendum is something you have to contest.
I think he allowed the rise of UKIP to happen quite stupidly.
Exactly.
I think with Cameron as well, like a lot of his mates made a lot of money from the privatisation of Royal Mail, which is being run, in my opinion, very, very badly. They were talking about liquidating the company instead of giving their workers pay rises, and I'm like, if you're in a situation where you're making profits and you can't offer your employees a pay rise, you might as well liquidate at that point because clearly you do not know how to run a company.
Yeah, if I was going to say who did more damage, I would say Thatcher. But I think that as a prime minister, David Cameron was just a worse person to be prime minister. I think if I was going to rank them, so those the five that you mentioned. plus Thatcher and Major, I'd say that either David Cameron and Thatcher are the worst, then Truss.
Mhm.
Um, because in such a short time you can only cause so much damage. I guess as a person, she's probably the dumbest. But damage done and also
I'd say
personal
Liz Truss would be the
desire.
dumbest. Liz Truss definitely the most
She's
stupid one.
definitely dumbest. She's definitely
Yeah,
the
it's a
dumbest.
human hand grenade.
I actually think, I probably would have the best as being. Um, I actually would probably. I know this is going to sound really ironic to those people. I think I would probably put. I think Major is probably the best out of them,
Ooh.
and then Johnson, then May, then Truss, Thatcher, Cameron, and I don't know where I'd put Sunak. I don't think I've got enough time or data to be able to give you an accurate
I
assessment.
think he's kind of he's put himself in this position. What he inherited was really bad. He just you know the GIF community where that dude comes in and the whole house is on fire. That's what I'd say when Sunak came in. It's like everything's on fire. I don't know what to do. I would say I think it's Boris Johnson who I would say is the worst one. I'd put him first.
Really? Okay.
I'd probably put Thatcher second. Yeah, I'd go Boris, Thatcher. I'd go probably Liz Truss. I don't know a ton about Major. That's the problem because I know he did tank the economy pretty badly. I'd probably put the
Black
rest in like a
Wednesday.
similar
Yeah.
category. I think Truss. Yeah, I'd go. What's it? Boris, Thatcher, Truss, and then I'd probably put the rest kind of in a similar vein. Like I think Sunak would have perfectly. I think if we had Sunak after David Cameron, it would have seemed a lot better because they're very similar. I think ideologically, if that makes sense, rather than having Theresa May who looked really shaky. Like Theresa May looked like she just looked like a massive introvert. She was not comfortable being anywhere. Like they put her on, she didn't do the debates or anything, and even in front of journalists, she
No.
looked hella nervous.
She did. She was a pretty poor leader, and you got to remember, like, not only is Theresa May to blame for things like Trojan horse and hard Brexit and the hostile environment as well. But you got to remember when she was Home Secretary, she was responsible for
Windrush.
Windrush as well.
Yeah.
And when she was prime minister, she restarted arms sales to the Saudi government for them to commit war crimes in Yemen. So
Oh, that's yeah. I think the thing with Theresa May is she always read the Brexit referendum as ending freedom of movement, and then the EU said, well, if you end freedom of movement, you can't have the other three like pillars, and so she kind of boxed herself in real bad, and she failed to have kind of the leadership. Yeah, Thatcher did lay out a lot of the groundwork, to be fair, and she did kind of. I think Thatcher really set the ideological pace for the last since she was in charge, like privatization, the private industry, all of this kind of stuff. And Thatcher, that's why they call it Thatcher. What's it called, Thatcherisms or Thatcheronomics, something like that. It's kind
yeah.
of this is a version of her ideology. To an extent, it's just different levels of it. It's kind of what Tony Blair said, where he's like, conservatives say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we have to do this, but we don't have no choice because of fiscal responsibility." But then we're Labour, we're like, "I'm sorry, we can't help you enough, but here you can go to university and try and get a better job potentially, and put yourself in a lot of debt doing it." So yeah,
I think I'm willing to. Yeah.
yeah, go on.
I think I'm willing to give benefit of the doubt to Sunak because I think that if you like ignore, like eat out to help out, his time as chancellor was one where, because I know I probably should explain why I think I would put Boris Johnson second on my list of best prime minister, but from best to worst, right? I put him second top behind Major, and that was because basically it was kind of an accident that he was good, or not good. I mean, less shit than the others. Of course, he was a horrendous person, like morally and in his conduct was terrible. But because his main driver was never ideology, he never had a plan about an ideology he wanted to implement. He just wanted to be liked, right? He just wanted people to like him, and we kind of accidentally got some good policy, right? Of course, leveling up wasn't a policy that was performed well, but it was a policy that it was a good policy framework. 40 new hospitals, that's a good policy framework. Uprating benefits in line with inflation.
I think the problem.
These are things that we would never have gotten from Cameron. We never would have gotten from May,
I
and
think
definitely not Truss.
I think the thing with that is he kind of because he had no intention of doing it. I think he does break the trust of people, and I think he's
True.
he told people what they wanted to hear, just like he told his ex-wives what they wanted to hear. Do you know what I mean? Like he had no intention of being faithful to any of his promises, and I think that fundamentally breaks the trust with people. If you see what I'm saying, and I think especially with the COVID stuff as well, like I don't think it was like he did what he thought. I think he did what he thought he had to do to win power, and I think that's all he did. And I think he didn't care after that. Like he didn't care about being in charge. He wanted the kind of like Trump. He wanted the prestige of being the leader. You know, the head of state, well, not the head of state in this country, but you see what I'm saying. Whereas he didn't want the responsibility of it. It's like having Spider-Man's powers without the responsibility of being Spider-Man. And you're just a guy who shoots webs and is a bit of a dickhead. And I think that's why I put Boris up there, especially because of I think the damage he did to I think the faith of the electorate. I think like it's such a mess
That's true.
right now. It's such a mess. Like
That is true.
that's why with the Iraq War, it wasn't just the disaster of a war that killed a lot of people. It was the fact that they lied on such a huge scale that people fundamentally lost faith with politics. Like they said, Saddam has nukes and he's going to use them on us, and everyone's like, "Oh shit, that's real bad." And then like he did 9/11, it's like, "Oh shit, that's real bad." And then you find out, if anything, he kept a lid on a lot of those groups. And secondly, he didn't have nukes, and therefore he could not use the nukes that he did not have. He wanted people to think he had them, because if you have them, anyone tries to invade you, blow the shit out of them. But then the question is, when we invaded, why didn't he use them? Surely that's the most likely time he's going to use it, is when he's got like bloody coalition forces at his doorstep saying, "Hello, Saddam, we'd like to have a word with you, please." Do you know what I mean? So
That's why you look at 2005. Like I think is that the lowest turnout of any election in the post-war period?
I don't know, but I know a lot of especially Asian minorities, did not vote Labour, and I think like it because they invaded a Middle Eastern country, a Muslim country predominantly, and it broke the faith of I think a lot of people. Like genuinely, it did. And I can't.
Because not only did it break trust in politics, not only did it kill millions of people in Iraq as well, that and in conjunction with Afghanistan has just destabilized the entire Middle East. Right?
Oh yeah.
The entire Middle East is completely screwed up because of NATO intervention.
Yeah, I think it was a big domino in it. I think because of Iraq was like when you have a situation where the guy who toppled the statue of Saddam said, "I'd rather have Saddam back," you done goofed. You done goofed real bad. It'd be like in post-war Germany if they said like, "We want Adolf back" or something like that. It's just like, what the hell happened here? Like, how do you get into a situation where things are this bad? And I guess if you want to move on to the next point of why do British politicians kind of suck so bad? What do you think? Like, why do we have like? It feels like some of the worst politicians. Fair enough. You've got like far right parties that are winning decent amounts of votes in other countries, which obviously really disastrous, really disastrous. But like when you look at the major parties, like when I look at the Lib Dems to an extent, I think you guys are a bit trash. Like not in the sense of you're bad people or whatever, but it's like when I hear you speak, I want to fall asleep. You've got no real major good policies. There's no substance. Do you know what I mean? Why do you think, like, if we start with, I guess we discussed the Conservative Party enough, it's the party of wealth and power. So it makes sense they would be rubbish, because they would do everything they can to desperately hold on to wealth and power. Like, they'll lie, cheat, and steal. They don't care. But with Labour, it's like, like it's been bad for a while. And I don't know when the decline happened. I don't know if it was under Gordon Brown or after Gordon Brown. Like Ed Miliband's team were really bad. Keir Starmer's team is really bad. I don't think even Corbyn's team were that great. John McDonnell was all right. But I can't think of many stars. I think the only one I actually like in the front bench is Ed Miliband. Dr. Khan, she seems okay, but again, I've not seen much from her. I've not seen much from any of them, to be fair.
So they don't want to go out because they know that they're terrible media performers.
I think it's. Do you know what I've read? Right, there's a lot of briefings against them as well. Like if they do well, like the party machine goes against them. And I don't think Starmer lets a lot of them go out. Apart from
terrible, yeah.
He only lets like Wes Streeting go out because no one likes Wes Streeting. Genuinely, no one. Wes Streeting, if anything, he is. I probably dislike him more than Starmer. Wes Streeting's like, yo, I'll fight the left right now.
Absolute worst. The dirt worst. Yeah, he's so
I'll fight the left right now. And I'm like, you do realise you need people to vote for you, absolute melon. Like, you do realise you need voters, a coalition of voters, right? Like, how do you fail to understand this? And they're like, oh, we know how to win. It's like, what have you won in your life? Apart from probably a safe seat. What is your biggest achievement?
South, yeah.
Genuinely.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, the thing is, you say they need people to vote for them, and obviously you're correct in that assumption. But I think that Wes Streeting is correct in his assumption that he could literally go outside, find some kind of left liberal person like some kind of James O'Brien watcher, kick their dog off a bridge, and they'd probably still vote for them and say, "Oh, got to get the Tories out." They know full well. Like, look at the Supertansky video that I responded to the other day. They know full well they have a completely captive audience of people whose political acumen extends as far as red team good. who
I
will vote for
think
Labour regardless of whatever that they do. And no, they've got no red lines. They have no red lines on the economy, on social issues, on foreign policy, on internal Labour Party politics. Well, they have no red lines on any of this, and they will just tick the red box regardless of what they do. And so, Wes Streeting can go and say we're just going to become Conservative Party in red rosettes, and we'll have a gigantic coalition of voters of people who hate the Tories because they wear blue rosettes and people who like reactionary social policy, monetarist fiscal policy,
yeah.
and imperialist foreign policy.
I think it's a lot of people radicalized after. I use the word radicalized, probably not the best word, but after during the referendum where they realized, oh no, I'm going to lose like my freedom of movement and stuff like that, and they got real mad about it. But I think ironically it was O'Brien who said it. I think some of the best where he said like you're gonna Keir Starmer is trying to get you to vote for policy, but vote for things that he says are policy, whilst also wanting certain other people to kind of not believe the things he is saying. It's like I saw kind of we might as well discuss it now. Phil talking about how Labour are going to have to increase public sector wages when they get in charge in order for staff retention. But it's like, so why they're not saying that is because they're going to have to explain how it's going to be funded. And the ironic thing is, Sunak, despite doing it the scummiest way possible, which is not putting in new money, using kind of the existing budgets to give public sector workers a pay rise. So imagine if you're a public sector worker and you're seeing Sunak saying, okay, we'll do like a 6% pay rise, whereas Labour are saying, we can't do that right now because how are we going to pay for it? Even though a lot of that money would come back into the economy anyways. So it's just economic illiteracy, which is something we'll discuss in a few minutes from Labour, because that really pisses me off because you treat the voters as stupid. And I don't think kind of even centre-left voters are that stupid. I think there's a lot of not fear, but kind of concern in kind of like is it Ian Dunt and that group of people on Twitter?
Mm-hmm.
I think they are concerned about Starmer, and I think they are a bit worried about how far he is going. And that's worrying when you've got like that group of people who are saying, I don't know, mate, I think we've gone a bit too far here. But they're trying to tell people, hold your nerve and we need to get this lot out because they're real bad. And it's like, I don't want to vote for, Cameron's cousin, effectively, in Keir Starmer. We've got David Cameron at home. I'm not voting for that. You're brave drinking a Red Bull at this time, honestly.
This shit doesn't affect me anymore.
Oh, God.
So, mate, I don't drink it much that often, really.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I usually my awake hours are usually from around about 10 in the morning until about 4 a.m. So I don't get much sleep anyway. I think I woke up at like midday today, so I needed to be able to make sure that I got enough energy in me to get through until.
Yeah,
So I'm probably gonna be streaming super late tonight.
Oh, fair. I don't know how late I'll go, but it's just
No worries.
it's pretty shit, to be honest. And I think one of the reasons
and-
I think one of the reasons we get shitty politicians is because the media never hold them to account. Like some of the interviews some of these people do is just so embarrassing. They don't do a lot of research or prep work.
Yeah, it all comes back to the class system. It's all about because they obviously given how long history our class system is, right, longer than basically any other country in Europe, because of the long through line of the existence of the current kind of crop of the elite that we have in this country, which is embedded in the very, very specific British class system. It underpins everything, right? So obviously our journalists don't prepare. They never question properly. They never properly dive into the actual points to be able to hold politicians to account. And they don't do this because they're all from the same class. They're all friends. They've all gone to the same schools, the same universities, all come from Oxbridge, right? They need to have access to Westminster to be able to make sure they always have the people to talk to be able to create the content, to create the money, to go viral, to be able to generate the revenue they need for their paymasters. And of course, on top of this kind of class dynamic that underpins the kind of the old boys club that is our political and media sphere, on top of that, they also are employed by some of the wealthiest capitalists in this country who use them as propaganda outlets to sell their ideology to the population. Who also pay the lobbyists who pay the politicians.
Yeah,
it's a racket.
I think one of the other problems, they're just not very good. Like I saw Adil Ray, and I do have some respect for the guy. Where he kind of, I think he got mugged off a bit by the Tory education minister when she kept talking about the raw numbers that the Tories are pushing into education, and then when he kind of did an interview the second time around with a different Tory, he started talking about per pupil funding, per capita funding, and I was like, that's what you should have done from the start, big man. That's the line to go down, because they can talk about we've put another 10 billion in or whatever, but per pupil, if it's less If it's less than 2010, it
Oh
doesn't
god.
matter, especially since of the
Oh
amount
my
of
god,
inflation
yeah.
we've had, amongst other things. So that's kind of what I think. I'm amazed Labour don't focus on that more. To be honest, talk about per pupil funding. But I guess the question will be, people asking, well, are you going to increase it? And they're going to be
They
like,
don't,
no, because we're broke.
yeah, exactly.
I guess that's
Exactly.
why
They
they
don't
don't go
want to.
down.
They
Yeah,
literally don't. They don't want to do per pupil funding because they can't have any rhetoric that would lead it to the road of agreeing with the idea that it needs more funding because they've doubled down on this line of
yeah.
the government's credit cards being maxed out for the love of God. Like it's so infuriating watching Labour try and argue this stuff. And also, you're right. Like I don't know if you've seen. I don't know if you're a big Simpsons watcher, but there's a bit where someone says, "But I think why Krusty? Why now? Why not 20 years ago?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not in
Exactly.
2017 when this was a really important part of kind of elections and or for the last ever since Blair came to power, that's when the spin era really kicked off." And the kind of the cozy relationship era really
Oh,
became so entrenched when Blair made sure that Labour was also the same party of these kind of this old boys club where it never used to be under people like Wilson and Foot and even Kinnock to a lesser extent. But this, why can no journalist quantify anything as per capita or as a percentage, right?
yeah.
The amount of times that we discuss how much the national debt is over £2 trillion, what is that as a percentage of GDP? That's the only relationship here that matters. But they want us to have how much total NHS funding, how much
Yeah,
total debt that
that's
there
the
is.
Tory
It
trick,
is,
though, isn't it?
oh, it's
That's what the
infuriating.
Conservative Party do, and journalists fail to kind of combat that and say, well, how is it going per capita, or where's even the money going to? Because if the money's going to companies like Carillion, who gives a shit? Like genuinely, who gives a
Hmm.
shit? Like it doesn't work. And I think kind of if kind of move on and discuss kind of Labour's bad economic policies, like kind of what you mentioned about them talking about the credit cards being maxed out. It's like our debt to GDP is lower than France's, and yes, France are in a much better economic position than ours, and I think their kind of bonds are cheaper than ours or whatever. But it's like, how are you to the right of Macron on economic policy when he's like, I'm going to borrow a lot of money to nationalise EDF, and then you've got Labour like, actually we can't do that right now. It's like, how have you not shifted the conversation to we're going to borrow to invest? Because they've spoken about that in the context of green stuff. Surely you can talk about it in the context of other things and say, well, it's going to benefit us massively to nationalise these industries because not only does it make it cheaper for kind of British people in the future, it's like we won't be price gouged. We'll be in a much better position later on, and we'll make it
Yeah.
so it can't be privatised as easily. Like, it's not even that hard to kind of shift the conversation. Like, it's not a household budget. Like, the government is not a household budget. Like, it's you don't want to argue it's a business because then people will be like, well, how do you have a business that has such high losses? It's something that's completely different where you can borrow to invest. Loans of interest was very cheap, and it's still cheaper than I think it has been historically. And it's like, what pisses me off about Labour is like, this was the party under Clement Attlee that we had a 200% debt to GDP post World War II. You didn't see Clement Attlee going, well, look, guys, Churchill's really fucked the economy over along with Hitler because of the gold standard and the war. So I don't know if we can afford this national health service that I promised. And even though he had to scale it back, they didn't have dental and eye care, which I think is still stupid. I think New Labour should have fixed that.
Hmm.
But it's like, you didn't see Attlee going like, oh, sorry guys, we can't afford it. They borrowed a lot of money from the Americans at a much higher rate because it was worth it for the good of the country. And no one can argue what Clement Attlee did was wrong. No one can argue that what Clement Attlee did was a stupid thing.
Correct.
And I
Yeah.
think someone's mentioning Sir Keir Starmer. With with them keeping the two-child cap, that for me is a massive red line. That for me, as a person who has three other siblings, that is just horrible because you're punishing the kid at that point. You're not punishing the parents. To an extent, you are because they've got to figure out how to budget and other things. But you're punishing a kid who's going to have lower prospects because Adil Ray spoke about it as well. I probably mentioned him way too much, but he mentioned there was a study where I think if you're a person who, if your parents go to a food bank, you're likely to get lower grades than a family that doesn't. And so it's like, you could have it so we could have a much better society. You can have kids that have a good chance. That's what it's about. Equality of opportunity, not necessarily
Yeah.
equality of outcome, but it's about giving everyone the best chance they can to succeed. That's what it's about. And if
Hmm.
you fail at that point, then it's kind of on you to an extent, rather than having a system where you get crappy grades from school, which you'll be judged on for the vast majority of up until you're 30. Let's be honest, because after that it's all work experience. And then if you want to get a job, they're just like, well, your grades are trash. Why would we want you? And maybe you have to waste a couple of years to get your grades done again. It just there's a lot more that can be done here, and there's massive staffing shortages. And it pisses me off when Labour say we don't have the money, and then they also say we're not going to increase taxes, and they use the line of we have the highest tax burden since World War II. It's like, highest tax burden on who? Because it's not equal. So the question is now,
Exactly, 100%,
who's it on?
100%.
Who is
Look,
it on?
I I had a big rant actually I posted on my YouTube channel a big rant about the reason why we have things like the two-child benefit cap is because people have this kind of moralistic idea about who deserves what, and it drives me around the fucking bend because it leads to like negative externalities all over the shop, right? And the worst part, the absolute worst, of course, I think morally keeping the two-child benefit cap is absolutely fucking repugnant, but the worst part is how completely hypocritical it is, given that their stated goal is to try and get our country to the point where we have the highest growth in the G7. That requires a productive workforce, right? During the austerity period, we have stats showing that kids born during the austerity period are on average shorter than they were beforehand, right? This is, a government, using like economically vandalizing their own children. It's absolutely abhorrent. And then they're coming to us and saying, well, we have this plan to have to get the biggest growth in the G20. And I'm like, or G7 or
G7,
whatever
yeah.
it might be. G7. And I'm like, how are you going to do that when
Yeah.
you're impoverishing fucking 250,000 children?
And that
It doesn't
money
make
comes
any
back
sense.
in. That money will come back into the economy.
Yeah.
That's something Sam Cedar spoke about. And I need to. I wish I had that clip where he spoke about the impact of welfare spending, where it's worth more than the dollar they actually invest. And so for a government to say that, we need to look at what we're investing in and blah blah blah. If you're making a massive return on investment, it's a no-brainer, 100%. Even if you get a pound back in the economy for every pound you spend, that's 100%. That's a good bet. So it
Yeah.
kind of is frustrating, yeah,
Yeah.
with
You
that
just get
stuff.
the all the positive externalities outside of that as well.
And,
Plus, it's just a good thing to do.
and you get a lot of kids that are going to grow up with health problems and other things. Like, I'll never get over that video of, I think that kid on Dispatch was like, we try to eat less or something like that, or we don't try to eat much. I'm like, this isn't a fucking developing country. Like, we should not be in this situation, like, where child poverty is normal here. Like, how does that even
Yeah.
happen? Especially when the mentality of people is, well, why don't you just get a job or whatever? It's not that simple, because childcare costs in this country are ridiculous. There was one guy, he was talking about how he's on the O'Brien show, where he said him and his significant other work full time, and they only have about like 3% disposable income or something like that, because they pay ridiculous amounts into childcare. And it's like, surely, it's not that hard to set up a nursery. Surely it can't be that expensive. Yeah, you got to have safeguards and other things, because a group of kids is hard enough to manage. I know my cousins gave me the runaround a lot, and there's only like 4 of them. But point being is, like, there are things you can do to solve these issues, but it's just not being done. And there are ways to boost the economy with spending money. And the problem is Labour have kind of gone with the line of, we're just going to manage the funds better, we're going to spend the money better, and it's like, yeah, sure, to an extent, that will get you so far. That will only get you so far.
It's actually even worse than that, right? Of course, like we're going to manage the money better line is obviously completely trash, because there's only so much that you can do with that. I mean, especially when all these government contracts are probably contracted into way into the however long of the Labour's next period in government. But the worst part, the absolute worst part about all of this, right, is Rachel Reeves in the Telegraph article from today, or was it last night?
Yesterday,
I think it was. Yesterday, saying, I know we can't spend money until we get the economy growing. That's how we're going to boost funding for public services, right? And the way we're going to grow the economy is through regulatory reform. And I'm like, this is just right libertarian economic thinking, right? It is she even says taxes won't lead to prosperity, which is the line. It's like, this is the bog standard right-wing neoliberal line on all of these things, is that taxation is negative for economic growth. We need to empower prosperity by giving the private sector the ability to be able to be deregulated. I'm like, this is Liz Truss. This is so much like Liz Truss that Tom Harwood of GB News in his Substack wrote an entire article about how he thought that Rachel Reeves was going to be the successor to Liz Truss because of her deregulatory agenda. And I'm like, how is this? This is worse than the Conservatives in some respects, because they just think, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're not going to build any council houses, but what we will do is we'll give private developers the power to pay over the fucking country and turn it into Coruscant.
Yeah, and they're going to build more on the Greenbelt and things like that, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
buddy, that seems like a great idea. Someone, I think Scribby is asking about our views on, I think, the Rachel Reeves stuff. I think we are discussing it now about the wealth tax. Like, they're not going to increase taxes on the rich. They're not going to change capital gains or anything like that. It's just nuts. How do you expect? This is the Geddes Acts all over again. It's the idea that we will spend the amount of money we got last year in tax, and that was bad. That was a bad time in the country, because it didn't work. That shit didn't work. There's a reason why people don't do that anymore. There's a reason why we kind of moved towards the world kind of moved towards Keynesian economics, because that austerity shit doesn't work.
Yeah.
Even the woke IMF, the World Bank. Look how woke they are. They even talked about how the state has a role to play in it. in infrastructure and things like that, because it doesn't. You can't do it like this. You just it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't grow itself. And that's what's pissing me off here. And I think it's the spin. It's just, Starmer saying, "Oh, I wouldn't be able to afford to go to university now." It's like, are you going to do something? It's like, we're working on it. It's like, oh,
Oh, that
okay,
James
big man.
O'Brien interview. Oh my god.
It was
Oh
so
my god, the
so
James
bad.
O'Brien interview. And he's just like, it was like, oh, I was like, oh, is James O'Brien actually going to hold into account? No, no, he's not. I'm just going to
I
ask
think
him these things and then just accept the framing.
I think
That's it.
personally, I think O'Brien wants Starmer to win to vindicate himself personally. I genuinely believe that. Because he was so
Because James
pissed with
O'Brien
with Corbyn.
is part of the problem. He was part of the problem for the entirety of the bloody Corbyn years, right? When there was it was clearly obvious that the Conservative Party were terrible. I actually went back and listened to a whole bunch of James O'Brien stuff from 2015 to 2019, and it was clear that James O'Brien didn't have a fucking clue what he was talking about. Didn't understand what Corbyn stood for. We just kept asking callers, "Well, what do you think Jeremy Corbyn would do better?" I'm like, James, you're a journalist. It's your fucking job to understand what policies people are proposing and the effects they're
I
going to
think
have. Jesus Christ.
someone's asking. He interviewed Starmer and he kind of gave him like a free shot at explaining kind of why he, but neither of them understand economics. What pisses me off is like he went for the whole holier than thou, like, oh, I'm above the fray, guys. I don't play for a side. And then with Starmer, he's like, well, you got to understand, guys. When there's a ship full of asylum seekers and it sinks, people put laughing emoji faces on, and that's where Starmer has to win these people over. And I'm like, you're fucking tapped, bro. Like, you're absolutely tapped. Like, you're done, bro. Like,
It's
you're
client
not.
journalism. It's
Yeah,
client journalism. That's what it is.
he's your boy, fam. We get it. We just stop doing that. Yeah. I've said about I think Phil and O'Brien, they should just join the Labour Party as employees. Genuinely, they should just join the spin machine. Like, fair enough, they might have to take a pay cut for it, but at least they're being honest when they do that. They can be the new Alistair Campbell and Alistair Darling. Genuinely.
Fuck it. Get a free shot as being a prospective parliamentary candidate. No, God knows that Keir Starmer would happily get every single other person taken off the long list so he has a free run at it, like that pollster from YouGov, Chris Curtis.
Ironically, Phil was trying to be the local Labour MP of his constituency, but it did not work out for him. He did not make the short list for some reason. I don't know why.
No, he didn't.
I thought he'd be he'd be a lot better.
Shoe-in.
At least I think at least he can debate properly and come up with idea. He can speak okay. Whereas
Yeah.
Labour MPs that go on some of these panel shows just don't do well.
No, they don't. What's interesting is I actually made this point in stream the other day where I said the worst part about Phil is that he's smart, he's intelligent, he knows what he's talking about, and he'll do all of the work in his video. I will be watching his videos, and he'll be doing all the work for himself. And I'm like, yep, you're getting to the right point, and then he'll reach the complete wrong conclusion. Right? All of the working is correct, and the answer is just like the opposite of where he's got to. And I'm like, it's clear that he just cannot. Doesn't have it physically within him to criticise the red team at all, even though his reasoning would take him to that point in the first place.
I haven't seen that, or I haven't picked up on that, but what I do pick up on is always like, look, guys, obviously, trust me, bro, obviously Labour are gonna do this thing which they're saying they're not gonna do right now because strategically it makes sense. I'm like, bro, this is not Civ 6. Like, just stop pushing this. Like, human beings are not that kind of do everything with logic. If we did everything logically, I would be going to the gym a lot more and eating healthier. We are not creatures of logic. We are emotional based creatures. And so for me, when he's always like, well, of course Labour are going to do this thing, it's like, based on what? What's your source? Is it your source is you made it the fuck up? Because we've established most of the time that is your source, genuinely. And so that's why it just, for me, it's just so annoying. Like, when he was like, well, of course Labour are going to give workers public sector pay increases, like Tony Blair did it as well. Like, you realise your boy's not Tony Blair. Like, he doesn't have the charisma of Tony Blair. He doesn't have the speechcraft of Tony Blair. He doesn't have the political acumen that Tony Blair had. Of all the criticism of Tony Blair, at least he had a relative idea of what he was doing. Whereas Keir Starmer just kind of fumbles. Like, his first couple of years, he lost the council elections to the Tories. Do you remember that? And people were panicking. People were like, oh shit, this guy's trash. And then Boris Johnson was like, do you know what? Yeah, we're going to run COVID off. If he dies, he dies. And everyone's like, well, that's not very good, is it? And he just gave Starmer so many openings over Partygate and so many other things. He might as well have just said, look, here's a gun, shoot me. And Starmer just kept missing him. And
it's terrible. Well, it's interesting looking at how there's the similarities between Starmer and Johnson, in the both of them are just kind of serial liars and serial U-turners. And one of my favourite ones is that they both have this because they both wanted to have total control over the party with their in-groups and out-groups within the party kind of establishment. What they do is whenever something looks bad for them, they will find a fall guy and get them to like publicly take the blame for it. Like remember after the council elections, where there was
Blame
this
Rayner.
massive fight up the top where Starmer tried to get Rayner demoted. And there was this big internal thing going on.
They blamed her
I
lack of
posted the
print
meme of
trousers.
like Stalin pushing the guy off the boat. Um,
It's pretty funny. I need to
but
see that. If you've got
I
to
thought-
send me that, that sounds pretty funny.
yeah,
Um,
but I wanted to bring it back though to like the tax stuff that we were talking about.
yeah,
So I wanted to make a point. I made this point on Twitter. But I want to make sure I have it on my YouTube channel as well. If people aren't following me on Twitter, on Twitter users, is that of course we need a wealth tax, right, to be able to make sure that we have enough money to fund public services. We also need a wealth tax because we need to make sure our country is more equal, because it's too unequal, and that's not only bad for the economy but bad for for moral reasons as well. But I think that's a really important part of the justification for a wealth tax. I think a lot of people miss is that, basically the reason why we're in such a mess at the moment is because of what I mentioned before. During the austerity years where public services were being cut, we never stopped quantitative easing at that point. The debt to GDP ratio was still increasing during the entirety of the austerity period. Because it failed miserably in general at doing the things it was stated to do. But of course, the Conservative Party are there to give money to the people who vote for them and who support them,
it was
which
there
is,
to
of
shrink
course,
the
people
state.
who own assets.
Austerity was
To
there
shrink
to
the
shrink the
state
state. Yeah.
and to shrink the state and to increase the asset prices of the conservative wing of the country, either economically or as far as donors are concerned. And so all that QE money went into the pockets of the rich that they then used to massively overinflate asset prices. They didn't invest in increasing the productive capacity of the economy. Our productivity's been stagnant ever since 2008. Because why bother, right? Obviously, the failures of our tax system, the failures of neoliberal economics means that they weren't likely to invest anyway. But when the government has stated role is to protect asset prices, they know that they can always get ROI on pumping all the extra QE liquidity into the asset market. It's massively overinflated since 2010. And that means that a load of these assets that could be a place for working people once they have some money and they've saved up to be able to create their own set of wealth, they now no longer can because they've been priced out. So not only will the wealth tax that I propose, not only will that give more money to the exchequer, not only will it make our country more equal, but it would also lead to a drop in asset prices that will make access to those assets better for working people as well. So it's a form of market correction to fix this. I think Gary Stevenson's got a really good video about the increase in asset prices over the last decade or so, and I think that's the best way that we have of fixing it. And so this refusal to do so from the Labour Party, I describe their U-turn on workers' rights as ideological treason, and I probably would describe the lack of a wealth tax too, because I don't think the economy can be fixed without one.
I think if they said like with the wealth tax, I think maybe that would be the easiest one for the media to attack, right? But if they said we're not
Yeah.
going back, they're not going back to the 50p tax rate. They're not going to change capital gains tax, and that's the one where I think that would be the easiest one in the media to push to say, you go to work every day, you work hard, you pay national insurance, you pay income tax, right? Someone can sit and just have a load of shares, or be a landlord, or be one of these people who doesn't actually work, who just has a load of assets, and they will pay less effective tax than you. And then do you know what they could do? They could use that to attack Rishi Sunak because he pays a lower effective tax rate than a lot of people in this country. This shit writes itself. It's so easy. Genuinely, it's so easy that you can come up with it in about 2 minutes. Literally with people who know, not a ridiculous amount of politics. Like these guys have paid advisors who cannot come up with decent attack lines, and they've got the best thing they can come up with is Richie Sunak protects pedophiles. That's the best line of attack that they had, and that was the most embarrassing thing I have ever seen. And then the worst thing is they're like, it's a success because it went viral, and you're like, you guys think you're like 2010 internet YouTubers or like Jake Paul or Logan Paul or something, where you do something viral and you're like, oh my god, look how much look what my click-through rate is. It's like, they're not praising you, dog. They're not praising you. They're not saying it's a good thing. We don't live in, especially not the Labour Party, you don't live in a world where bad PR is, it's better to have bad PR than no PR or whatever. What you're doing is incredibly stupid because the first impression they're going to get of you is, you accusing the other side of being nonsense. Like,
Exactly.
like it's not good.
It's gutter politics. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really, it
honestly.
really is terrible. And you're right. It's incredible. Like it'd be such an easy thing to sell to people. You're absolutely right for the increase in capital gains tax. You could even like have some concessions by like not increasing it for like house purchase and sale, which I don't think they should do. But if you wanted to optically make it so that it's even more difficult to attack, I think the easiest attack line would be, oh well, if you sell your house for a profit when you're moving, you're going to have to pay capital gains on how much your house price has increased by since you bought it, right? That'd be an easy attack line. Maybe you could do something like that to water down the policy to make it more
I think
sellable. I
I
don't
think
think you should, but
I think if they say like overall through the year, if you say like you've sold more, you've made like 500k extra in profit or whatever of a house of properties, then you pay capital gains tax. I don't think that would affect the average person because house prices are so high right now. You like, do you know what I mean? Like even the ones in my area are worth like these like basic terrace houses worth like 160,000. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think like if your house has gone up massively in value based on nothing, based on the market, I don't think you should be paying capital gains. Do you know what I mean? Because I think like it makes it so it's harder for you to move, if that makes sense. Because like
yeah, yeah.
I've lived in this house since like 2002. It's doubled, more than doubled in value. Do you know what I mean? And we've done nothing for that. But at the same time, if I try and move to a better area or to a different house or whatever, if I've got to pay a stupid amount of capital gains tax, I would not be happy about it. So I think there are concessions, like you said, that you could make there. But I think if you're just a limited company or someone who owns a ridiculous amount of properties, and now you're selling off your properties because the interest rate rises, you should have to pay capital gains tax on that. Absolutely,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
you've done this for
In,
investments. You have
yeah,
done this for investments. Like you've done this
yeah,
for
yeah.
financial gain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get me, if you want to sell, the easiest thing to sell me on is a tax that doesn't affect normal people but affects landlords. If that's a tax, I'm sold. I'm sold on this policy already.
In the words of Mbappe, I will be there no matter what.
One thing I want to move to actually,
God.
because obviously in response to a lot of the criticisms that I have made of the Labour Party, I'm not fucking vote for these people, right? Whatever. And the worst part, right, is I get loads of people who are out here who are frustrated with the Labour Party, but feel like they can't vote for anybody else, right? I disagree for a whole host of like utilitarian reasons, right? But regardless, like I still get why they do it. I can understand why they're in that position. But the people who make me absolutely have an aneurysm, that they literally give me palpitations, are the people who will continue to try and defend the reasoning behind this stuff, right? Like the argument you get, the worst one is, oh well, the Labour Party can't have progressive policy because if they do, the media will attack them. And I'm like, okay, right, so if you're thinking we can never do anything good because the media will attack you for it, fuck it, get rid of democracy. Don't have a vote anymore. Get rid of party politics. Just let Rupert Murdoch, the Barclay brothers, and Viscount Rothermere and Paul Marshall, just let them set the policy. Because that's what you're saying that you want to happen.
The thing is, they're going to do it anyways.
Saying,
They're going to attack you anyways.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they were like, oh, we can't have Bernie because they'll call him a socialist. That's what they called Joe Biden. They said Joe Biden's a socialist. Like, oh, we can't have that call me Biden. And you're like, it doesn't matter what you say because they only have their NPCs. They only have one attack line on you. Do you know what I mean? They're going to say you're a Marxist, communist, socialist, a Trotskyite or something like that, and they're going to use a load of words they have no understanding about because it lands. That's it. They're going to say, oh, you're doing the politics of envy. It's like, well, actually, our economic policies are to the right of Rishi Sunak. It's like, I don't care. It's the politics of envy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just fucking, it's just crazy. And I think I kind of there was one point I wanted to bring up about Labour spinning like that O'Brien interview when I think it's very ironic that Starmer said, well, we want to do these things but we can't afford it, and that's why people have to kind of suffer. He didn't add the suffering bit in. It was like, isn't that what Tony Blair, like I mentioned earlier, Tony Blair said about Conservatives? Like, we're sorry we have to bring you economic pain but we can't afford it. Isn't Starmer doing what Tony Blair accused the Conservative Party of being? And it's like, how are you this shit?
I mean, yeah, like it's like not only it's the politicians and all the voters. Like the worst part about, or obviously you're right to call it like the Conservatives because it absolutely 100. It just is. It is. It's right wing. It's conservative. It's neoliberal, and then you'll get legions of Starmer fanboys and fangirls in the replies trying to convince you that this is social democratic politics. And I'm like, are you mental? These people don't understand politics.
The thing is
it drives me insane. It drives me fucking insane.
They will gaslight you and they'll say, oh, you just don't get it, or you don't want Labour to win, or you support the Tories. It's like, no, you fucking moron. It's like, you cannot say vote Labour to make things better and then Labour are like, well, we're going to keep the 2-child cap, we're not going to increase taxes, we're not going to invest more in social services significantly. And it's like, okay, so you're just David Cameron. Like, do you know what I mean? You're just David Cameron at that point.
These people understand, like they just don't get just how right wing like the rhetoric is. That's why.
Especially, sorry, when they say stuff like, oh yeah, these people don't get economic hardship. They're like middle class. I think they'll probably cite people like Grace Blakely, who his parents were wealthy or are wealthy, and things like they say, oh, they've never suffered economic hardship. It's like, no, fuckface. I want things to change because I have suffered it, and I know a lot of other people
Mm.
have. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's probably one of the most pathetic attacks I've ever seen on people to say, oh,
Yeah.
you're basically a champagne socialist. That's what they're saying. And they're like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's the
Labour will
worst part.
improve
Yeah.
things better, and Labour will make things
Yeah.
better, and therefore it's better, even if it's slightly better. We should vote for it. It's like the best chance we have of changing Labour policy is right now, and that's what you should be fighting for. Once they've done the manifesto, it's Joe over. At that point, there's not
Yeah.
much we can do, and I think you've pointed that out a lot as well. But right now, this is the only time we have any leverage over them. So why should we not use that? Why should we not say, if
Yeah.
Labour don't give us at least 3 to 5 good policies, why the fuck would we vote for you?
Yeah, exactly. They're incinerating all their political capital, like I said in the video the other day, and it's like this is like the one time where we actually have the ability to be able to run on like a more left wing platform, right? Because people are sick of the Tories,
It's a
in
free
so
hit.
much so they think they on basically every issue, right? They hate the Tories kind of prima facie at this point, in that their approval ratings are like absolutely fucking dirt in the absolute ground. So now we have the leeway to run on a platform that's more progressive because people want an alternative. People and like some people who would be scared to vote for Labour if things were more equal now have a reason to vote for Labour regardless, but just because they want the Tories out because they're so like traumatically bad. We don't need to make all these concessions. The left does not need to make these
Yeah.
concessions at all. And on top of that, I think that there's a sea change in political opinion as well. I think that people are more amenable to Keynesian style economics than they were before, right?
I think
People are sick of austerity. That's why Boris Johnson kind of had to appeal in a Corbyn world where the political discussion had been changed, where austerity politics was not like the
I mean,
the
that's what he did, though.
consensus
He
anymore.
kind of said, I'm not like, Theresa May or David Cameron. He said that those guys were shit. I'm different.
Yeah,
And he conned people by doing that because he wouldn't have won if he pushed for the austerity. Even he didn't even want to use
yeah.
the word austerity. That's the thing. He
Mhm.
didn't want to use the word because he knows that's associated with bad things, bad times. So he was smart
Mhm.
enough to actually understand that. But that's what I mean. Like, it doesn't have to be like this. Yeah, the economy is knackered, but there are things you can do to fix it. And borrowing money is not a bad thing as long as you invest it in the right areas.
Mhm.
That's what the media should be trying to explain to people, and that's what the Labour Party should be explaining to people. And I get people who are like, well, you crashed the economy. It's like, cool. Our debt to GDP was like 30% under New Labour at the end of the Great Recession, right? Our debt to GDP is 100% now. Tell me which party has done the bad job here? If they have doubled your debt, right, you cannot possibly in any world argue they have done a good job.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've been gifted with the political consensus that Conservatives finally are seen as bad with the economy, and then we are then responding to that by saying, "Okay, we're going to copy their spending plans." And I'm like, clearly, no, their spending plans are bad if it's gotten us to this point. Like, what are you doing? It doesn't make any fucking sense. And because not only because like the policies are also right wing, the rhetoric is incredibly right wing. Things like there's no money left, the credit cards being maxed out. We are going to reform to get economic growth by deregulating. I'm like, this is identical. This is literally identical to Conservative policy, and Labour stands will be blue in the face telling you that actually no, this is principled centre left politics. I'm like, you haven't got a fucking, you don't have a
This is
fucking clue what
fiscal
you're talking about.
responsibility. You don't understand because that's what the
Oh,
country wants.
what?
Fiscal
Yes,
responsibility.
yeah. Like yes, managed decline is now fiscally responsible.
And
I'm
and
like, I just,
And the
I'm
funniest thing
gonna
is,
shit
even
now.
journalists are calling them out on it, saying, "Oh well, you pride yourself on being fiscally responsible. What are you going to do about this?" Is like, well, you see, we don't have any money, so as much as I would love to do this, what am I supposed to do? And especially when she's like, we're gonna base it on growth. We're gonna get more money via growth, and that's how we're gonna fund things. It's like, what? How much growth are you gonna get realistically? We're at 0% right
How?
now. What? How much are you gonna grow the economy by? 0.2%, 0.5? How much are Labour with their plans actually? Because that's what I'd love to see. When they put their manifesto out, there'll be economic analysis on it most likely about how much growth we could see from it. If we see 0.2%, where are you going to put 0.2%? Do you know what I mean? And that's why I find frustrating. It's like you don't know how to grow the economy. Like I'm trying to, when what's his name on the O'Brien show again, that same interview, Starmer was like, the thing that crashed the economy was Liz Truss's unfunded promises. It's like the reason Liz Truss crashed the economy was because she tried to base tax cuts on borrowing, which I don't think anyone's actually done before. So she basically told the investors, look, I'm going to borrow a ridiculous amount of money from you to do tax cuts. They're like, how's that going to grow the economy? It's like, don't worry about it. And they're like, where's the OBR forecast? They said, don't worry about it. And everyone's like, I'm not comfortable with this. And she's like, oh shit. And the thing tanked. When Sunak was like, I'm going to borrow 37 billion for test and trace, you didn't see like the people who buy bonds going, how are you going to pay for it? Borrowing? Nah, bruv, I'm done. Do you know what I mean? And it's just him kind of. The problem is he's kind of enshrining that ideology of you can't borrow money, and he's making it so toxic that eventually Labour are going to have to borrow money for things like green policy, especially when growth isn't there, because they're going to have one of two problems. They're either going to have no results because the economy hasn't moved at all and people are still pissed off, or they're going to borrow money to invest, which he said is a bad idea. And the only way that will work is if the investments pay off. And I'll be honest, if they're going to borrow. If they're going to spend 28 billion or whatever on wind farms in 2027, I don't know how long it takes to build wind farms of that size. I'm assuming it takes more than 3 years. So the election after the next one, they're going to have no results, and people are going to be like, well, you're almost as shit as the Asian dude we had last time. Why would I vote for you? And it's like, well, at least we're not them. And it's like, you are marginally better at best at that point. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what's it's annoying because they try and con people into believing it, and the fact that the consequences of this are so bad that they don't get they're not going to move very far. Do you know what I mean? And that's the problem. They're going to essentially put Labour in an almost doom loop like the Tories are in now, where it's just going to become very toxic. And I think people lose faith in democracy at that point because the two major parties aren't working. We're not going to get electoral reform unless Mystic Phil is right and Labour will do PR in their kind of going into their second term.
Well, the magic beans might grow fruit yet.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, in the story it did, so, who knows at that point. But, do you know what I mean? Unless Labour do PR kind of after this election, so going into their next one or whatever, how you want to explain it, it's going to be a nightmare. And I think one of my lecturers, he said populism is a failure of capitalism, and I think what we've seen kind of in 2019, I think is the perfect encapsulation of it. What we've seen across Europe is it shows that even America as well. One of the reasons why I think people voted Trump is because the economy was so shit for people that they just wanted to gamble on a guy who was saying, I'm gonna essentially be racist towards Mexicans, but I'll also give you a better life. So the ones who were racist were like, I like that guy, and the ones who were like, I want a better economy for myself, I like that guy. And so he merged the two. It's right wing populism. It's very aggressive, moving towards kind of really extreme right wingism, I guess. But that's what I mean. And that's where we have headed for a while now. And luckily under Boris Johnson, it didn't last long. Because of his own ineptitude. If he was a smart geezer and he didn't do a lot of the stupid stuff he did, he would still be in charge now. And I don't know how
absolutely. It's crazy. It's crazy, how much political capital that he's absolutely just completely incinerated by being totally incompetent.
Honestly.
If he'd have been slightly more competent, he could have been, as he said, prime minister for decades.
Yeah.
But the people loved him for a very, very long time.
It's like, when Donald Trump was like, they can inject the UV rays and the bleach into you, everyone was like, this man is deranged. If he didn't say as much stupid stuff as he did, do you know what I mean? Maybe he would have won a second term, honestly. If he wasn't involved in so many scandals. Do you know what I mean?
Was it the picture of him staring at the eclipse?
Oh my God. That one isn't as bad as the UV rays, honestly. They can inject, and I think once he said they can inject the bleach, and apparently people were shooting up Lysol, I think at that point you're done, geezer. It's over for you. Just
drove her.
Yeah, honestly. But yeah,
I was going to say there was a point I was going to make before, and I've forgotten what it was now. It's about the I think one of the other things I think it's really important to understand about why I think the current path of the Labour Party going on is so kind of existentially dangerous is what it does to the left more broadly, right? In the big problem I have with it as well. First of all, you mentioned this in what you were saying before about the kind of we are embedding the rhetoric, embedding the idea of the government budget like a household budget. We can't borrow money to invest, whatever. All these canards are now being embedded into the public consciousness by there being no alternative to neoliberal economics, which is dangerous for the long-term health of our political discourse and for the future of social democratic politics in this country. That's really dangerous. And there's another thing that's super dangerous as well. And this is why journalists are treating Starmer with kid gloves, is because there is a lot to be gained for the establishment in this country and the elite in this country and the ownership class in this country by having there being no left-wing alternative, right? By cementing neoliberal politics as part of the Labour brand, just like Blair did. they allow the conversation to never leave that neoliberal sphere, because if anything goes wrong, like happened under Labour, right? Like Labour got blamed for the 2008 financial crash, as in my opinion they should be, but they shouldn't be blamed for being fiscally irresponsible for borrowing too much money, which is what was the good thing that they did afterwards, right? The fiscal expansion in the brown years was what was good. It was, they didn't overspend the credit card of the country, quite the opposite, they saved the economy by engaging in quantitative easing.
Yeah, I
But
think
they failed on the financial crisis because they didn't fix the problems of Thatcherism that led to the crisis in the first place. No capital controls, no prudential regulation, getting into the bed with the financial sector. But because they were the red team doing right wing politics, people blamed leftist politics
yeah.
because they were the red team, and not the fact that they were engaging in right wing politics and right wing policy that led to the crash.
I think, especially because the Conservatives market it so well as a Labour crashed the economy as well. Like, they did a really good job marketing things, especially like David Cameron tried to say something to Ed Miliband, and Ed Miliband was like, "I'm not going to take lectures from the guy who wanted more deregulation." And I think that's something Labour should have spoken about more. Is like the financial crash would have been a lot worse under the Tories. Let's be honest now. But it's just Labour don't know how to fight. That's the problem. They don't know
Yeah.
how to fight for any ideals or any principles. Check the picture I just sent you on Discord quickly. I think you might find it funny. But Thatcher's, this is a continuation of Thatcher's legacy, honestly. But yeah, even Cameron will probably look at Starmer and think, that guy is. I've won the argument basically of austerity and all these other things. Osborne as well. We've won it because austerity is still being pushed. It won't be as bad, but it's still there, and that's why I've just gotten sick of it. Because why would I want to vote for a party that's going to push austerity? I genuinely like
100%.
when I spoke to my local Labour candidate, when I said like, how are you going to achieve the highest sustained growth in the G7? Bearing in mind the bloody USA are in the G7 as well. Like, how are you going to get higher growth than them or the Canadians? Or Germany's the only one we have a shot beating, genuinely, and that's only because Germany's economy is they recovered and then they were knackered again. Our economy just hasn't recovered properly. They're the only ones we have a shot beating. We're not beating anyone else, I think, in the G7. And so how are you going to achieve that? And they're like, growth, bro. You ever heard of it? It doesn't make any sense, and it's just the amount of spin. Like what he said about the way what's her name, Truss crashed the economy. It's like, that's not even true though. And obviously O'Brien going, yep, 100% Keir Starmer doesn't miss. Man hits threes like Steph Curry. It's fucking hell, bro. Like, you're just not a journalist. Just give up. Just give up.
Yeah. Yeah, literally, he's pathetic, isn't he? And the worst part as well, not only is Keir Starmer bad because his policies are bad, not only is he bad because his rhetoric is bad, not only is he bad because he's pushing back, left-wing politics for generations, but, what he's doing to the Labour Party is completely unconscionable as well. What he's doing internally, how essentially creating this army of yes men that get appointed via the Central Committee. Essentially, it's ironic to make this comparison of all comparisons. He's basically turning the Labour Party into the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, where it's just a singular leader and a group of yes men controlling the party, controlling the entire party
The Politburo.
machine through democratic centralism, essentially, except not even democratic, just authoritarian centralism, really and truly.
The thing is,
Where
and
that's what look at the yeah.
The Labour Party
Go
should
for it,
not
sorry.
be built like that. It shouldn't be like, they need to change it at some point. They need to change. I think moving to one member, one vote was a good move under Ed Miliband, but I think
Yep.
they need to make major reforms in the way selections and things are done. I know they've said that they have done so, but I don't. Jim, I don't think it's enough. Like, I don't think the leaders should have as much power as they do. That's the fundamental problem.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
grotesque, isn't
you've
it?
got a super chat from someone saying, what do you do about stay Labour, Green, form a new party? I don't think you can form a new party. I think you gotta look at your constituency and vote with your conscience. If you live in a swing seat, if you think you want to vote Labour because you want to get your local Tory MP out, I really detest my local Tory MP. That would be the biggest factor in me voting Labour, I'll be honest. Then go for it. If you live in a safe seat, then you can vote for another party. It's really up to you, honestly. Like, I think every election is you vote with your conscience. Like, I always hate the people who's like, you're enabling the Tories. Like, do you know what's enabling the Tories? Labour being shit. Straight up. Like,
Yeah.
if Labour were good, I wouldn't have to think, oh shit, who am I going to vote for? It's an easy bet. So
Yeah,
like,
I think I disagree with the idea of voting with your conscience. I understand when people say that. I
Yeah.
think you should maximise the utility of your vote. And I think that if Labour are offering something, even though I would be disagreeing with a lot of their politics, I probably would, find a way of voting for them. And I do dislike my current Conservative MP, but
Who have you
I
got?
think I would look at
Who?
the broader. I mine's Darren Henry.
What the
He's
hell
the
is that?
most expensive MP in Parliament as
How?
far as expenses goes. Right? And he's never, and he's completely absent
Wait,
from the
he's
political
getting more money
process.
than
But
Nadeem Zahawi. Jesus.
yeah, I know, right?
How?
But my point, 'cause I will be voting for the Green Party.
Hmm.
I'm a member of the Green Party, so I probably will be voting for them regardless now anyway. But I think that everyone should, because I think what's more important in general than who's my constituency MP, because as far as I'm concerned, Labour, Lib Dems, Tories, cheeks the same, are us at this point, right? All neoliberals, none of them have any transformative policies that need to fix the country. And now, right? The policies that we need to fix the country have to happen now. We cannot wait to have action on climate change. We cannot wait to have actions on the housing crisis. We cannot wait to have action on inequality, right? We're at a crossroads right now, and we can't wait. But I think what's more important than who wins in my constituency is where we push the national conversation, right? UKIP won no seats apart
Yeah.
from Douglas Carswell because he defected from the Conservative Party and then won the next election after he defected. But they managed to take up 12% of the national vote, and that was enough of an electoral force to get Brexit. Right? They won one seat, and it got them what they wanted from the political process. And because I think that the main three parties are so identical in their political ideology at this point, what's more important to me is the broad stroke of what has to happen under the Labour Party for them to stop hemorrhaging votes to a Green Party that are going to hit them as far, because they're not going to look at it constituency by
Yeah, they'll
constituency.
look at it as
They're
national.
going to look at swing. They're going to see, well, if we lose 5% of our vote to the Green Party or 6%, 7%, how many seats are we going to lose overall if that happens? And so having a large cohort of people who vote for the Green Party to see increases in taxation on the rich, to see more cooperative working agreements within companies, more progressive stances on workers' rights, more money being put into the environment, more money being spent on council housing, having these politics be front and centre of a green bread and butter economic policy. That is a way that you can shift the Labour Party's perception on these, because they will say, well, look, because at the moment they have carte blanche to be a Conservative Party because they have legions of idiots who will vote for them regardless of what they do on their policy. So they have it doesn't matter. They can just do whatever they want and just be as conservative as possible and win over the people who feel like their vote needs to be earned by a Labour Party moving to the right. Because then there's no opposition on the left. We need to create the left wing electoral force that UKIP were in the run up to 2015, and that's how we get the policy that we want. Because again, you don't have to win seats to do that. UKIP never did, and that's what's more, the national conversation, the national voter share is more important to me than who my MP is really and truly. Because really, actually, the councillors have more power than the MP as far as local politics is concerned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For me, it's just I'm going to speak to the local Lib Dem guy at some point, and if he can convince me, and I'm not going to say, he doesn't have to twist my arm very hard. If he can convince me and say, I'm going to I'm going to do what's best for the town and other things like that, then I'll be like, cool. He's a local dude. He doesn't live too far from me, I think. That's all it's going to take, genuinely, because I would rather I would rather vote Green, but I think the Lib Dems just have a better shot in the seat, and I want at least my local Labour MP to think if I don't come up with something better, if I don't do more for the town, then I might lose to this geezer. Do you know what I mean? It's just a calculation that you want to make, and there's nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with what you said there. I agree with a lot of it. It makes a lot of sense, especially with the UKIP. With what UKIP did was it was a disaster. It was absolutely incredible, where they have nothing, absolutely nothing, and they still managed to shift the national conversation. Obviously, I think the major problem is that they had the media, where you had what's his face, Nigel Farage, on every TV show.
God,
I mean, he was everywhere, and I think if you could do that with the Green Party, then it would make a world of difference.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we are luckily seeing the Green Party get more media coverage than they have been previously. And what's good is that the people that are getting the coverage have been really good performers, right? Carla Denyer and Zach Polanski have been really good at getting their point across. I think that they've failed on focusing on bread and butter economic issues, which should be where they should be, rather than niche issues about what they're doing to protect their local environment and
Yeah,
create these
I
green
find it kind of
jobs, which
cringe.
is
I can't
it's
lie.
nice. I don't mind. Like, I'm happy with that. That's not bad policy. But every single time they should be saying, on every single time they go on, is like, we are the party of the working poor. We will fix the tax system. We will fix the cost of living crisis. We will build council houses. That's what they should
Yeah,
be the center of their message, really and truly.
I think. I think as bad as Geezer Lenin was at times, I think his message of peace, land, and bread. That's how he won. He didn't win by saying I'm going to enact communist ideals. He said peace, land, and bread, which everyone at that point could resonate with in Russia. And I think like if you come up with 3 to 5 good policies that are just easy ones that people could remember, they will do. It will help you a lot. And I think if we kind of move on to kind of what 3 policies, or say 3 to 5 policies, could Labour do to convince you to vote for them? What would you say if you could have between 3 and 5? What would you say would win you over as a voter to say I'm not going to vote Green?
So, council housing is the biggest one, right? Because I think the biggest problem facing our country is the housing crisis. And I don't think just saying we're going to change planning regulations is going to do anything, especially not when so much of our housing stock is owned by institutional investors who any new private housing development will just get bought up by the investors to make sure that they maintain their existing prices. Look what happened in the subprime mortgage crisis, right? So much of the market was already owned by institutional investors. The massive increase in supply never drove down the price of housing. I don't think that will help. It has to be state owned, it has to be state developed, and it has to be used to not just increase our supply, but it has to be done to drive rents down specific. It has to, because renters are the ones, like, obviously I feel bad for homeowners. I am one, but renters are really and truly the forgotten part of our electorate who've been absolutely screwed over by every single government since 1979. And so that's a big policy. Like 100,000 council houses every single year. It's gonna take like a war economy on council housing to fix this shit. So that's the big policy that I want to see. The second one, it has to be an actual overhaul of workers' rights. Like the biggest U-turn for me from the Labour Party has been them walking back and U-turning on attacking the problems with the gig economy, which is like the big worker struggle globally at the moment. Is the fight against the casualised workforce, the fight against lack of benefits, lack of good pensions in the private sector, for example, especially considering how Labour and Tory governments have screwed over private pensions in this country. That needs fixing, as well as, of course, the attacks on workers' rights through the casualisation of our workforce. I think probably a big one for me would be like trans healthcare, obviously being who I am, but I don't think that that's as important nationally as kind of the bread and butter economic stuff. And then I think some nationalizations, right? I don't think you have to nationalize the energy suppliers, and I think that you can attack the generators without nationalising the existing ones by undercutting them through state funding for new projects, which is what they say they were going to do before Rachel Reeves tried to take down the budget for it when she was being interviewed by Laura Kearnsberg. But I think nationalising the national grid is important for changing the way in which we distribute energy within the energy network. And also nationalising, obviously rail is already happening. Amusingly, lots of that's happening under the Tories already. But I think nationalising water is a big one, because of the problems that we have currently with not just the price of water that we're paying for, but the shit being pumped into rivers as well. I think Royal Mail is something that we can put on the back burner for as much as it should be nationalised. And I feel really bad for the people in the CWU who've been campaigning for so long against this absolutely fucking grotesque leadership in Royal Mail at the moment. I think water and grid nationalisations are the two big ones for me. And again, I would go then council housing and workers' rights.
Okay. So I've got.
What would be yours?
So if you want to go, council housing, workers' rights, translates nationalisation of utilities. What was the last one?
Well, National Care Service.
National Care. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, National Care Service.
Because that's fucked. Like, care is fucked. When the current set of boomers retire, all hell is going to break loose, because they're going to be selling their houses and realising they have nothing to pass on.
They're already doing it. That's already happening.
yeah, like the political,
They
like
mentioned
the
tax.
kind of political fallout for that is going to be cataclysmic unless the national guest service gets paid.
Especially because they can't even get the people in to to do these jobs as well. That's a massive problem. They are struggling. They are getting people from really far across the world, and no offense to some of these boomers, but some of them don't like brown faces or black faces, and they're gonna have to
Hmm.
get real used to them soon because they're the only people who are taking these caring jobs because they don't pay enough, and they're incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah, actually, I think I would probably renege on saying that workers' rights were my top three. Whilst I think that it's important they do have it, it would be like it's one of the things that's made me like completely ditch the Labour Party like wholesale. They're unrecoverable. But I think actually go. I think tax policy, change on tax policy
All
is
right.
if they wanted to make a policy to make me vote for them, like the change in tax policy is such a gigantic structural change that needs to happen like immediately. That would be something that they could do to make me hold my nose and vote for them. If they said we are changing the tax system to make it fairer, introducing wealth taxes to decrease asset prices,
Yeah.
equalizing CGT, getting rid of NI, like all of these changes, these structural changes to the tax system that need to happen, that could make me change my mind as well. Actually, more so than because the workers' rights can theoretically come later. The change in the tax system has to happen now, right?
All right, yeah, that's 100%. And they're not going to manage to grow the economy without, I think, changing taxes and investing in the economy,
Mm,
and they don't want to do either of that. So what it
mm,
means is there's not many levers, or they can invest the money that they have got better, but at the same time, you're not going to get too far doing it. Especially if they don't end a lot of the kind of privatization of the of kind of the NHS and things like that. If they go down the route of more PFI contracts, then I'm 100% done. Like if I
It's
see
like
if I
there's so
see
much
that,
need fixing. Oh my god, you keep mentioning things. I'm like, oh yeah, that needs to. All of the private sector involvement in it just needs to go. All the contracts, all the outsourcing, all needs to go. It's a waste of money. All of the bosses that we're paying, the CEOs that we're paying, the dividends that we're paying with public money to Serco and G4S. Oh my god, that will happen. So that
yeah,
this country is so fucked. It's
yeah, and
so
Keir
fucked.
Starmer's gonna be very busy fixing all this stuff. So you can't. You can't expect too much of him. It's just the fact that he's worse. He's more to the right of Tony Blair was like, with economic policies. Like, how are you worse than Tony Blair? Like, that's the only one thing I'll give him credit for. Is like one of the few things I'll give him credit for is like he didn't do it the right way, but at least he kind of got a lot more people out of poverty and things like that. I know it wasn't perfect. Rashford being kind of the main case of it. Of like his family were incredibly poor. That was under Labour. And that's something the
Mhm.
Tories kind of tried to push, and the Labour MP was like, yes, but it's worse under you guys now, and Tories had nothing to say, and it was the most embarrassing climb down I've ever seen. But there was still massive. Like if you read his story, like the stuff he said, I'm like, fucking hell, like that's awful. Like he had to go like to his neighbour's house to eat because his mum couldn't afford to feed him. And it's like this is like if you look at the return on investment we got on that guy, like the amount of tax that guy must pay would be ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? And that's the thing. Like the ROI we got on him is just crazy. Especially like if you just look at the economics of it. Do you know what I mean? And it's just so stupid that they don't see that. Like especially in sports as well, where England is lacking massively. These athletes generate ridiculous amounts of money. In terms of service, like musicians and stuff get ridiculous amounts of money. So it's
No,
just
musicians need to get jobs in cyber though, Madge. All right, that's what
no,
needs to like the arts. They're Mickey Mouse degrees. Can have people learning
yeah.
about arts and stuff. It's not like it's one of our biggest exports in terms of cultural development in the world.
Shakespeare's been carrying our economy for way too long now. We need to get him gone. We should be exporting cyber defense. Jeez.
AI.
AI, yeah. Obviously, when like Sunak's like, oh, we're going to use AI to fix the NHS, I'm like, shut up. When Labour do it, I just cringe because it's like, I expect that from Sunak. I don't expect from you guys to say, oh, we're going to use AI to fix the thing. And it's like, how are you going to do that? It's like, we're going to get Ultron to fix everything. That's what they might as well say at this point. Fucking the age of Ultron is here. He's going to fix the NHS. He's going to change the list. And it's just nuts. I don't.
What it is, it's zombie Blairism, right? That's what it is, because there's
Yeah.
no rhyme or reason to the policy. It's just we don't want to change anything fundamentally, but we have to look like we're doing something. So they've latched on to AI as this kind of mythical,
It's
one size fits all rhetorical trick to make it look like they're doing things when they're not.
we're gonna manage it better. It's Jeremy Hunt's gonna look at Reeves. It's like, who are you? It's like, I'm you, but more conservative. Honestly, it don't make
Mm.
sense. I think for me, if we go through my five policies, I think council housing's a really good one. So I'll steal that one off you. I think I would keep workers' rights in there. I would,
Hmm.
because it's so fucked. Like, I know Labour said they're going to get rid of zero hours contracts, but I think they got to do a lot more. Like, like especially with the rise of Uber and Deliveroo and that kind of stuff, there has to be a lot more done. I
Mm.
think we don't question Ultron in this household. Um, Tax policy, definitely three. I can save the National Health Service a bit because I'm not that old yet, so
Mm-hmm.
we'll keep that on pause until I'm a boomer, until I'm an old man, I guess.
Well, that's the crazy part. But boomers literally destroying the thing that
Yeah.
they need the most.
I found it nuts, like the Conservatives killed off so much of their own voter base was genuinely the most crazy things I've ever seen in my life. Um, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, we've got all of these people who vote for us potentially, especially older people. Forget, not just the people in care homes, right? Because there were a significant amount of the people who died, right? Not just them, but it's like a lot of the people that died from the pandemic got old, and these were probably, excuse me, probably Conservative voters. Let's be honest.
Mm.
They're
Yeah,
gone,
yeah, absolutely,
and
absolutely.
now they're stuck
Yeah,
with us, who they're like, oh, so you're gonna vote for us, right? And it's like, what have you done for us? Is like, we're working on that, chief. You got to give us some time. We haven't had enough time. It's like, you had 13 years. It's like, yeah, but look over there at Keir Starmer. Like, do you want to vote for him? It's like, oh god, don't do that.
yeah, it's like
But
still what we're gonna talk about how like the small boats crisis, right? The one that
oh
we
jeez,
created. Oh my god.
it's
It's so like the Tories are so much. Also, by the way, thank you, Hildebeest, for the raid. Much appreciated. Welcome, raiders. Please refresh your screens.
I I think
It's
that,
like
yeah. The funniest thing is
yeah,
they created this monster, they created this backlog, and they made this into a massive issue when it didn't have to be, and then they're being consumed by the thing that they created.
I made that when I made a video about this the other day, reacting to like Ava Santina on Jeremy
Yeah.
Vine, or Alexis Conran standing in for Jeremy Vine. I think what the Tories are going to do is just before the next election, like a few months beforehand, they're going to open up the safe and legal routes. So there may still be a large asylum backlog, but what they're going to do though is they're going to say, "Look, we've stopped the boats." Because obviously they've closed off all the safe
Yeah,
and
yeah.
regular migratory routes for these people to come here, and then it's like, well, just open up 4 months before the election, all the boats stop because the demand is completely
I
depleted,
I
and
don't
then
think they'll
suddenly
do
you go,
that.
look, we've fulfilled our pledge.
I don't think they'll do that, because I think the pledge was for this year, and I think the other problem is like I think the media will see through it. I think the media, not that the tabloids will criticize them.
The
No,
Tory media, I don't think they're, of course they
oh, I
won't see
think they
through
will.
it. They'll
If
they'll
they
they'll,
see
they'll lick the
that,
arse.
they'll go from, oh, there are boats of migrants to planes full of
I
migrants.
guess,
I,
yeah.
I think the other problem is Suella ain't gonna do it. Let's be real now. Unless she's got Braveman ain't gonna do it. I'll be real. There's
That's it.
no way. There's no way Mrs. Rwanda is gonna do the safe routes. There's no way.
I mean, I guess. That's a potential. But I mean, if she's still Home Secretary, because obviously it's
Yeah.
only at time of recording that she's still there. It's interesting we mentioned Suella Braverman. 'Cause I think you mentioned about the potential for her to be the next Conservative leader. Who do you think will be the next Tory leader? Because obviously we both know that. I mean, to be fair, I think you differ on my opinion on this, but I think it's basically a foregone conclusion now that the Tories are going to get completely demolished in the next election, and I don't think it's gonna be close either. Because
Yeah.
not only the poll lead like completely insurmountable, I don't think it's ever happened for an incumbent government to recover their poll lead at this point. But
It's
also tactical voting is now big in the
yeah.
public consciousness too.
It's
We
Joanna for
both
them.
think I think that I don't think there's any way back for them now. So there's no way Rishi Sunak can carry on as leader.
I think he'll quit. I think they'll lose. He'll quit, and he'll go to California, and he'll like do
Yeah,
whatever people do in California. To
hundred
be honest,
percent.
yeah,
Green
like,
card it up.
yeah, the fact that he had a green card was nuts. But yeah, I think I don't know who it will be, because I don't know who's keeping seats. That's the problem. But I
That's
think
true.
I think if Penny Mordaunt keeps her seat, I think she will be Tory leader, one hundred
I
percent.
think if the Tories want to have a chance at not becoming the progressive Conservative Party of Canada, I think their only chance is to make Penny Mordaunt leader, because she's the only person who, isn't a fucking raging lunatic, right? I have people, I think, across the entire Conservative benches, right? Obviously, I think they're reprehensible people, but at
Yeah,
least they're not like mad. It's like her, Caroline Noakes, and like Alicia Kearns, and everyone else is like a raging lunatic on the entire benches. Like, it's absolutely fucking crackers, a lot of them.
yeah.
And Penny Mordaunt is their only chance of rescuing their party to make
I
them look
think
sensible again.
I think if they picked her instead of Liz Truss, they'd be in a much better position than they are in now. I
Oh
think
yeah, 100%, hundred
if
percent.
she keeps her seat, she'll do. I think she'll win it. But the problem is her constituents don't like her, because
No,
apparently she's not there very often. And
no.
like, even when she was a minister, like, she was focusing on a leadership contest rather than doing her job. Thoughts on
Yeah.
the possible India trade deal? I think they're going to pants us just like New Zealand and Australia did, and they're going to get exactly what they want, which is an opening up of visas. I don't know if you, and it's going to be very corrupt. I think they're going to, Sunak's
Yeah.
going to make some cash off it. His wife's going to make money off it. His father-in-law's going to make money off it. Probably his cousin, his second cousin, will make some cash off it. Yeah,
Sunak and Modi being corrupt. How dare you? How dare you make such a vile accusation? But I think
I
but
must be
going back to the
racist because
leadership
they're both
contest, though,
minorities.
but going back to like the leadership question, I don't think Penny Mordaunt will be leader though. If she does have her seat, I think she's too left wing. I think she's too left wing for the
Yeah.
Conservative Party, and like I think they've gone so far down the crack juice road. I think they've all just inhaled like the crack pipe so hard. I think that the Conservative membership will just double down and go for someone really culture warry from like the CDO.
I don't think it'll be Braveman for two reasons. One, I think Penny Mordaunt has I don't want to say it actually because they'll call me misogynistic, but it'd be based on appearance, and like she actually like dresses quite well. And the other reason is Penny Mordaunt is white, which will help her a lot. Let's not forget Rishi Sunak. This is the membership that Rishi Sunak lost to Liz Truss in. I know like he didn't push the culture war stuff, but like they're not going to vote for someone who's a minority. 100% they ain't going to do it. There's a reason why they hate Sunak. It's not just because of his bad economic policies and all the disasters. It's partially because he's a minority. Like, how do you have a majority of people who vote for the human hand grenade? Did you see Liz Truss's eye twitch during the debates?
Yeah,
Like, that was
crazy.
That
Like
was
she looked
scary.
mental.
Yeah, she looked like she was being possessed by a demon or something.
But maybe she is. Who knows?
It was terrifying.
It's her brain like partially reconnecting after the
Server
like the
error.
sleep rage and hypnotism that got done on her to try and get her move over from being a Lib Dem anti-monarchist.
She's having server issues from the future. The machines aren't working properly. Honestly, I think it would be.
I think that
I think it'll be.
I think I potentially Penny Mordaunt. I think he'd be more likely to kind of maybe like a Michael Gove type figure.
I don't think he's not running again. I think he's done.
Oh, is he not running again? But somebody like him, potentially someone who is kind of like a standard bearer for fiscal conservatism, who does have some of the culture war stuff, but isn't quite as mental as some of the other people.
I don't think the party want fiscal conservative. I think what they want is someone who's like a rabid culture war person. I think David Cameron's a bit of an aberration from maybe the people they would typically go for, but I think they want someone who's like, rah rah the empire, fuck immigration, like. I think they want someone who's more like that, who'll push the culture war aggressively because they've lost the business class now. They've jumped ship. They've gone to Labour and like the Lib Dems and stuff. So all of the people who would be like, I'll vote Conservative because they are good for my business and they fuck over my workers. I think that thing is dead. I think that's gone. So I think all they're left with is a bunch of culture war like Nimrods.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and I think,
and also because they're being attacked from both sides as well. Because a bunch of the culture warry Singapore on Thames style, like right wing libertarian types, who are also racists. Loads of these people have jumped ship to Reform UK as well.
Ticey's gone.
So they'll try and want to regain those people. So who's like a non-minority candidate who panders to that kind of stuff.
That's true.
I mean, although to be fair, there is a rising star who is a minority candidate who I think is so insane that I think she's so insane that the membership might vote for her still.
I think the problem is she botched it. When she had the chance to deregulate everything, and then she got pelters from the ERG and then pelters from Labour, and then she was like, "Well, you see, if I'm getting criticisms from both sides, I must be right." And I'm like, that is probably the stupidest thing I've heard from Kemi Badenoch for a while. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be her. I think she did well during the leadership contest, but I think she's kind of botched it as a minister. I don't think she wasn't given the right role for someone like her.
Yeah, the Brexiteer types she would naturally be a bedfellow for, because that's a lot of the right wing drive for Brexit was to create a Singapore on Thames style, fiscally libertarian, hard right economic policy government, and her reneging on that, breaking the promise that she'd ostensibly made to those voter bases by not engaging in like the incineration of EU laws that she'd promised.
Yeah,
that's like ground zero level betrayal for these people, and she's probably completely lost them forever with that. So I think you probably are right on that too as well.
I was going to say one of the things I would want from Labour actually would be dynamic alignment with the EU as well, just because it makes it harder to deregulate. Like when you look at that EU retention bill they tried to pass, I think it was very obvious what they were trying to do. And I think people saw through it when people were like, oh, we might lose our holiday pay, and that's one of the things where we don't get enough of it in this country. But I think one of those things that people do hold on to is very dear in this country. So like things like that would be quite a bit more difficult for them to get rid of. I know we get more holiday than some European countries, like we're above the minimum, but I think if they want to absolutely get rid of some of the things, it would make it more difficult. Like if we were still aligned with the EU now, they wouldn't be able to dump as much trash in the water as they are. So I think maybe something like that. It also help our imports and exports out dramatically because our economy is completely knackered when it comes to that kind of stuff. But yeah, there are things Labour could do, and these are not hard things that they could do to probably get us to vote for him. But I guess if we want to discuss why do British voters seem to love pain, like why are we voting for the biggest clowns outside of any circus, or I guess at this point inside any circus? I know we don't get a lot of choice because the way the party structure is, but like surely at some point people we just want better. Do you know what I mean? And I guess because of the way it is, you don't get a lot of say on who the candidates are unless you're within the party or the leader of the party. Maybe that's the major issue. Maybe it's the party system and first past the post. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it?
Because I think people in England love to moan about things rather than having them be fixed. I think that might be one of the issues.
I mean, the crab bucket mentality is really hard to overcome, right? The Conservative Party have won so many votes by turning the have-a-littles against the have-nots.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to break that, right? Because whilst they agree with us on loads of kind of basic economic, like macro policies, they moralize really hard on micro policy, right? The virtue ethics behind policy proposal, as far as what people want to see in this country goes, is completely fucked. They're not utilitarian at all. It drives me around the bend. You cannot reason with these people because the moral philosophy that guides what they want from political policy, it doesn't cross anything that we believe in, right? Not the big gap between right and left philosophy is probably the utilitarian gap. And trying to sell any of these people, take for example, right, 'cause the two-child benefit cap, very popular policy, right? It's a shit policy, it's a garbage policy that impoverishes children, but they don't care. They don't care whether the children come out of poverty. They don't care whether or not it actually has a disfertility effect or whether or not it actually gets people into work. They don't care about any of the actual outcome of any of these policies. But what they don't want to see is the government to look like it's being permissive of the lifestyle that they think is undeserving of the state funding. And that's where, and if that's the basis for why they believe in these policies, you can't win these people over.
Yeah.
You can't win these people. It's infuriating because I can go to these people. They say, well, we can't be letting the state look like it's encouraging people to have children they can't afford. And I'm like, but that even after the cap was introduced, they were having these children anyway. Good. I'm glad they're being punished. Well, the children are being punished. Don't care. Don't have the children. But the policy didn't stop them having the children. Don't care. And I'm like, once you're at this point, it's impossible to reason with these people.
So I think they should all have to watch that video of that kid saying, we try not to eat a lot. But no, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's wrong. They don't understand how close they are to being in that mess. That's the worst thing.
Yep.
Like you are not that far. Like you lose your job or your hours get cut or any kind of emergency could happen, where you've lost significant amounts of money and you could be in a financial mess. So yeah, I don't. It's
I was going to make a point. Oh yeah, the other one that there's kind of crab bucket mentality politics is the people who will want us to leave the European Convention on Human Rights.
Yeah.
Is because they don't think it'll be used against them. They think that these protections are something that other people have as a privilege and they have as a right. And they think that they can cut off their nose, but they won't spite their face. And they are just morons. They're idiots.
Do you know what it is, right? They went to, is it Costa del Sol in Spain, right? And they spoke to a load of Brexiteers who live over in Spain, ironically. And the only reason they're there is because freedom of movement. Like, they haven't applied for residency or anything like that. And one guy goes, I didn't think they would end it for the proper Europeans. And you're like, bro, what? What does that mean? Like, who are the proper Europeans? That makes no sense. And
exactly.
The level of kind of entitlement to say, oh, we spend lots of money, therefore we should be able to live here, and they're not going to get rid of us. Is like, no, dog. There's rules to this. Like, you don't know about it because of the fact that we are in the EU. We have freedom of movement. Once they got rid of that, it's like if you did not do the right stuff regarding residency, they will kick you out. And the Spanish police, they will not hesitate to kick you out. Do you know what I mean? And that's what happened to a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're so right to call these people entitled. And I'm not going to generalize here, but I think that there is a large cohort of these people who are just boomers, right? And it's this boomer mentality, and it is entitlement. It is entitlement. And they have the nerve. Like, not all of them, obviously, right?
Yeah.
I know the boomers like to get
I think
angry at me when I do
I think
demographic
we
analysis,
gotta.
so I'm going to stipulate that it's clearly not all of them.
I
But
think
there's
it's
a large amount of these people who try and say that Gen Z are entitled for wanting housing and
yeah.
food and energy, and then they say, like, well, I should be entitled to have all of the benefits with none of the downsides after voting to get rid of all of the benefits. And I'm like, you people are like fridge temperature IQ. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's when you talk about boomer mentality, I think it's like it's not them. It's kind of the mentality that some boomers have, and I get why they'd get annoyed, especially well, I guess the ones that kind of lived through the war or fought in the war, they would not be boomers, but I think it's people kind of generalise the over 65s a bit too much. I know there's not a lot of the ones who fought in the war left,
No.
but
Well, the ones who fought in the war were all great. Like the ones who fought in
yeah,
the war
the
were
great
people
generation,
like
the great
Harry Leslie
generation,
Smith, who,
yeah,
yeah, they believe in the world that they built after the war,
yeah,
and the boomers that never lived during the war but were born into the prosperity the Attlee and the post-war social democratic consensus gave them, then voted it away for their own monetary gain, and are then getting angry at us for wanting to have that back. I'm just like, obviously again not all of them, but this is
yeah,
it's this because they were gifted like this kind of gigantic pot of wealth from the public sector sell-off of the 1980s, which could only happen once, right? Once you've sold it, it's very
I
hard to
think
then buy it
I
back.
think it's
And
not just
they've received all this dividend, and basically essentially sold it off for like cheap treats because of
yeah.
neoliberalism and globalization. And now we've had the financial crisis and the pandemic, and these treats are no longer treats anymore. They're just as expensive as they were before globalization happened. And they call us entitled for wanting to have the security that they sold away.
I think the other problem is like they're like, oh, my life. When I was a kid, I didn't have central heating, so it's the mentality of, well, my life was hard, therefore your life should be hard as well. And kind of when
Hmm.
they talk about the interest rate rises, like, oh, it's gone up by 2%. It's like, well, when I was younger, it went up by 5%. Why are you moaning? Is like, you don't understand maths, big man. Like, clearly, you should have stayed in school till you were 18. Rishi Sunak, when he talks about the country being bad at maths, he's talking about you, because those rate
Yes.
rises pushes the amount you pay up significantly compared to what you would have paid back in the 1980s. Back during when the pyramids were built, etc. That's the thing that these people don't get. Like, it's not like
Yeah.
when you were like it's like people that compare like Keir Starmer and like David Cameron's like the world has changed since 1997. Like the world has changed since the 1980s. Like buying a house is ridiculously difficult. The amount of time it takes to save up a deposit. I guarantee you, when they were younger, it didn't take 5 to 10 years to save up for a deposit and aggressive saving. Like when I spoke to one of my old professors, right, I was like, oh, when you guys, back then obviously it's easy to buy houses and stuff, and he was like, well, you guys can get international flights cheap. It's like, I couldn't give a shit, mate, if I can go to Spain for like 30 quid. I would rather have a house I can afford. Do you know what I mean? Because I can go
Yep.
Spain. What if you're lucky? You go 2 weeks, a week in a year. Do you know what I mean? If you have a house, you can live there for the other 51 weeks or 52 weeks. Do you know what I mean?
I mean,
So
also, you can just point to the other countries on the continent. You can point to people who live in Norway and Denmark and go, they have houses and holidays in Spain, right?
yeah,
Though it's possible to have our cake and eat it too. And you guys have scoffed all of the
yeah.
cake.
In the words of Adele, you could have had it all, and we just
Yeah.
have nothing. That's what it feels
Yeah.
like, and I think like
Yeah.
maybe I think if we go on to the next one, I think it's the media. I think the media are the
Yep.
main culprits of
Yep.
this, because they have way too much power. Like when you had like in '97 the Sun what won it, and you're like, fucking hell, like, and fair enough, Murdoch's power has kind of declined massively in this country. I think he's still ridiculously powerful in America because he has Fox News, which is in decline because they've lost their main stars in O'Reilly and Carlson. And they've got more competition now. But I think it's the media, because they just don't know how to ask serious questions. It's like they have a journalism background, but they don't have a politics background. And I think maybe that's the problem, or they just don't bother to prep work. It's like, how do we, like people on YouTube, right, who have no research team? Like the most I have for a research team is people on Discord and Twitter, right? Like people who do this voluntarily. How can we do better research than the people there? And all we do is pull up things like voter records and quotes, like stuff that takes 15, 20 minutes. You have dedicated researchers that can do this stuff. How are you so shit at doing research? Like, how are you not focusing on per capita spending? Do you know what I mean? Like, it don't make sense. Like, how are you getting like mugged off by Tories who do the most basic spin of, we're spending billions on this? Is like, okay, what's that per person? It's like £2.50. Do you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
just don't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like these people who have the most expensive education money can buy, getting like out, out intellectualized
Yeah.
by fucking shitters on YouTube. Um, and yeah, it's absolutely pathetic. Literally, all of the stuff it's basically just browsing Wikipedia while I'm bored at work because I'm hungry for information. I want to imbibe it. Did you see? Speaking of how pathetic our journalism class are, did you
Yeah.
see the BBC's internal report showing that their own journalists know literally fuck all about economics?
Doesn't surprise me at all. I think that came out a while ago, didn't it? It doesn't surprise me at all
It
because
did, it
they
did, about
have
six
they
months
have
ago.
they have journalist backgrounds, which is fine. Um, but if you're not gonna, like it's like if you do journalism, then you go into sports and you have no knowledge about sports. It's like if I
Mm.
go, oh, he
Kind
shot
of
from the three throw
ignorance.
line. How come he gets 3 points instead of two? Which dunking is harder because a guy might block you or whatever. And you're like, why is that worth more? But in football, if they shoot from outside the 18-yard box, it's only worth one goal compared to if they shoot from the 6-yard box, it's worth one goal. Why is that fair? And you're just like, oh fucking hell. I was like, he got fouled in the box. Why it's a penalty? Why is it a penalty? Like they have no idea. Like, and that's the problem. Like,
No.
it's okay to be a journalist and then go into a specific field, like the tech field. But if you know nothing about tech, and you're like, oh, when is
Yeah.
Ultron gonna turn up? You're like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Do you know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
that's the main problem. Is like they're not. They've got
What was,
credentials, but they don't have the right ones. And like, fair enough, I
yeah.
couldn't be a journalist. It will take me a while to learn how to do interviews and double sourcing and going to people and getting their responses and whatever. And it's all boring as hell doing that stuff. I'd have to learn all
Mm.
that stuff. Guarantee it takes me about 3 months to learn that shit. But if they want to learn
Yeah.
about politics, it's going to take them a good year of actually doing a lot of reading and understanding a lot of different things. And they don't have it, and they get spun by the most boring people on this planet. Like, how do you get spun by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves on things? Genuinely.
James Cleverly.
Oh no.
Literally, it's
No.
incredible. It's incredible. What's even worse, right? Like, obviously, there's a large group of these people who just have journalism backgrounds and have no political or economic education whatsoever. There's also like a group of people who have like a small amount of economics education because a load of people are just people who've done PPE at Oxbridge, right?
PPE.
So they've had like a small amount of economics education, and they've all had it done in like the 80s and 90s
Yeah.
when every single academic economist was a monetarist. So all of the like what small economics they have learned is all like neoliberal Chicago school shit, which has basically been proven not to work at this point.
Yeah.
So the only analysis that we get on political economic policy is coming from journalists who only understand this through a right wing lens, and it massively clouds their judgment. Right, where they'll look at where they already have this idea that a government is a household budget, so they can't question it because they don't know. That's all that they've been taught. When you actually look at real academic economists now, like what we were talking about before with the IMF and the World Bank, we're all kind of Keynesian types. Like, and you look at people, and even like centrist, like liberal think tanks, people like the Institute for Fiscal Studies, right? These people are right wing in general usually, and even they critique the conservative economic policy and the economic policy for not prioritizing public investment enough. And I'm like, when you're getting critiqued from the left by the IMF, the World Bank, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies, you done goofed, mate. You done
Yeah.
fucked up.
Yeah, honestly, it's just a lack of, and it's a lack of wanting to learn. I think they're just happy with where they are because they probably make ridiculous money. Let's be honest now. If you work for the BBC, if you're like a lead presenter, you're probably on good money. But that's the problem. I think where they're happy to get spun and like it just doesn't make any sense. Like, how are you happy to be shit at your job? Like, if you're getting mugged off by probably the most boring politicians, the most boring IEA people. Because let's be honest, those IEA people aren't that bright when they push private healthcare and all sorts of other nonsense. And you're like, yeah, and the fact that the hosts in this country, they don't intervene at all, where they're like, oh, these
No.
two people are just debating something. I have no role in
Like
this. It's like,
Joe Coburn will get rolled by like a fucking TikToker on Politics Live from the IAA, and I'm like, this is embarrassing.
yeah,
This is totally the fact that Reen Ibrahim gets like an elevated position to talk of the shit that she
I
says,
know, I know.
like
It's because
continually.
it's because she works for the IEA. That's why the BBC paid
Yeah,
the
yeah.
IEA. They have paid them, and I think they paid them. It's invoices for getting their people on. So what the BBC will do is we need a left wing person. So all right, let's call up Owen Jones or Navarro Media. It's like we need a right wing person. Let's get the IEA. Do you know what I mean? And it's just easy. It's just lazy producers, I think, where they're like, oh, I'm not going to bother trying to set up something that could be intellectually like beneficial. I've got a slot to fill. Let me call in, one person represents one side. You know, like that old, I think it's a really old show called Crossfire, where they had like Tucker Carlson and someone on like the center left who debated, and then Jon Stewart was like, "This show is shit, like stop it," and then they pulled the show because it's just two people who argued and never got anywhere because there was no consensus or no kind of honest debate. It was just two people who's like, you just come up with nonsense points. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I think so. There must be like some kind of like rational, sensible people on like the centre right that they can get on, but they never do. It's always someone from CapEx or from the IAA or
think
from
tanks.
Policy
Yeah.
Exchange or from Conservative Home or from Guido Fawkes. And I'm like, like, and the Conservative Home guy is like the closest that they get to someone who looks like a reasonable, like human being, despite the fact he's a gigantic ghoul, like Henry something. I forget what his name is now, bald guy.
But just yeah, it's. I think with the BBC they just go for easy people. I think with other media outlets they might go for like virality. That's why they have like no disrespect to Maria Perkins who has a massive Twitter following, and I think that's one of the reasons why she's on there. And they have like they'll bring on like Anne Widdecombe who would say the most nonsense things like. No one like who cares about what she has to say about anything. Like who even is she? Like genuine question. Like she was like an MEP for UKIP or something. It's like we've left the EU, so you have no political relevancy whatsoever.
Ben Habib gets lots on Question Time. This man's a lunatic.
And
What
the
the
best thing
fuck
is,
are they
they don't
doing?
call him former like politician Ben Habib. They call him businessman Ben Habib. It's like, what are his business interests? Can we know?
Yeah.
Can we know what he's invested in, or at least have some sort of idea of what he's got investments in? Genuinely,
It's all, and I mean, just like everyone else in Reform UK, it's property, right? Because like the
yeah,
two kind of biggest stars of that party are Richard Tice and Ben Habib, and both of them made their money in property, which of course is why they are very happy to make our economy further right wing to maximise the returns that they can get on their gigantic property portfolios.
yeah. I mean, I'm glad like Navarro are getting a bit more. Well, at least Ash Sarkar and like Grace Blakely are getting on more TV shows, and Ava as well. You know, which is good because they are pretty good. They are pretty good, especially
Yeah, I mean,
against right wingers. They're
I've
pretty
been
used
really
to it.
impressed. The Navarra journalist I've most been impressed with on there, I think I've seen her on BBC like Politics Live like twice, is Dalia Gabrielle. She's so articulate. She's been incredibly impressive. But what's disturbing is that the right wing channels are platforming more lefties than the mainstream media are. It's like the fact that Michael Walker has had and Aaron Bastani have had more screen time in like a year's worth of GB News than they have had in the history of the time on the BBC. Given that Novara's been going on for over a decade now, is embarrassing.
I'd be my only concern with those guys going on there, and I think from some of the bits that I've seen is, if they're just there to criticize Labour and make Labour look shit, which fair enough, but I think there's a time and a place for that. If you're just going on there to be kind of the lefty who criticizes the left or the centre left, I don't think you're doing a good job. It's like that's what Fox do. They bring on like the most pathetic kind of centre left person, and they'll just bully the shit out of him. And go, well, you see, fellow Conservatives, this is what Liberals are really like. They're just pathetic, and you're not doing like us a service. But if you go in there and you fight for what you believe in and say, well, why can't we have these good things, these good policies, and you make the audience think, well, why do we have to have austerity? Do you know what I mean? Why can't we borrow money to invest? If you push these things, your genuine beliefs onto the audience, then you're doing a good thing. If you just go on there and be like, well, folks, Keir Starmer, everything you believe about Keir Starmer is true, and then you don't criticise the Conservative Party, at least straight after, then you're doing nothing. At best, you're saying both sides are equally bad. At worst, you're saying, nope, Starmer shit, and then you kind of ingrain in people's minds that, well, conservatism by
Framing is
default
important.
is right. And that's what I mean. Like, that's why, like, I get them being on there is a good thing to an extent, but if you're not doing the things that you start, that dude who went on Carlson's show, the journalist, was he at Davos and he just fucking pieced everyone up, and he went on Tucker Carlson's show and he just beat the shit out of him. And Tucker Carlson didn't put the show out because it was that bad, but the dude was that smart that he actually recorded the show. And he put it out himself. That guy, like, if you do that stuff, then I can respect it. You won't be brought back on, but I can respect it. Whereas if you're just going on there and you're getting a paycheck and you're just being like, I'm the lefty who will criticize other people on my team or who are near my team, then you're not doing anyone a favor. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think it's difficult.
Like, it's interesting because when I did a whole video about the efficacy of going on places like Talk TV and GB News as a left wing journalist, and there's like two separate Aaron Bastani bits on GB News that are like polar opposites as far as whether they were good appearances or not.
Yeah.
And there's one when Aaron Bastani's on with Frank Furedi on Michelle Dewberry show talking about water privatization, and both of them absolutely smash it out of the park talking
Yeah.
about water privatization was terrible. An entire comment section of GB News viewers all agreeing, saying the water privatization is terrible. I'm like, this is exactly what we should be doing. And then the very next segment I watched from Aaron Bastani on GB News was about the council moving to a 4-day week. And Aaron's point was basically just, they're trying it, let's see if it works. I'm like, we have like reams of evidence showing that it actually increases productivity. And the whole right wing point on this is that people are getting less for their money because they view like hours worked and productivity as being a correlative when they just never have been. And I'm like, no, we have an easy answer to this that all the studies show, and he just completely failed
That's what I mean.
to
Like,
make this point.
if
And so he's essentially attacking a Labour council for doing a good thing
yeah,
without properly defending them.
and then that's what I mean. Like, you got to be, when you have your chance to go on those shows, you got to be real careful about what you say and don't say. And I think if you are one of those people that goes on the show, there's the reason why they bring you on consistently. If you're on there all the time, and it might be that some other people like this kind of debate format where they put, left wing people against right wing people, or it might be the case that you're doing exactly what you want them to do. And I think someone like Bastani, who, I don't watch a ton of his stuff, I'll be honest, but when I see some of those clips on Twitter, I'm just like, bro, like, you're doing exactly, they could not have asked for a better person to do this, because you're not a person of the right wing, you're a person of the left wing saying what they want you to say. Do you know what I mean? And it hits different when you have someone who's on the other side.
In fact, there's like a bunch of grifters on the left in America who've made like a killing doing exactly this. Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, Dave Rubin. Obviously, Dave Rubin just became a conservative, right? He doesn't pretend to be left wing anymore. But people like Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald pretend to be on the left now, when they obviously aren't as far as their rhetoric and positions are concerned. But places like Fox News will use people like Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore to look. These are leftists who agree with us. Leftists in my gigantic quotation marks, right? And that's so damaging to the political landscape. And you're absolutely right. You're
That's
absolutely
what I mean.
right.
So, like if you had the chance to go on there, if I had the chance to go on there, like, what do you think of Starman? I was like, yeah, I have misgivings about him, but do you know who I don't have misgivings about? Who I genuinely know is bad at his job? It's Rishi Sunak, and you flip it on him.
Yeah.
You flip it on Nigel.
Well, you got to say, yeah. I think it's worth pointing out. It's like saying, well, we both agree the Conservative Party are bad. Yes, right. Let's get that out of the way first. The Conservative Party are doing a garbage job. Labour Party are promising the same things as the Conservative Party. Right. You can't critique the Labour Party for being too left wing because they're promising the same stuff that's coming from the Conservative Party. I'm here and I'm saying, well, look, no, I dislike Keir Starmer not because he's bad, like prima facie. He's bad because he is too right wing and he looks too much like Rishi Sunak. Right? These are that's
do you agree austerity is a bad thing? And if the host says no, you'd be like, well, I do, and these are why I think it's a bad thing, and that's why I don't appreciate it being pushed by the two major parties. And you can push against the framing and all the other things. You can hit the ideas rather than attacking the people on it. Do you see what I'm saying? And I think that's the important thing to do if you go on one of these shows. It's very easy to kind of get mugged off and just say, well, I don't like any of them, and therefore, you are right by default because you're pushing one of them. If you see what I'm saying, I think that's the difficulty in that kind of stuff. And so they ask you specific questions. They're always loaded questions, but when you go on these shows, you can set your own framing, especially if they're live. Do you know what I mean? Like you don't have to answer the questions. That's the one thing politicians do well, is you do not answer the question someone asks you. You answer the question you want to be asked. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the difference, and I feel like that's something where people kind of on the left can learn from that. I think to an extent, you don't want to look slimy or anything like that, but what you want to do is make it clear that you don't have to agree with their framing on things. That's the point. And so
Totally.
so I think that's why I would always be nervous about. I think that's why you got to be careful about going too far the other way. I think Marina Perkis, when she debated what's his name, Rees-Mogg, I think she looked very overly aggressive and combative, and he actually came off looking okay.
Terrible, right? Yeah. So many like I mean, not terrible. Maybe terrible's like unfair of me.
Not good.
But
in the words
there
of
were
Trump,
so many people.
Believe me, not good.
Go for it, sorry.
In the words of Trump, not good. Believe me, not good. That was kind of what I got.
Like so many people I saw on like Twitter and YouTube talk about how great she destroyed Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I'm just like, she may have said the things that you wanted her. She may have agreed with you. You fucking agreed the shit out of her, right? But did she say anything that was going to change anybody's minds? No, not
But I
really.
think the way she said it as well, it was, I know you got to be careful because I know that that's one of the things they throw against women, like, oh, they're aggressive and all this other kind of stuff. But I don't think she did it in the best way, and I think like there's a difficulty in winning over people. And I think if you appear as reasonable as possible in the way you say things, which you say like, well, let's look at Brexit, let's look at the damage it's done to the economy, let's look at what you said would happen, and you're trying to argue we didn't go far enough, that's why things aren't working. Does that make sense? It's like the reason he's
Mhm.
dying is because the leeches didn't take out enough blood from the person. If we remove more blood from him, he's going to get better. And you're like, I don't think that's how the world works, pal. So I think that's the fundamental issue. So you got to be careful when you go on these shows. And the worst thing is they invited her back on. So clearly I think they invited her back on. So clearly they got what they wanted out of it.
Yeah.
And I think the worst thing is because of the kind of aggression, it makes Mog look like less of a bad guy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And there's this framing at the moment. Right? It's been a kind of like a framing ever since like 2016 YouTube days.
Mm-hmm.
There's this framing that the idea that people on the left are people who can't take criticism, who don't want to debate, and who rely on feelings over facts, and to get emotional when people disagree with them. And you have to be in the position to negate all of those lines of attack. And Perkis just didn't do that.
Yeah.
I think actually a lot of people on the left over critique Perkis. I actually think that despite her not being in the Corbyn camp, which I will always be, skeptical of people who say that, when she talks about policy, I generally agree with her. Like she was talking about cooperative ownership of companies on Twitter the other day, and I was like, this is like the most important policy that I care about in a kind of macro sense, was like a long-term goal, the creation of like a Schweikart model worker state. This is like an actual socialist policy, not just social democracy, where you manage the capitalist economy in as what were in the interest of workers. And you create worker ownership of the means of production through cooperative ownership, right? That's actual. So when people say Jeremy Corbyn was a socialist, the only actual socialist policy was the inclusive ownership funds, and she was talking about that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, if that's what she's on board with, I'm sold, right? I'm happy
Yeah.
to be on the same side as her. But as far as rhetoric is concerned, I feel like she spends too much time playing to the crowd rather than trying to create a political consensus with people that she disagrees with to try and change their minds.
Yeah, I think it's difficult when you're against someone who is a real scumbag and some of the people that are there. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's why it's a bit difficult to build consensus with people who are dishonest actors. I think especially because the way the phone-in shows, they'll bring in like the most like really really bad people. Where I think you had one lady phoned into one of the BBC phone-in shows, and she was like, "Well, if we let them drown, then maybe there'll be less of them that come here. Talk about channel
Oh, yeah,
crossings."
Nikki Campbell.
I'm like, fucking hell, like you can't win over those people. They're too far gone. Do you know what I mean? I guarantee, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, during when Jewish people were trying to leave Germany, and tried to come here via boats and other things. They'd be like, "Nah, bro, no access for UG. Sorry."
Yeah,
It
well,
wouldn't
that's what the
surprise
Daily
me.
Mail was literally saying, right?
Yeah,
Outside of when they weren't spending time supporting Hitler, they were spending time talking about why we shouldn't be accepting Jewish refugees from the continent.
and I wouldn't be surprised if those were, if some of these people who say this stuff would have been the same people saying that kind of stuff back then. Obviously, they'll deny it because they'll be like, "No, of course not," because they were fleeing genuine persecution. Like, have you met the Taliban? Nah, you haven't, because if you did, you wouldn't be here. These are some of
Yeah.
the worst people on the planet.
Well, that's because when you the segment I did with watching Ava Santina, right? But like, there's this caller calling into the Alexis Conran show about why she thinks that we should try and turn the boats back, and she spent a lot of time trying to argue this kind of quote unquote rational case for the country's too full. We've got a strain on public services.
Hmm.
There's the political issues in Llanelli just down the road from me where these asylum seekers are being held. We need to get control over this, and it sounded reasonable. And Alexis Conran and Ava Santina did a really good job of talking about why the points that she was saying made no sense.
Yeah,
And then she actually afterwards said, I feel like a stranger in my own country. And I'm like, okay, so it's just racism. It's just seeing
yeah,
too many brown people. These are not positions these people hold based upon principle. These are positions that people hold to work back from the fact that they don't want the brown people here. That's it. Then you can't get through to these people.
yeah. It's like the guy who voted Brexit because he saw too many brown faces at Tesco's. Like, well done, mate. The only thing you've done is establish there's going to be more brown people at Tesco's. Like, let's be honest now, because the way immigration has changed. So I don't. Yeah, I think it's difficult when you have to deal with the public, because you do get people, and you don't want to like, if you attack someone who's like a basic member of the public, then you do look like a bit of a dickhead. Like if you're a person in the media doing that, if that makes sense. If you're just attacking like an average person. so it's a bit tricky, but I think you've got to. I haven't watched that segment you're talking about, to be fair. But if you're saying they did a good job, then yeah, I'll take your word for it. But genuinely, I think it's difficult. But but some of the arguments people used are not hard to debunk. Like you got people fleeing from like Iran and stuff. I mean, like
That's the
these are
crazy
not
bit
good
is people keep
countries.
saying, "Well, these aren't genuine refugees." What from Afghanistan and Syria, countries that we've bombed in the last two
Yeah,
decades, like the countries like Iran, a country that's currently going through like a semi-political revolution.
yeah. I think we
Like
saw
countries
it
like
though during the
Eritrea
World
and
Cup.
Sudan that have had
We,
coups recently
we
or
saw it
been in
during the World
wars.
Cup. Like
In Yemen.
you had the footballers protesting about the way women are being treated, and they're like, oh, these are men of fighting age. They should fight. Like you want them to fight the Taliban? The U.S. military struggled against them, and this is the most powerful military force in the world. What do you think this guy's going to do with a bloody AK? You think he's going to beat the Taliban? Really? Fight for his
Well, yeah,
country?
that's that. But the problem is that when they look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Yeah.
Thank you for the resub, Pantomime Horse. Sorry, just bear with us one sec.
Sure. Sure.
Cheers. Yeah, there was when text to speech, sorry, I didn't need to read out the comment. What I was going to say is that it's very easy for them to compartmentalize the Russo-Ukraine war as being a good guy, bad guy, so they can make that argument if they're staying to fight. Who is somebody staying to fight in Syria? There are no unless you're living in northeastern Syria where you're fighting for Rojava. There are no good guys in the Syrian conflict. In the main body of Syria, it
Apart from
is
the
the
Kurds, yeah.
totalitarian Assad government versus the rebels, who I don't have any ideological inclinations for either, and the fucking Islamic State. There is your only choice is to go to Rojava or to flee the country.
And let's not forget that at least Ukraine are getting modern weaponry for the most part. Like the Kurds haven't got anything like that to fight against Assad's military. Do you know what I mean? Like fight against what you gonna do to a bunch of fighter jets and a couple of tanks with your AK-47? You ain't hitting nothing. Let's be honest. Yeah, I just like especially with Afghanistan, like we promised them refuge. Like that was a genuine conflict where you had people who helped the British military, and we told them get here and you get refugee status, and they're like, how are we gonna get here? And they're like, just get here, bro. Like figure it out. And then once they did figure it out, we were like, actually, no, what you're doing is wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if you're a person, because obviously Britain's going to invade other countries in the future or be involved in further military conflicts. Like, if you're a person living in that country, are you going to trust what the British people say about getting refugee status? Like, genuinely? Are you going to be like, this country has a very good record of treating people well who have helped them in conflicts? You're going to be like, no. No, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to be a translator for you because I'll probably get killed at the end of this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's like, and again, as I said, like loads of this stuff, none of this has any thought gone into it. They've just absorbed talking points that the right wing media have used to try and get this kind of tacit justification to work back from their original viewpoint, which is they don't want the brown people in the country. It's very, very simple. The Americans did that when it came to the border crisis on their side. There's a really great discussion. There's a caller, someone who calls into, it might have been the Raw stream, I think it might have been. So they keep trying to get these justifications for the family separation policy at the border, and they just can't justify it because the only point they have is, please, no brown people, thank you. No immigrants, please.
Honestly, it boils down to racism. Like even like some of the Brexiteers who voted for Brexit, right? At the end of the day, it just boils down to racism. They wanted less Eastern Europeans in this country. They wanted less migration, even though they didn't realise we controlled non-EU immigration anyways. And we actually do need immigration to fuel the economy. Like it's no two ways around that one. But yeah, funny tinged. Oh Jesus Christ, that was a moment on TV. That was something. And that lady's back in the Labour Party. Funny tinged. I guess the Labour is a funny tinged red party at the moment. But yeah, I guess if we're going to move on to our last point, which is discussing about new media. Obviously, we are new media, I guess. What are your kind of thoughts on being that, not being part of kind of legacy print? Is the stream down? Hello? I guess I will be talking to myself the next few minutes. I think No Justice's internet is down, maybe? Well, one of my favourite kind of channels, they have the same problem. Oh, I've refreshed. Is it working now? Where they have technical issues all the time, and it's kind of a running joke, and then people start to get annoyed because they've actually got actual producers, and their thing goes down. So we are a part of that now, which is great. I've hit refresh. It's not working. So yeah, I guess maybe I should talk about what my thoughts on new media are. I don't know. Is that what I should do? Uh, is it Joe Over for No Justice's internet connection? I think it is. Oh, that's fun. Hopefully she'll come back on. I can hear people mention xenophobia. It's kind of word for yeah, I guess so. It's a more polite word for bigot, I guess. You know, like the guys I watched in new media a lot were like Americans. Like you had, I don't even know if they can still hear me. I think let's see, she's left the call. Is she going to just rejoin? Ooh, I don't know what to do here, people. Very strange. Don't miss out. People are going to watch something. Actually, what's going on here? One sec. Let me try and call her back. Are you good?
Can you hear me again now?
Yeah. What happened?
My PC just died. It turned off, so I just had to turn my PC back on again.
Oh, I see. That's very strange.
Let me get my stream fired back up again.
Yeah, you want me to give you a minute?
No, yeah. You still live on your end, yeah?
Yeah, should be.
No worries. My earphones also have stopped.
Yeah, I did notice that you're having some issues. Oh, your thing's still.
You need to get some new AirPods. These ones are absolute trash.
Oh,
Trying to get them to charge is an absolute nightmare.
See. Yeah, it's. You got to get headphones. You know, you got to get the big streamer headphones.
Yeah. I can't stand those ones.
Well, they get too hot.
Let me get my camera turned on.
But yeah, it's a awkward moment there. It just went dead.
Yeah, very strange. I think you probably can hear an echo because I've got sound coming out of my speakers now because I've got no like wired headphones.
I can't hear an echo, to be fair, which is good.
Okay, good.
It says don't miss out. People are going to watch something from Hoots. Do you know what that means?
Oh yeah, I had Hoots was live on her end, so I set my stream to raid into hers when mine finished.
Oh, I see. What, you can do that on YouTube? Was it just the Twitch thing?
YouTube as well, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it must be a feature they added.
Yeah, it's called live redirect. If you go into your stream settings,
right. The issue is,
and then you go to your stream settings, then customizations, and then there'll be live redirect. You can choose a live YouTube stream to send them to.
Right. All right. Okay. Because the only person who streams at the same time as me is Phil, and I don't want to do that to my audience. They'd probably lynch me for that. So yeah, that's something. But yeah.
I mean, I might sometimes theoretically be live when you are, but obviously it depends on when I'm working because I sometimes will be working on Saturdays, but even so, they changed my schedule, so sometimes I do work on Sundays now as well. Oh, my ring light's even turned off as well.
Did you have a power out or something?
Must have been a power out. Must have been a.
It sounds it. If all your gears turned off, or like, did you have like a? Have you got like a surge protect on your extension?
We do have a surge protector, yeah. We've got. I mean, I've got the electronic fuse boxes.
Yeah.
But if it's turned back on again now, then it wouldn't have tripped a fuse. It might have been the surge protection on my outlet.
I'd say just check it, just in case, because I don't know if you surged it or not. Like, I'm always worried about my one, just in case.
Sorry, people say they can't hear me. Let me see if they can hear me now. Just bear with us 1 sec.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
I guess I've put back the YouTube stream. It's a shame I had like 50 people watching on YouTube.
Yeah, I saw you had a lot of people. Yeah.
So hopefully they might come back now that I've restarted the stream.
What are your numbers normally like on YouTube? Because yeah, if I had 50 odd, would be very high for me.
Yeah, so YouTube is usually between like 20 and like 40, usually maximum at 40. But obviously, I've got a load of new subscribers from the last couple of
Oh
videos
yeah,
I
yeah,
released.
yeah. That makes sense. Yeah,
So that might have helped my live numbers. And then Twitch, I usually get between 15 and 25,
it's pretty good.
usually. But depends what. Obviously, today on Twitch I got raided by SK the Crusader and Hildebeest,
Hmm.
so I would have got a load of people who were sticking around from the Twitch raid.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty good. Um, let's see. If I refresh it, is it gonna work? Or is it still down?
I wonder if Hoots got the notification that I raided into her. Let me check on her stream.
Hmm. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're back up. Um, so yeah, I guess yeah, it's kind of annoying because we were near the end anyways. Like the stream again, guys. Okay.
Well, there was a bunch of stuff that I wanted to actually cover tonight as well on my own anyway. So I was going to stream after we'd finished, but I wasn't expecting us to speak for like 2 hours because I know you have a much earlier bedtime than I do.
Well, to be fair, I've ruined my sleep schedule in the space of a weekend, so that's it's not very bright of me to do that. But I think I can fix it anyways. Is there anything else you want to discuss about the new media stuff? Did you have anything like any major topics? Because I know like they confirmed Prigozhin is dead, which is crazy. That they basically confirmed it, which we all kind of knew it, but it's kind of like it was kind of outlandish for them just to take out his plane. If you see what I'm saying.
I mean, it's just another person in the long line of people who've been disappeared by Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Not surprised at
I
all.
just, I
I
just
just
find
don't know why Prigozhin did what he did. I don't know why Prigozhin went through all the trouble of like getting this, but like trying to get a coup together and then like chickening out at the last moment, knowing that he was gonna get disappeared eventually later on, regardless.
Yeah, I found it crazy. I think he wanted to take out Shoigu, and then Shoigu managed to get out of that town, Rostov, I think it was, and so
Hmm.
like he decided let's march on Moscow, and it was the whole thing was just nuts, honestly. Like it just didn't make sense, and the fact that he kind of he went back to Russia, or whatever, like I don't know, and then they took out the Wagner group inside Belarus. That was also crazy. Took out the internet connection, and just we don't know if those guys just got disappeared. But the whole thing is just such a mess. It's just the way he did it so brazenly. Like, everyone knows it was him. Like, you can't deny it wasn't him.
Yeah,
Do you know
of
what I mean?
course, yeah. But I think that Putin's so far dug into his mess right now. I don't think A had any choice personally as far as his control of the Russian state
Yeah,
was
mob boss in it.
concerned.
Yeah,
And everyone knows already that this man's a fucking tyrannical despot that will do
yeah,
whatever he wants. The chance of anybody calling out this in a way that would affect his leadership was basically nil at this point anyway. So it was basically a freebie for him.
yeah. I
Although
guess so.
what
Yeah,
I was saying when I was at a gig last night, I was at Rock City last night. And one of the new bands coming up that's playing in Rock City was Bad Manners. I was like, oh, maybe Prigozhin didn't die. Don't know if that's a reference that you get.
no, not really.
I know
Yeah,
Prigozhin looks like the lead singer from
I
Bad
see.
Manners.
I find it funny. People think he's like in disguise somewhere at a beach or something like that. I don't know. My man's dead. Like my man's 100%. My man's dead. Like
Hundred
the
percent.
the day he marched, into Rostov is the day that he signed his death warrant. Especially when people are
Yep.
chanting his name as well.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? It was like it's over for you, chief. Like he should have known it. You've seen this man has
I
a
do.
history of poisoning people, people committing suicide by bullet to the back of the head, falling out of big buildings out of nowhere. Yeah,
I mean, exactly. Like, if he can do what he did to people like Litvinenko in other countries, do you think he was gonna let somebody like Prigozhin get
yeah.
away with it on his own turf? Of course he wasn't.
Especially when he did it in the most brazen way as well. Like it looked like a genuine coup.
Exactly. I mean,
He ran up on him with tanks.
yeah. Once you're at that point, like, why would you not go through with it? It doesn't
Yeah.
make any
I think
sense.
he didn't have the forces at hand. They took out like
Mm.
a few helicopters and stuff, but I think Putin was scared because in Moscow they started digging in. They started like basically like digging up the roads and stuff like that because they thought this man's going to go for it.
Hmm.
And so yeah, they were scared, but he didn't have. I just don't think he had the weaponry to go in. Um, and I think that was the problem. But yeah, you want to discuss new media a bit? Like, is there anyone
Oh, that's right.
discuss like new media a bit? I guess the pros and cons of new media, like being like on YouTube, I guess, or like
I mean, I guess it's kind of been, yeah. I mean, the problem that we have is that how we control how what counts as disinformation now is really difficult, because basically the only way that you debunk new media is with other new media, and this kind of this kind of creation of, we've got these kind of ideological echo chambers that never interact regardless. And that's the problem with new media. But the issue that we have in the UK is that I think it's a necessary evil, because our old media is just so fucking
Yeah.
horrendous. It's so bad. The I At least when people are lying through their teeth on new media, there's not this kind of perceived sense of legitimacy, like, because, like, take for example the Times, right? The Times is a newspaper. This pumps out as much nonsense bullshit as the Daily Mail does, but because it's the Times, because it's the paper of record, despite being a Murdoch propaganda factory, it has this sense of authenticity, this sense of kind of respectability that it just doesn't fucking deserve.
Yeah, no, no. It's a higher tier of propaganda though. To be fair, it's they do
Mhm.
have stuff like I bought my house at age 21. It's like how'd you get it? It's like my dad gave me a massive paid my deposit, and you're
A
just
small
like,
loan of $1 million.
yeah, pretty much. You might as well just say that, to be honest. There is that, and they do like they're like the only good thing they do is some of the finance stuff. Some of the finance stuff can be quite helpful when you're trying to understand like stuff going on in the city, but aside from that, it's pretty trash. Or maybe I'm thinking of the Telegraph. No, I'm thinking of the Telegraph actually. The Times. It's very easy to confuse the two. I think the Times did some good investigative journalism, like on Johnson missing Cobra meetings and stuff. So they can do some decent stuff, some decent things here and there. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think the Mail is just pure garbage propaganda, like like agitprop kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference I'd put it at. I don't, yeah, but I think like you say, with old media, I think it's too based around a boring format of panel things and a host that does an awful job, so you can like say the most nonsense things possible. Like sometimes you'll get called out, like when like did you see Johnny Mercer's performance a couple of weeks ago? I covered it in a few videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, it's like, oh, we brought in the minimum wage, and even Fiona Bruce was like, nah, bruv, not having that. And he was like, he got put in his box, but you need to see a lot more of it, a lot more of hosts actually calling people out on lies that they say, and there's not a lot of it. That's the problem I think that we have, and I think it's just a stale format of left wing person, right wing person, or like centrist kind of people, two politicians, maybe three, and it's like
Hmm.
I've seen this show last week.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Also, by the way, thank you, James, for the internet for the raid. Welcome, raiders. Please refresh your screens. Welcome, welcome, welcome. 100 people as well. That's a big, big raid. Thank you.
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. The format of these shows is pretty rubbish as well.
Yeah, I
Um,
would rather have a host that goes like kind of not like after people for the sake of it, but just says like what do you mean by that, or can you explain this point properly, things like that, or what you're saying is nonsense. Like if they push like kind of tax cuts for the rich, it's like, well, we've seen that before. It doesn't add anything to the economy. Like we saw that in America. All they did was stock buybacks. Do you know what I mean? And so like how does that help anyone?
exactly, 100%, 100%. And I think there's this problem. I think Emily Maitlis made this point as well when she was discussing like the way we discussed the run up to the Brexit referendum, where there's this kind of perceived levels of balance that
Mm-hmm.
don't make any sense, where they feel like there has to be a representative of both sides of any
Yeah,
discussion, regardless of the veracity of any of the claims or the positions that they hold, because they can't be seen to be unbalanced when your balances should be determined by what is rational and what is true, rather than what side of the debate people are on. Where I think Rufus Hound made this point fun on a Charlie Brooker program I was listening to on Radio 4, sorry, and he was like, well, no, if even if there's something like a settled idea, like you can have a flat earth debate where
yeah.
if one part's half of the debate is completely mental, people will think, oh, maybe the truth is somewhere in between. Like, even remember the Nick Griffin debate on Question Time when
Oh
he
yeah.
got fucking clowned on by the entire panel, but just the perceived legitimacy being invited on the panel
Just
gave
being
him in
there.
the
Yeah.
first place improved the BNP's overall membership and voting record at the
Because you
time.
platformed
And
him. You platformed him.
yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly. And Rufus Hound makes this point like, you can have the dumbest debate possible, right? Like, the motion can be, I think you should inhale a drain pipe full of bees at breakfast every day. Then on one side of the debate, you have a professor emeritus of human dietary nutrition who says, no, you shouldn't inhale any bees with breakfast in the morning. And on the other side, you have Sir Albert Moonhowler of the lunatic asylum on here saying absolutely it's fantastic to inhale a drain pipe full of bees with breakfast every morning. And the audience were watching going, well, clearly, if there's a debate about it,
Yeah.
some of the truth must be somewhere in the middle. So I guess I'll just eat a handful of live bees with breakfast
Yeah,
every morning.
yeah, no, I
And that's
agree
what
with
does
that.
the discourse.
I think that's the problem. Yeah, it's just the way it's just set up is just so silly. And like some of the stuff they got away with, like you know when like even some of the stuff I kind of felt for, like because it's not too hard when the host doesn't do a good job. You know, like during one of the Brexit, one of the things Mog was on where he talked about like GATT 24, which isn't that relevant anyways. It's like if two countries are coming up with a trade agreement, then they can kind of get rid of some of their trade rules for other WTO members as they're building up to it. So he was like a transition period would be really easy, and like we can have a long transition period if that makes sense until we come up with an agreement. It's like that's fundamentally untrue. And we saw, firsthand that was fundamentally untrue. But the host did nothing, and like the thing is, they use the same talking points in different debates. So if the host watched one of the debates, they could see like, oh, he's going to say this, I can counter with this. Do you know what I mean? And they just don't do it. Like
No.
the only guy I can give credit to, like, or one of the few people you can give credit to is Andrew Marr, where when he left the BBC, he does a much better job on LBC. He's still kind of, I think his ideals are probably centre right, and you can kind of tell by some of the stuff he says, or maybe centre left. But honestly, like he's the only, like, he's at least calling people out and like in interviews and stuff. Whereas before when he's on the BBC, they could say the most like stupid stuff, like the Martians are going to invade Earth. He's like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Moving on to the next point. Like it's just so stale, because
Banal,
they
yeah.
don't do anything. Like the journalists and stuff. Even like I watched John Sopel on LBC where he was attacking. I can't remember the lady's name. She's like one of the union reps for like
So Grady.
universe.
I saw a
Yeah,
segment about it, yeah.
yeah. It's the most pathetic piece of journalism I have ever seen in my life. He's
Some
attacking a
people say, right, it's the equivalent of adverts saying
yeah.
our anti-aging cream helps against the signs of aging. This kind of non-committal phrase that gives the point that's being made more legitimacy than it deserves. Where they say, I found this tweet or this Facebook comment that says this thing. What's your response to that? Well, why the fuck should I respond to some fucking nut bar on Facebook? Some
That's the thing.
Facebook boomer
And
who gives a shit what they think.
I don't know if you watched my video on it, but it's one of the journalism tricks of you'll find someone who agrees with roughly what you're saying and you quote that person. So it doesn't look like I didn't say it. Johnny 555 70-figure numbers said this. What do you make of this? And it's like Stevie, Stevie was saying like, oh, now because of you, I can't get my papers marked and whatever. And you're like, it's not me saying that. These are people who may or may not exist in real life have said these things. And he kept going after her. He never addressed anything that she actually said, and he just kept going after her. And I'm like, unless he's got like a kid in university who's not having their papers marked or something, what the fuck is his problem? Do you know what I mean? And it's an LBC thing. I realised like you had Sangeeta, she attacked one of the union representatives for I think nurses, saying, "Oh, last week people have died, in hospital or whatever because they haven't been seen. Why do you think you should go on strike?" And I'm like, "You've just answered your question. You've literally answered your question without even realizing it. Like, how are you this dense?" You had Lewis Goodall going after Annalise Dodds, who I felt really bad for in that interview, saying, "Why don't you just join the single market?" I'm like, Lewis, mate, we can't. If you actually did some reading on it, you learn that. It's not very hard to figure out. Took me about half hour of research to understand it. You have a research team, I'm assuming, at LBC. Maybe they can't afford one. Maybe Nick Ferrari and James O'Brien took all the money from LBC. They can't budget a research team. I don't know. But you could have Googled this very easily.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, Donny Marco makes a good point in chat as well that this is only this. I mean, sometimes happens to the right, but it mostly only happens to left-wing points. Right-wing points just go completely unchallenged for like huge periods of time. I think one of the most egregious examples of this is that there was just no even tacit challenge to the idea that immigration was a bad thing for the entirety of the period up to 2016. Right? No one ever came on to talk about the idea that, actually, in fact, immigrant workforces coming over here weren't driving down wages. That was supply side labour market reform from the Conservative government, deliberately trying to drive down wages to benefit their friends in the city and benefit the ownership class that
It
they
wouldn't
are
be just
elected
the
to
Tories, it'd be
represent
Labour
as
as
the
well. Like,
18 for capital.
it's one of the things like Tony Blair I think realised as well. Like, you need people to come in to do these jobs, whether there's, you want to call them low skilled or whatever, which I still think is nonsense. But we needed a lot of people to come in to do these jobs to to push the economy. Because if you don't have the workforce like we don't have now, you get stuck. Because if a business says, oh well, I want to expand, I need to employ 15 more people, where they're going to get these 15 people from, given that unemployment's like around 3%. So you're going
Yeah.
to struggle to expand. That's one of the problems.
And it's really screwed over the Conservative Party because they kept running on the we anti-immigration, anti-immigration. Did they ever get immigration down? Of course they fucking
No.
didn't, because they knew that if they didn't, they would end up in like a recessionary economy.
Yeah. That's one of the things that they don't get. Like, yes, pay rises are important. We do need that, but it's got the government can mandate things like pay rises, and they should really have done so. But one of the problems is that we still need more people to come in. Like, we have an imbalanced, an aging population, and so
Mm,
instead of trying to force people with kind of disabilities and other things that physically cannot work, let's be honest, that physically cannot work or mentally cannot work, instead of trying to force them into employment and make their lives miserable and cause all sorts of other problems down the line, instead they're like, oh, we could bring people in to do it. It's like, oh, we don't want like Oleg or someone from Eastern Europe, or Sanjay from like Asia or something like that, or people from Africa. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so how do you solve this problem then? Because you don't want to give people pay rise. Remember, you can't ask for pay rise because you're causing inflation if you do that. That's what Andrew Bailey says. So what
I
other
mean,
choice do you
even
have?
back then, even back then, the line wasn't even the idea that it could cause inflation. There was just no ability for anybody to be able to bargain because the unions had been completely kneecapped
Yep.
by by labour market reforms, and people were too busy blaming immigrants rather than blaming bosses. It happened actually. So many things got blamed on the European Union as well throughout
Yep.
this period, and there was no kind of official challenge to
Yeah.
this line that the EU were to blame for these things,
The Remain
because
campaign were
so much of
pathetic.
what the damage that was done to the economic life of people in this country, like things like deindustrialization, the lack of an industrial strategy from both Conservative and Labour governments, the driving down of wages, the underinvestment in infrastructure and housing, all of these things were blamed on the European Union and immigration, when this was just deliberate policy that was able to be palmed off onto this scapegoated persona non grata in the form of people coming over. And that was the basis of the desire to leave the European Union, because
Yeah.
people had been sold the idea that the EU were to blame for this when they weren't.
It's honestly the easiest trick to pull on people, especially in this country, is to blame immigrants, because people still have that empire kind of mentality of
Yeah.
we're better than everyone else, and the idea that we can just get people who are unemployed and whatever to do the jobs here, and it's like, where are they then? Why are they? Why is there fruit rotting in the field? Why can't old people get looked after? Where are these
We
people
don't
that
have
were
this.
suddenly going to appear? Why
Also, in
why
fact,
don't
we
we
don't
have
have
doctors and nurses?
either.
Where are these people to fill up these
The thing is,
roles?
like, there are people on, like, on the media, in the press, in the political class, and as part of the popular and part of the population as well, are all saying, well, yeah, as you say, we can just get British people to do these jobs. Whilst at the same time, the Conservative Party are boasting about how unemployment is the lowest it's
Yep.
been since 1978. Like, we're at record low unemployment. Where there are no people to the job. In fact, we're below the Nauru as far as Andrew Bailey is concerned. So unemployment is so low that it's causing inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying as well, actually, we can get even more people into work,
That's why
right?
it's people that have that physically can't work, or people that have children and can't afford childcare. That's what they want next.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what they want. They want that 3% or whatever it is, and the people that are on disability, are on personal independence and things like that. They want to force them into work. That's what I mean. Like, and like I think talking about kind of going back to new media, I think it is a net benefit, even though there is a lot more misinformation out there. That's problematic, but at least you can find the correct answers. It's difficult because of algorithms and other things, but at least you can find the answers. You can find decent channels, because legacy media is so bad that it's
yeah.
gotten to the point where you can get people who literally just have a microphone and a computer who can do better analysis than people who have private education, have access to actual research teams, because they refuse to do their job properly, or they're just so inept that they can get rolled by some of the most stupid people that have been elected into office ever.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a really damning indictment on our media class, because obviously us on YouTube, we don't need to care about access. We can do
Yeah,
whatever we want. It's why I think that Mick Lynch was somebody who did so well in the public eye in the media, because he's not somebody who's angling for a future media career.
yeah,
He's not there to try and make sure that he can be pally pally with the journalists for future media appearances. He is there for one thing and one thing only, and that's to represent the interests of the members who elected him into the position of general secretary in the first place. So he can go on Newsnight across the table from Chris Philp and say, "You're a fucking liar, mate.
yeah.
Stop
And
lying."
I
Said
think
called him a liar 15 times, right?
I think the other thing is there are the answers to everything they're saying, like Mick Lynch and what was her name, Joe Grady, the one who was on with Sobel. It's so easy to answer whatever accusations I put them is. These companies, these universities are making enormous amounts of profits, have huge reserves, and what we are asking is to be compensated for the work we are doing. And it's very hard to argue. If you argue these companies are making huge losses, then you can try and argue, oh, they can't afford it. But if they're making massive amounts of profit, right, year on year, have huge cash reserves, and you're saying you cannot pay the people who are helping you to generate the income or are generating it, because let's be honest now, you don't go to universities for the buildings, you go there for the professors, and you learn that the hard way because they managed to do it remotely during COVID. You had like people in their houses teaching classes to people for the most part, especially ones doing arts degrees and things like that. I guess if you have something that requires practical work, then you can't do it. That obviously makes sense. But for the most part, the ones doing kind of essay based degrees and things like that, do you know what I mean? Like they were being taught from home. So they're the ones who generate the wealth, because I don't go to the vice chancellor when I have questions about my essay. I went to my professors because they're the ones who are actually there day in day out. Do you know what I mean? So they are paying a large part in generating the wealth, and so why should they not get paid more? Why shouldn't they have secure employment rather than having it from October to July contracts? It should be year out, because they do work year out.
It all goes back to this point that you made before about like these framings about the people who do the work is so important. And obviously, it was in our tax conversation before. It's this kind of sneaking in this kind of pseudo Marxist analysis about people who make money by working, people who make money by owning, or make money by managing, right? And making these distinctions for people so they can understand who makes the decisions and when. And Mick Lynch was really good. Like there's a line he had when he was being interviewed by Sophie Ridge on Sky News at the start of like the strike action last year, where he was saying, the people of the country who create the wealth of our civilization, the people that we are as the trade unions are representing. There's a really strong line to be taken to people to try and see whose side people should be on, because that's true, right? The people
Yeah.
who are productive, who are the base of productivity are the people who generate the wealth that we live on. People who invest the capital, they are taking the wealth that's been generated by other people and using it to make money off of having money.
Yeah, it's just nuts, especially when they tried to clown him the other day, saying, "Oh, it looks like from what we heard, you ran into some travel disruption." He was like, "No," and he was like, "Oh, that's what I heard." It's like, "No," and you just look stupid. Like, I do feel bad for the people that have been affected by the strikes, and those are people can't get to work and things like that. It's an absolute disaster. But the people who can end this strike are the government and the ones who run the train services. And from the sounds of it, the train services want to come to some sort of resolution, but the government aren't allowing it to happen. That's the problem. And I think one of the other problems is, like, if the government say to the railway workers, you can get an 8% pay increase, you can have other public sector workers going, why can't I get 8%? And I think that's one of the things the government really did want to avoid.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, like, when you withdraw services, especially things that are crucial, like railways, like healthcare, like education, because teachers going on strike fucks over so many people.
Yeah, it
Because
does. It does.
you got to take a day off work to look after your kids. If your thing gets cancelled, it's very easy to get annoyed at teachers or doctors or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, if they leave this industry, who's going to look at? Who's going to educate your kid? Who's going to look after you when you're sick? There's going to be no one. And that's the thing that people don't understand, and that's the thing the media needs to do a better job of, because staff retention in this country is in the toilet. And
Yeah, it really is.
and the thing that people don't realize is these healthcare workers, because they have credentials in a country that is respected, they can go abroad. Do you know what I mean? They can go to the Middle East, they can go to Australia, they can go to New Zealand, they could probably go to the USA or other, kind of European countries as well, because they will happily take them. Medical professionals, teachers, that kind of stuff, because they have credentials that are transferable to other countries. So long as they can learn the language to a decent extent, they will find employment elsewhere.
Exactly, 100%. And we've spent all of this money and capital and time and public resources educating these people whilst they were children and whilst they were young adults, right? All of this state investment in future productive capacity of the economy, and then all that productive capacity is then going to Australia. Like it's
Yeah.
the dumbest macroeconomic policy that you could possibly think of.
And and,
Um,
and that's the thing, like,
and
and that's
it's
the
worth
conversation. Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say as well. I think with when we're looking at the media framing on this, is that it's the fact that the media have just failed in general with the wave of strike action to properly frame it as the government's fault. One of the biggest single pieces of information from the entirety of the rail strikes is the fact that the government's been indemnifying
Yeah.
the
Railway
rail
companies.
delivery group,
Yeah.
right? These people are not negotiating from a sincere place because they do not suffer any financial loss from strike action. Why do you think the RMT and ASLEF have been forced to target events happening, right? Like whatever it might be, like Commonwealth Games, whatever it might be, FA Cup final. Because we have to attack cultural institutions because otherwise no one will listen to us. Because they actually managed to get a deal with National Rail
Yeah.
because National Rail, they had, because National Rail is part of the infrastructure, National Rail had to come to the table even if they were being indemnified because the potential for there to be dangerous things happening if there weren't people doing maintenance on the line is really, really bad. So they had to come to the
Yeah.
table.
It's
But Rail
dangerous.
Delivery Group, who are
They,
just essentially just scalpers palming money off of the top of the
we saw that
industry, why
in
the fuck
East
should they
Palestine.
negotiate when they're being indemnified?
We saw that recently in East Palestine. That train crashed. A massive chemical. I think a ton of chemicals went into the air. Like that shit's so dangerous. Just to quickly answer Donnie Mercow's question. Sophie Ridge doesn't have a Sunday show anymore. It's Trevor Phillips has taken
Yeah.
over. I think his name is, which is unfortunate because I think that geezer's he's a bit crap. Like I think she's better than him. Honestly, I think she does a better job. So it's kind of tragic
Really?
she's lost her Sunday
I mean,
show.
I actually think Trevor Phillips does a better job of interviewing people and challenging their positions. I just don't like him because he's a massive fucking Islamophobe.
I don't know. Like I've seen like the problem is the bits I've seen from Sophie Ridge. I don't know if like I just see the better parts of the interview she does, or maybe I've seen ones that I don't know. From what I've seen, she did a good job. Like in the clips I've seen, like she gave like during the the Stormont kind of closures, like when it was big news stories, she gave the leaders of Sinn Féin a lot of time to actually talk and kind of explain the situation in Northern Ireland. Whereas like I think if you got like other kind of British media people to do that, they'd be like, oh no, Sinn Féin, we're not going to give them a chance because they want Irish unification. So from what I've seen of her, she seems like she does, as far as British journalists go, and the bar is very low. The bar is so low that I've jumped over it many times. Um, I think she did an okay job. Like
Okay,
good to
that's probably
okay.
a fair assessment then, yeah. But for what it's worth, if you do want more Sophie Ridge content when the next season of political analysis starts, because it's fucking The Wire at this point,
Yeah.
just new season of Breaking Bad coming out because it's all political theatre, especially the fucking blue team, red team, fucking
Yeah.
liberals who view it all like a spectator sport. They're happy for it to be another season. But yeah,
Would
that's
you?
when that restarts when Parliament's back in session.
Yeah.
Sophie Ridge is going to have her own 7 p.m. show weekdays every day.
Oh, is that confirmed?
So
Every day. That's yeah. Are you saying you are the one who knocks? Sorry, I watched that clip the other day. It made me laugh so much. It's like I am not in danger. I am the danger. Like this man wants to be Batman so bad. but but I can imagine Batman saying that exact line to to Superman or something like that. It'd be so funny.
yeah.
But I do. The thing is, they do these interview shows, which obviously we're never going to be able to interview politicians. Like even someone like Max or Phil, they will struggle to get a politician on their show because it's YouTube. It's like they're like that's the joke thing my kids watch. So like at least they do get politicians on, but like when they do a bad job, it's like you could do better, and here's how. And I guess it's easier for us because we're not in a live situation. But again, like surely you got to have follow up questions, and you got to have some idea of what they're going to answer with. Because politicians are very boring, and they
Yeah.
answer the same answers generally.
Yeah. What is good about new media specifically? I know this is something that we do specifically in
Yeah,
our roles as content creators, because we're doing the React Andy style content. Is that what's good about new media is that when we have a media ecosystem that is full of interviewers who don't interview their politicians properly, being able to be someone who reacts to those interviews to say why the politicians are wrong, but also why the journalists are bad. That's a really important thing that we're now able to do with new media.
yeah. I think that's true, and I think it gives people alternatives. They're not always the best alternatives. Like you do for every, I want to say for every Carl Kalinske, you get Jimmy Dore, but Carl's been pretty shit for a while as well. But you do get better options than Laura Koonsberg and Robert Peston, who are pretty garbage. I'll be honest, 100%. Like these are client journalists who, the fact that they had a direct line to Dominic Cummings and they would say anything that Dominic Cummings would, tell them, or is like you say these things without questioning anything he
Yeah.
says. Really,
Mm.
like, is that your job as a journalist? Because you're just a messenger at that point. You are the medium of a spin doctor, really. And I think we do give people more options. I think the algorithms kind of do fuck us over sometimes, or a lot of the time.
Hmm.
But at least I think it's just a better format, and I think because we can kind of engage with people a lot easier because we have comment sections and people can give us direct feedback even though it's not always the best.
Hmm.
It's easier for us, if that makes sense. Whereas if you work for a media outlet, you have an editor who's going to be on you for saying certain things or being too aggressive and things like that. So I think it does help get people information out. I just wish we got to a point where we could do more interviews, and I'd be open to interviewing someone from the Green Party. I'm sure you would be as well.
Yeah.
And obviously not being too friendly with them because you do get personal bias in there. That's the thing that I do worry about the most,
Mm.
of being in a position where I don't want to criticize someone because I know them personally.
Yeah.
That's the problem, and I think that some of the media people in America have fallen for that a bit. But I think on the whole, I think new media is a good thing given how shit legacy media is and how kind of bad things have just gotten with misinformation, anyways. Do you know what I
I
mean?
think
Like
that's very true.
it's
It's very
very easy
true.
to spread misinformation, like especially because of the internet. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, if we didn't exist, like if new media didn't exist, people that have YouTube, Twitch channels, or whatever that did media, like it'd be very easy for them to spread misinformation on the internet, and they did, to be fair, like Cambridge Analytica and all these groups that just data mine the shit out of people. It was very easy for them to spread misinformation. And there was nothing
Mm.
combating it. Like the Remain campaign was so bad, so bad. Um,
I
they,
mean, speaking of 2016 and campaigns with Cambridge Analytica, I mean, like, it's awful. It's like Nazi architecture. It's like it's lovely to look at, but it's deep down, it's fucking abominable. Is what the Trump campaign did in
yeah,
2016 with like hyper targeted adverts. They had this
mhm,
whole data team of people trying to cultivate these little online echo chamber groups of people with certain set of political opinions from certain places, specifically narrowing down on things that can create this alternate reality for these people, which was incredibly obviously dangerous for democracy, but it was clearly a very winning strategy for them.
yeah. No, it was just that they figured out demographics, and I think they got it down to not to a T, but pretty close to it, like how people thought and what specific videos they could send to those people to
Hmm.
convince them not to vote or to vote in a specific way. And I think it is dangerous because it's very easy to fall victim to it, especially because Elon's broken the Twitter algorithm completely. So I keep seeing really weird stuff on my Twitter feed, and so I think it'll be easier for those kind of people to break into the algorithms.
Hmm.
That's one of the major problems I have.
Yeah.
I guess. And like, I guess one of the positives of Twitter, at least you can clown politicians. Like, when Labour put that video out the other day of that dude saying, "Oh, Labour are going to achieve the highest growth in the G7." Is like, how are you going to achieve that, little bro? It puts us in direct contact with politicians, which I think it's a good thing, even though they can just
Hmm.
block us and ignore us. Like, it's much more difficult to do that through the internet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the new media, I think, is positive. I just wish it was easier to kind of get politicians on or other people like that, because if they came onto our shows, it'd be Joe over for them, genuinely.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. I absolutely agree. So tell you what's been an interesting platform to look at for political discussion.
Don't
It's
say TikTok.
TikTok.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, TikTok's been really interesting to look at
Mm,
because the duet and stitch features allow content to spread um, through criticism, right?
mhm,
And that if you disagree with someone's take, right, instead of it being getting lost in a sea of comment sections, you can pick up your phone, watch the content, press stitch, film yourself responding to, and it's immediately there on the internet. That's a really interesting feature that I think is incredibly for an application that was made for kids to lip sync to pop songs
mhm.
has led to some of the most kind of actually sane political analysis that I've seen on many platforms. The problem with TikTok is that the algorithm is fucked. Is completely fucked because it's like the kind of Twitter, Facebook echo chamber system, but on like gigantic steroids, and it is like a speed run of radicalization. There's been people who've done like tests on the TikTok algorithm, by like watching like I don't know a Jordan Peterson or a Ben Shapiro video, and how long it takes you to go down to Andrew Tate and Nick
No, no.
Fuentes and Matt Walsh and all of these real
How quick is
extreme
it?
types of people, and how quickly it'll cultivate you only seeing this. So your feed is just a constant feedback loop of people agreeing with you, agreeing with the last person, and then steadily more and more extreme the further you go.
What? How quick is it? How quick is it to fall into that rabbit hole then?
I forget exactly what they said. Someone did it on TikTok and then they said their results about it, but I think it was quicker than is comfortable.
Because
How quickly it
I
did
know
that.
YouTube has YouTube had a lot of issues. Like I remember one guy said he watched like David Pakman on Joe Rogan, and instead of promoting kind of David Pakman stuff and Joe Rogan stuff, it just promoted Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty difficult.
I mean,
The
literally, YouTube realized that's what was happening, and they deliberately changed their algorithm, and they even boosted certain YouTubers artificially to try and stop this. I know Bo of the Fifth Column, because he had this kind of like Southern American kind of look about him, which would be endearing to people who had those kind of conservative political beliefs. But he was like a left wing anarchist type
yeah,
person. His channel got artificially boosted in the YouTube algorithm as like a de-radicalization tool because they realized what they were cultivating and they didn't like it. Which is obviously, I'm glad these people were radicalized, but it just shows you how powerful these platforms and algorithms
yeah,
are. That Susan Wojcicki or someone in her close vicinity can say, "This is bad. I'm going to. I can have control over the discourse with the press of a button."
yeah.
That's dangerous.
It is dangerous, yeah, and I think they need to be very careful with these algorithms because even in my feed, like I see like Andrew Tate TikToks because they do. He's built like a pyramid scheme where he uses a lot of affiliate marketing,
Hmm.
and so these guys who push the shots actually do get benefits from it. And so that's one of the things that YouTube does need to be a bit more careful of because I think affiliate marketing should still be classed as advertising, right? But
Hmm.
YouTube doesn't do anything about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's one of the problems. But yeah, I think on the whole it has been positive because, but it's tricky, because you do get a lot of dodgy actors that have been pushed. Tate and other people. I still don't get people's obsession with Andrew Tate because he wasn't even that good a kickboxer as well. When he's like he's a world champion, it's like the world champion of what? Like I could set up my own kind of fight organization, say and beat some guy for street and be like I'm a world champion. Do you know what I mean? So like I genuinely don't get people's obsession with him. But I guess when you push stuff like believe in yourself and people are like, oh yeah, I guess I should do that. You're a genius. Things like that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not too hard to figure it out. I think there's a big crisis of male confidence, honestly, a big crisis in that, and I think it's going to keep unfolding over the next kind of decade. We're already seeing that with the
Mm.
rise of incel culture, and I think one
The
of the problems is,
manosphere resurgence. Yeah.
and I think one of the problems is like the people that exist in that area of new media are pretty dangerous, especially when they push like the stuff that people want to hear, like go to the gym, make money, you'll get women and cars and whatever. It's much easier than you know than not having. Do you know what I mean? Like, 'cause I think people on the left don't really have an answer for that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? That's the problem. Like, you can't just say to someone get Riz because it's not that easy. do,
Yeah.
you, do you know what I mean? So I don't know.
I
Like,
think what's happened with a lot of these platforms is that they've pivoted, right? They've pivoted from showing content that's good, that is good content, to whatever content is best for their metrics, right? 'Cause all of these have gone to shareholders. They're all public company,
mm-hmm,
so the only thing that they can do is try and increase their market share and b the share price. So all they've evolved into is these machines for pumping out content that is good for advertisers and
yeah,
good for money. So the one thing that's happened on TikTok is that they've they will continually artificially promote people who have paid promotions for the TikTok shop, and it's just ruining the content for everybody. Like Facebook was doing this for a very long time as
yep,
well, where it was just continually showing you things from specific Facebook pages that they know are viral content that
day one,
they've already had paid for Facebook advertising is try and
yeah.
feed this feedback loop to be able to gain revenue rather than have a good user experience. It's why Elon's ruining Twitter.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think the algorithms are a major problem, and because no one really knows how they work. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Susan Wozniak, when she was there, she actually really understood how it worked. Um, that's one of the major problems. Like Twitter, the Twitter algorithm is completely gone. It's completely
Yeah.
shot. Facebook is built on engagement, so it's not about how many likes you get; it's about how many comments. So if you write something
Mm,
stupid and you get a lot of replies, Facebook will boost it.
mm,
And I'm pretty sure it still works that way, which is quite stupid, because it's not a good way to do discourse with people.
mm. I need to
And
do more advertising on Facebook. I need to put my. I don't put enough of my own content on Facebook. Mostly, I feel like
like,
it's a platform that interact with people. Still use it. People. I don't. I
yeah,
never use Facebook anymore. But
I'm a bit reluctant because I still know people on there. That's the problem, and I don't like you kind of go into kind of the personal life bit, which is always a bit dangerous. Because I was surprised if I doubt a lot of my friends actually know I do YouTube, honestly, because I don't tell them. Only a few of them know. Do you know what I mean? So I'm always a bit reluctant because it is your personal life. Facebook, that's the difference between that and Twitter. Like, if I think like I don't know how many Twitter followers I have. Like, I think 100 or something like that. I probably know 20 of them. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't know most of them, to be honest.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? That's the difference. So that's why I'm a bit reluctant to go on Facebook. I think for you as well, because you're on camera, it's a bit more risky because these people might know you in real life. Um,
yeah.
but
I mean,
but
this is basically everyone knows why I do this. But basically already all completely intertwined with my personal life anyway. So
oh, I see.
no harm, no foul, as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned. I
not
feel
for
like
me.
once you've got your face on camera, it's very difficult for you to be able to run from that.
Yeah, that's why I'm not on camera. It's one of the reasons, anyways. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, the only time you see me on camera is Sunday roast because it'll be weird if I'm the only person who's like not on camera and everyone else is. It's like so that's yeah, they kind of jengered me there, but yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's like I'm always reluctant for it to become like my life, if that makes sense. Because I guess the goal for probably both of us would be to make this kind of a full time gig, but at the same time, like it can consume your life.
Yeah, 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 for
Um,
sure, for sure. But I mean, spending my time arguing about politics is what I do regardless anyway,
yeah,
right?
that's my problem as
Um,
well.
so turning it into a career where I can make money talking about politics and the thing that I do is something obviously be something I'd be very happy with doing at the moment because I don't know my life I work in a call center and it's so miserable. Like
Hmm.
there are multiple occasions in my vanilla job where I have to go into the other room and scream into the void because I just hate what I do. I hate the job so much. Luckily, I have an interview for somewhere else on
Yeah,
Thursday,
good luck
so
with that.
job with the council, which hopefully, fingers crossed. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, honestly, like my job's quite mundane as well. It's not that bad, but it can be a bit frustrating at times. But yeah, you are right. I think the problem is I would talk to anyone. Like I talk to random people on the street about this stuff. That's the problem I have.
Mhm.
That's why I said to my friend years ago, like I wish I did something else like collecting stamps, because at least people know I'm a weirdo and a nerd. But it wouldn't be as miserable as doing this, because covering politics, especially in Britain, is the most miserable thing ever. Um,
I've kind of, I've kind of detached myself, right? I have, but there was a point where I was just, it absolutely drove me insane about 6 or 8 months ago. But since what's happened with the Labour, I've just kind of checked out
yeah,
of trying to care. Like I've just kind of admitted that everything is basically fucked and nothing can ever get better. So I'm taking like the memes where they come, right? And just enjoying the banter timeline whilst we get it. And luckily,
yeah,
the Conservatives are delivering very funny politics, right?
yeah.
If I didn't laugh, I'd cry.
I think for me, it's just like the Tories being stuff like crap. Like I've seen that like most of my adult life. So I can take that. Especially when they come up with like the clowns. The ERG and stuff. I'm used to that stuff. It's when Labour try and lie in like the most pathetic ways, like saying, "Oh,
Mm,
I wish I could do this. I just don't have the money right now," and things like that. Or it's the brazenness of the lies, especially when like for the most part, we don't have many options of who we can actually vote for
mm,
like change quickly. If you see what I'm saying, especially when you get other people kind of because in the media space who just lie, like even people on YouTube, and I'm talking about people who just lie, so brazenly, and tell people what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. That really frustrates me, especially because like I see it as a space where we can do a lot of good. Um, and so that really that annoys me the most. Like when Labour come up with just lying to the voters, it's like I expect better
yeah,
from you, and I know you
exactly.
can do better, and that's where I get really annoyed at them. So I wish I could be a bit more detached from them. But when they push kind of economic illiteracy, and that kind of goes into the public psyche of the it is like a household. It's like, but it's not.
Mm. Yeah, because I mean, like, I feel like I want to sow the seeds of changing the rhetoric in the content that I make, right?
Hmm.
In the one of the things that I worry about being a content creator, one of the things I worry about is the accusation of grifting.
Yeah,
In the I want to always believe like there's always been times in my mind when I thought should I change my content so that it reaches more people, right? So you've seen, like, I like Max Robespierre. I like his channel a lot. I think he does good work, and we agree on a lot of things. But it's very clear that there is a gigantic market space for just talking about Brexit. You look at Phil's channel, you look at Truth to Power. These are those two channels specifically are two people. They just talk about Brexit non-stop, and there's a gigantic market for it. But my heart's not in it, right? I think that Brexit was bad. I voted to remain in the European Union, but there are things that I just care far more about. I don't have the heart to change the output that I have for something that I don't believe in to try and get more money and get more viewers, even though I know that would be good for my channel if I did. But I don't know, like, I could spend my entire time being entirely truthful. But people, there will always be the accusation coming at you. It's like, oh, you're just doing this for money. You're just doing this because you want to be a famous online internet creator, or whatever it might be. And obviously, I do want those things.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do it at the expense of my political beliefs and the kind of things I want to cultivate, right?
Yeah, I think in kind of defense of Max, like I think he did ride the Brexit wave, but so did I as well. And I think he's kind of branched out a lot more of covering certain things. And I think he's an honest actor. I'd say he's an honest person. Um, like he has made mistakes, and I've called him on it. Just like I've made mistakes, and I fear the big call out. When I made that is the Labour video of is sanity to pay the price to pay for power. Like I was always worried in case someone does some shit on me. And that's the risk of when you criticize others, you are open to criticism more openly than you would be if you didn't. So it's always nervy, that kind of thing. But what I would say is like, yeah, I'm trying to remember what I was trying to say now. Kind of my mind's completely blank. But I think with certain people, like you can cover certain things because it gets virality and it gets a lot of views and things like that. And that's as long as you're being honest in that, I'm not too bothered. But you do kind of limit yourself on how much success you'll have once those topics kind of die out or people get bored. Do you know what I mean? And that's why it's important to cover a range of stuff naturally, because at least that
Yeah.
way, your videos will do, on average, they will do better. And that's what I've noticed as well. Like, on average, I think my videos do better now rather than having just ones that do really well and ones that do really badly when I don't cover certain topics. But
Yeah.
yeah, for me, it's just, like we've seen grifters in the space. And I think if I suddenly came out and said, do you know what? I actually like Keir Starmer, and these are the reasons why. I think people would be like, I don't know about that because you were very much against him not long ago. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think that's enough to have flipped. Like how Carl Kalinski's like, oh, if I knew Joe Biden was going to do these things, I would have voted for him. It's like, he's not done much, Chief. And I think sometimes the problem is sometimes people's views change from, I absolutely want these fundamental things, or I'm not going to vote for you to, well, he's done more than I expected, which is 1 out of 10. So therefore, he's done a slight positive. Do you see what I'm saying? And I think like that's the problem of, is someone grifting or have their views genuinely changed? Especially Carl, a guy who's got a lot of connections with, like, probably mentioned him a bit too much to be fair, but with that lady, the Crystal lady, the one who's running against Biden in the primaries.
Marianne Williamson.
That's the one, yeah. And it's like you seem a bit too close to her. Do you know what I mean? And that's the problem with building certain, when you get to a level of building political connections. But I think as long as you're an honest actor and it's not too hard to disprove that you're not grifting or things like that. Like Jimmy Dore is pretty blatant. It's pretty
Yeah,
blatant,
it's
and
true. Yeah.
he's jumped down the anti-vaccine stuff. He's jumped down the anti-COVID stuff really aggressively. Do you know what I mean? But with Rubin, especially those American dudes, it's a lot more money over there. Do you know what I mean? The Koch brothers will fund you for anything. Rich people will fund you for anything.
There's plenty of grift money available in the UK as well. I mean, you look at Darren Grimes and Jess Gill, right? They have a channel on YouTube
Jess
called
Gill.
Reasoned,
Who's
right? So Jess Gill, she's a TikToker, another TikToker who's been picked up by the right wing. So the Reason channel was set up by Darren Grimes, but it was bankrolled by Oliver Annisfeld, who is the son of Lance Foreman. So they have this fund called I think it's called like content and activism or something. I forget exactly what it is. It's set in like a shell company, like a brass plate company in Rickmansworth or some shit. So Lance Foreman funneled a bunch of money through the shell company to use as seed money for Darren Grimes to have a propaganda channel on YouTube. And he hired what they've done, they've pivoted to be like right wing stuff for the youths. So you got Jess Gill going out with a microphone doing like
Oh,
street interview TikTok style, to try and look like, like they're down with the kids. So even if you're just a random TikToker with a reasonable following and you're right wing, someone will find you and forgive you money as well. There's plenty of money for it in the UK too. Look at Reem Ibrahim, now fucking communications director for the Institute of Economic Affairs,
everyone from the
from being a
IEA is a
TikToker.
director of something. Everyone who works there, like, goes on TV is a director of something, which is crazy. Like, how many directors do you need for an organization that probably has like 10 people?
Yeah, I mean, there's because like what's interesting is what I mentioned this before as well. They have the IEA have a cultural affairs commentator now, a guy called Mark Glendenning, and I'm like, economic affairs? I don't think culture is part of that, but it's clear that they're just a grifter factory. And he was used to do like used to this Mark guy used to work for Policy Exchange, like critiquing like healthcare policy, I think it
Yeah.
was. But there was an easy grift window for talking about why wokeism is bad and why trans people are the
Mm.
enemy. So they just hired somebody to do it, make them the director.
I think sometimes it can be difficult with certain people to spot grifting when they're trying to get into political parties or when they're trying to push into media roles. I think like the ones like that push the single market nonsense. Like I said, I've debunked it so many times on my channel. Like I did 2 big essay pieces on it. Do you know what I mean? Like that took me a week of research to actually do. It's very easy to know that they're telling people what they want to hear. Do you know what I mean? Especially when they're saying like, well, in their first term, Labour aren't going to do this, but in their second term, they might. It's like, what is going on here? Like, we don't even know what Labour's first term is going to look like. How do you have any idea what their second term is going to look like? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's one of the problems of new media. Of you can cater for people much more specifically, if that makes sense. Like your audience a bit better. You know what they want. You know what they like because you can see it in the analytics. You can see it in the comments. And I think that's one of the big dangers of going down a route of trying to chase views, if that makes sense. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the major problems. And I think that's something that I try to be careful of as well, because I know what my audience want to hear, but I also know what the bigger audiences want to hear, if that makes sense. And it's very easy to move into that space.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the problem. And for me, it's like you got to be careful. But if I suddenly start saying, "Oh, why doesn't the UK just join the single market?" Then I've lost my mind, and I should not be listened
Mm.
to. Unless,
Yeah,
of course,
yeah,
the
for
answers
sure.
change. But like I said, when I did the research on it, there was a Nordic professor saying, why don't more countries just join the single market and then join the EU after? It's because the EFTA countries said no, and so it's very easy to say like, well, that's not going to happen. The EFTA countries
Mm.
say we're not going to join, and people are like, well, why don't we just basically bribe Norway? It's like you realise like that's not going to happen because the Nords are very much of the view of we are too big as a country to be in that group because we are like 10 times the size of it. And the other problem is, like their prime minister said at the time, or their leader said at the time, we'll ruin it for them just like we've ruined it for ourselves. It's like
Yeah,
that mentality will not change anytime soon. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? And we are a country that likes throwing our weight around, and people don't like that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Okay, well, fuck it. It's 11:45. Blame you. Have all been going for 3 hours now. Jeez,
That's why I don't like coming on here because I stay way longer than I should.
you really do. You really do.
I don't
It's nowhere near
appreciate
my
it.
bedtime yet, though. I was gonna do. I was
Yeah,
gonna.
you
I
had
was
a
gonna.
can of Red Bull like 2 hours ago. I think you got a
I
while
did have a
left.
can of Red. Actually, I finished most of the can of Red Bull before we started streaming, but I did finish it off whilst we were streaming. So I'll let that slide.
Yeah.
Um, but because I was going to cover a bunch of stuff today, because I don't know if you saw there was been a bunch of articles in the Times and in the New Statesman, like bigging up Theresa May, trying to girl boss her, and I'm like,
Oh no.
Mrs. Windrush, hello, right? And no mention of Windrush in either of these articles. One of them was about Nick Timothy, her director of
Yeah.
communications, head of campaigning, I think it was actually, sorry, who is now a big face on the conservative scene, trying to be like an anti-woke standard
Mm.
bearer. And I'm like, yeah, what the fuck's going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think they are. They're trying to rehabilitate. Like they try to rehabilitate like people like David Cameron as well. Theresa May definitely. It's like when Americans try and rehabilitate George W. Bush. I'm like, did you see the Iraq War? Like, did you forget what happened? Like, genuinely, did you forget? Did you forget the '08 crash?
Yeah, well, Blair's being rehabilitated, right? Getting
Yeah,
interviews with
they are
James
trying.
O'Brien, whilst he's getting money from the murderous Saudi Arabian
Yeah.
regime. right? He's allowed to sit here and talk about how it's really good that Keir Starmer's being so right wing, and I'm just like, this is a man. The population fucking despise this man. He's responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths, if not millions, in Iraq and the Middle East
Yeah.
more generally. And you're trying to rehabilitate this
The,
potential war
the
criminal, in the words of Kofi Annan and Hans Blake. Like, come on.
the best thing about that is the more Tony Blair says you should vote for this guy, the less votes Starmer is going to get from people because Blair is that toxic.
Yeah.
So like if anything, I'd be saying to Tony Blair like, go home, bro. You're done. No one likes you here. Go back to the Middle East. Go make some money, like talking to authoritarian governments, because you are probably one of the most hated politicians. Like I think he's more hated than David Cameron. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, he's definitely certainly more than David Cameron. I think he's probably even more hated than Jeremy Corbyn.
that I don't know about that. That one's a bold. That's a bold statement. That's a bold statement. You could be right. You could be right, but I think he is very much disliked, and I think the more he comes out and says vote for Keir Starmer, the less votes he's going to get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right. Actually, I think the only thing I was gonna there was a thing I had a bit about Nadine Dorries, but I wanted to do, but maybe I'll save that for tomorrow.
No,
Um,
madness.
and the I don't know if you saw, right, the Reform UK London mayoral candidate got interviewed on GB News today.
Right.
Apparently, it's fucking buck
Yeah,
wild.
yeah. He asked him about the US election legitimate, and he said no. And he said,
Yeah.
is Joe Biden the legitimate president of the United States? He said no.
It's ridiculous. What I'll probably do is once we finish, I'll probably watch that, get at least a segment recorded before I have to go through 3 hours of our content to try and find something to clip out to put up on YouTube.
Oh,
Probably watch that, because it sounds fun. And Reform UK stuff does really well on YouTube, actually. Something that I actually think is worth me covering as well, because I think Reform UK are under scrutinised by the left in this country.
yeah. No, I
We,
think
we
it's
look at
because
them like idiots, but
yeah,
they have a pretty broad supporter base, and the things they talk about are like fucking buck wild nonsense shit.
it's right wing
And if it doesn't get
populism.
debunked early, it's going to
Yeah.
become into the public consciousness. So that we need to work harder on making Reform UK look stupid.
It's right wing populism, and so it has that kind of, like I said, that kind of it appeals to that imperialist mindset. I think the kind of people who believe in the empire that are racist. So and when you tell those people it's not your fault that you're poor, it's because of brown people. That kind of resonates on a much deeper level for them.
Yeah.
Eastern Europeans took all your jobs. That's why you're poor. That kind of
What's
resonates with them
crazy as well
because
is if Reform UK weren't so fucking like batshit insane right wing libertarian, they could probably do super well at the next election.
Yeah.
Like they could run on the nationalist line of we have German and Australian companies owning our water. So we're going to take them back for the British and put British flags all over them, whatever it might be. And they could fucking storm an election.
If they
They
push
could
that-
run like they could run the line between anti-immigrant, pro-business, but also like anti, like sort of like proper, like full-on protectionist with some social democratic elements, and they could storm an election.
They
But
could
they
push
don't want
this
to do
as the
that.
true Brexit. Genuinely, they could push this as this is the true Brexit that people wanted.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And the thing is, they've just let their party get infiltrated again by a bunch of lunatics. That's one of the things Nigel Farage I think did was he purged the UKIP party of a lot of their kind of fringe elements. And I think maybe the Reform Party need to do that again. The problem is, though, I think, in my opinion, it's more of a personal grift to make money. Like, when they were, like, raising money, saying, like, oh, if you give us this much money, you can be a candidate or whatever, which I think is still a bit dodgy. They dropped a load of their candidates before the election, so those people got nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's more of like I think if we saw a genuine right wing kind of populist party like UKIP, but a bit more intelligent and a bit more media savvy, we would be in a very very bad situation. And that's
Yeah.
the one
I
thing
mean,
I fear about proportional representation is if we see kind of the dark alliance, the UKIP Tory alliance, I'd be fucking terrified.
I mean, I think that's a price to pay for a fair democracy. Unfortunately, people want those
Yeah.
things they voted for, and they should be represented. And we've seen just because you have first past the post doesn't mean that these views don't get represented. Because look what the Tory Party became in post 2015, right?
Yeah.
What UKIP got their referendum from nowhere, like we were talking about before. So
Yeah, no, I agree with that is very true. That UKIP basically won the argument despite having nothing. They had nothing. But Cameron, to secure kind of the right wing vote, he kind of gambled. I think that's the main reason he won that election, because it was a very surprising election result, and he won it on the back of UKIP votes.
yeah, it's crazy that Reform UK's policies are so shit and their rhetoricians are so bad, because they've been astroturfed so fucking hard, right? When you think that Nigel Farage is the president, Richard Tice is the leader, Dr. David Bull is the deputy leader, and Ben Habib and Alex Phillips are very high prominent members of the party. Every single one of these people has shows on GB News or Talk TV. Right? They've been astroturfed to fucking high heavens, and they're still only polling at like 7%.
I think
Like
it's
it just shows how rubbish they are.
I think their channels are just those channels are not mainstream enough. It's echo chambery. I think if they break into the mainstream, if they break onto like Sky and BBC, that's what happened with Farage because he didn't have all of this bullshit. But what he did do was he managed to get onto the main kind of news networks. He got pushed very aggressively by the tabloids, and that's how he made it. Because he was on everything. Like I said, there wasn't. There were so many weeks of question time. It was like, and we've got Nigel Farage, and you're like, is there no one else? Like, I get he's their best guy, but like, no one else represents them. Do you know what I mean? And it was just like you get a Tory politician who'd also back Brexit as well, and you'd have the other people on the panel who are like, I dislike the EU, and it's like that's a very good response. Thank you. The Brexiteers were like, we could have all of the benefits from the EU and none of the downsides, and they had no response because you can't beat arguments like that by being stupid. Yeah, it was just I think 2010 onwards has been a complete disaster, but 2015 has been a nightmare, like a genuine nightmare, honestly, for people. Cameron winning that election was just, oh, it was awful. Like if only we had chaos with Ed Miliband, but Ed Miliband had the worst team that I would say ever. But surprisingly, I think Keir Starmer has the same team. It feels like he looked at Ed Miliband's failures like, give me that.
I mean, I went back and looked at Ed Miliband's manifesto from 2015. It looks identical to all the kind of stuff that Keir Starmer is talking about now, except with a far bigger focus on deficit reduction rather than economic growth. But given the kind of economic policies that they are trying to look at to try and do both of those things are basically identical, I'm going to count them as the same anyway. Or the fact Ed Miliband looked a little bit more, progressive on some other things. Cause there's none. What Ed Miliband didn't have was all this reactionary social policy.
Yeah, no, sorry, there's a bot in my channel. I'm trying to like get rid of him. Some Nazi guy. Someone just warned me on your stream. I wasn't paying enough attention to comments. Clearly. All right, done.
Nice.
Yeah, no. All right, done. I'll let them know. But yeah, I need to keep better on that. I haven't had a bot in my stream in ages. That's the worst
Me
thing.
neither.
So the day I took my eye off the ball there, that's very frustrating. Yeah, he's some Nazi dude. But yeah, I just you really want things to be better, but when the Labour Party are just complete trash, it's like what more can I do at that point? Do you know what I mean? Like, and if I criticise them, they're like, you're a Tory. I'm like, we've never met, so you know nothing
Yeah, you
about
Tory
me.
enabler, fucking Tory enabler. That's the worst insult, right? It's like the biggest Tory enabler is Keir Starmer
Yeah.
because he's the ones pushing conservative policy. Like, fuck, there you go.
Yeah, even though he works for a different party, he's still pushing the same ideology, and I can't respect that. Especially when people are like, well, he's got to do it to win. Is like, did this win in 2015? No, shut the fuck up. Because this is
Well, the
not
worst,
it's
the
not
worst
97.
argument I get, right, is that like, I saw, like Supertansky said this in a video. I didn't respond in this way, but I should have responded. Is they say, "Oh, Labour can't announce good policy now because then
The
the
Tories will take it."
Conservative Party will steal it." And I'm like, "Is it good policy? Yes or no? If it's good policy and the Tories do it, great. We've got the policy that we wanted. That's all I care about." And this is the thing that shows you these people only care about the rosette of the person who's saying the thing. They don't care about the utility of the policy. Because if the wrong team does it, that's bad. I'm like, no, if it's good policy, they'll do it. But the problem is,
think-
I know my policies are good because I know that if I did announce them, the Conservative Party wouldn't do them because it's not conservatism.
I think
Because they won't do something outside of my ideology.
The only example they have of that is the windfall tax, and Sunak took it and he pretended to do it, but he didn't because he gave a massive opt-outs. And that's something Labour could talk about. It's like, yeah, you stole our policy and did it badly. Like, do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, that's something
Even
Labour could talk about. And
Labour stole the policy from the Liberal Democrats. Right? The Liberal Ed Davey
I
was
think
the
that's
first
yeah.
person to call on the windfall tax.
So yeah, no, that 100%. And I think it's frustrating, like especially when you get the public to believe windfall tax is the right thing to do as well. So you can push the narrative there, and then Labour could have talked about doing windfall tax on the banks, the energy companies, and say we would actually go way further than this, and actually do it properly. But the problem is they didn't, and that's all they had over the last few years is we would do a windfall tax. It's like, wow, you had one policy, that's it. And I don't get why these people argue, oh, Labour can't announce policies because the Tories have stolen them. It's like, which other policies have they stolen then? Do you know what I mean? Like, it don't make sense, and that's what it's just stupid. Like the Tories have barely done that. I think Theresa May talked about burning injustices and talked about getting rid of the VAT exemption for private schools. She didn't do it, and you
Yeah.
can use it as more evidence of the Tories will pretend to do the stuff that we are saying we will do, and don't do it. Why would you vote for a party that doesn't do anything what they promise? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why it's just dumb. Like I think people just say that as cope. Honestly, when you ask them, oh, what are Labour's policies? They're like they can't announce them yet, and it's like, okay, so why are you voting for them then? You're doing it based
Yeah.
on blind hope.
Yeah. It's silly. It's very, very silly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was gonna say something. I've forgotten what I was gonna say now. I was going to just say, yeah. Well, the thing is that at this point, we're so far along now, right? People are like, oh, okay. Well, is there a point that you get where they would say something where you would vote Labour? And I'm like, well, now I know that Keir Starmer will literally say and do anything, and will continually U-turn and lie and flip-flop. Even if he does announce a policy that I like, how can I ever trust it to get implemented? Given that I already know as well, these being mentored by Tony Blair, somebody who had
Yeah.
so many promises that he broke, right? Proportional representation was
Yep.
in the 1997 manifesto. Did he implement it? Did he fuck, right? We already know there's going to be a bunch of U-turns coming when he's already done a bunch of them already. So even if he came out tomorrow with all the policies in the world, I'd be like, fucking bullshit, mate. How do I know that you're going to actually implement any of these policies when I know full fact that, that you're very happy to renege on any position you might previously hold if you think that it's going to be politically efficacious for you to do so. Remember the allowing votes for EU nationals with settled status
Oh,
that you turned on 24 hours later.
do you know
This is
what?
this is this is the politics of a fucking clown.
That was one of the funniest weeks in British politics because Phil kept putting out videos saying, "Oh, this is a great policy," and then Stan was like, "We don't do that around here," and he just, what is this the same troll your guest got? What? I don't know what the comment's about, but yeah, honestly, honestly, it was such a funny week because he just kept getting debunked by Starmer. So each video he put out got debunked like a couple of days later. It's kind of like, do you remember the week where they pushed the we don't have enough time to get rid of these? No, what's it called? You know when Lammy was talking about the anti-protest bill, and he was like, oh, we
Hmm.
don't have enough time, and then you had Lisa and Andy saying, well, we don't have much time, but we will, if it's really bad, we will try and deal with it. And then
Hmm.
in the end, in the middle of the week, Stan was like, "No, we ain't gonna do shit, bro." And
Yeah.
it's
Well,
like,
well,
who do you
the
believe?
funny part is that whilst Starmer's always U-turning and flip-flopping, when Phil's following him and just like
Yeah,
agreeing with everything that
and
he's saying,
O'Brien as
makes
well.
Phil look like an idiot because
Yeah,
Phil will agree with him when he's saying the thing, and then will agree with the flip-flop position as well. I'm like, well,
yeah.
this is Phil. You've proven to me now. It's obvious you're just a man with no principles who will just toe the party line regardless.
I think you might have a troll, someone young black economist, or someone's talking
No,
about
no, I
trolls.
think I think it was a misunderstanding
Oh, I
between
see.
two of my chatters.
Oh, I see. I don't know. It's hard to keep up with like comments, honestly. Um, yeah, I just it was just funny because then all he'll default to. Well, of course, Starmer has to say this because he's trying to win the election, and you're like, okay, bud, okay. It's not because he got a massive amount of backlash. He's kind of reeled back on a policy. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
uh,
The things then they say, well, his one job is to win the election. I'm like, yeah, to win the election to do what?
yeah.
To be the effective B team for capital? What's the point? What's the fucking point?
Honestly, and I think one of the interviews, I think it was Kay Burley interviewed one of the Labour guys that week and said, well, if you're a British national living in an EU country and you only have residency, you can't vote in their elections. And it was like, oh, you can in some European countries. It's like, what? It's like, well, actually, we haven't really discussed this policy properly, and that's why, we're kind of still kind of discussing it. And it's like, why did you announce it then, douchebag?
Yeah,
They got.
yeah,
I
exactly.
think it was actually the Times that played them because the Times saw it in Starmer's original leadership pledges, and so they asked Labour about it, and I think Labour must have said something stupid or must have misspoken, and then the Times ran with it. And then everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is such a great policy!" And then Labour were like, "Actually, we're not going to do that because the tabloids will come after us."
Labour
Um,
comms is so bad. It's so awful. Like
that's
considering
what I
they're
mean.
trying to market themselves as
Yeah,
like the adults in the room who know how to do like political campaigning properly, and their communication is just so, like it's obviously I well remember the days of like Corbyn era communications of the Labour Party. It was bad, right?
yeah.
And the fact that these people are coming in as the supposed adults in the room being even worse is fucking hilarious to me.
I think that's what I'm saying. Like, they should have took Phil on to do that role because he would do a much better job than whoever's doing it now. Because the comms team's an absolute disaster, and it's been, like you said, it's been a disaster for a long time now. If he
It
wants
really
to
has
get a
been.
job in the party, I think that's the perfect role for him. Because at least, if he learned anything from Alistair Campbell, watching him over the years, it's it's not hard to run a good comms team, and if there's anything, he's pretty good at it. Well, Campbell was pretty good at it back then, so it's a complete nightmare. And it's like the spokespeople, the problem is, right, they don't know what Starmer actually thinks, so they kind of make it up as they go until Starmer gets forced into saying something, and he'll look at what direction the wind's blowing. That week was so bad. You had a spokesperson saying one thing, Nandi saying one thing, Lammy saying one thing, Starmer saying another thing, and you're just like, who do I believe?
Yeah. Oh, James O'Brien got clowned on so bad. Oh,
Oh, I
it
was
was
there.
so
I
funny.
was there. He was like, "No, you misunderstood what you heard," and in the end, he had to come back. And when he interviewed Rayner on it, I was like, "Bro, like I told you, oh, we told you, bloody, like, do you know what I mean? Like, you look so stupid." Especially when Rayner's like, "We don't have the time to deal with it." It's like, what are you gonna do in your second year in office? Are you telling me you're not gonna have time at least in the second year to do something? Honestly, because they talk about the first 100 days in the first year. It's like, what are you doing in year two then?
Well, we basically don't know anything that they're doing. I saw someone in the comment section on Twitter saying, "Well, of course they'll raise the taxes to cover all of the policies they're going to do." I'm like, what fucking policies have they
Yeah.
announced? Like, to be fair, like they've gone back on. There was a period of time, like 6 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
where if they had some policies, and then every single time they were asked how they'd pay for it, they say, "Oh, the non-dom tax,
Oh yeah.
abolish non-dom
Oh,
status."
and
And I was
getting
like,
rid of the free status for private schools as well. That was
yeah,
another one.
every single time, but it was
Magic
always
windfall
those two
tax.
things, and
Yep.
it got to the point where leftoids were bringing it up so much on Twitter. I genuinely think Rishi Sunak brought up a PMQs like halfway through that
Yeah.
period, saying, this non-dom tax is paid for like 5 different things. I'm
Mercer
like,
said the same thing. It's like this
has
non-dom
Rishi
tax
Sunak
paper.
just been looking at leftoid Twitter? Is his party strategist been looking at leftoid Twitter? Because we were the only ones making this critique, because we were
Possible.
the ones actually looking for policy from the Labour
Yeah.
Party, whereas everyone else is just looking for dunks.
Yeah, I don't know, but is an easy answer is okay. So your non-dom tax is going to pay for reducing energy bills, reduce or freezing council tax. Is like, okay, buddy.
Yeah.
Like it didn't make any sense, and so like that's the problem. And like especially when Labour portray themselves as everything is costed, is like, so what specifically are you going to use the non-dom tax for, and the getting rid of the private school charity status or whatever it is, so they don't have to pay VAT. What are you going to do with that money specifically? Because you can only spend the money once. Like it doesn't multiply magically.
Yeah, and if of course you are going with this idea that every government budget is like a household budget, right? Which they've doubled down, tripled down on now. So they have boxed them into the position where they have to do this, where they have to say where this money is coming from, which is obviously their own fault. It's their
Yeah.
own fault that they've done that, right? I think they've kind of pigeonholed themselves now into saying that the non-dom tax is paying for NHS workforce expansion, and the private school levy is paying for a new teacher recruitment and the breakfast clubs in schools, right?
Okay.
Not free school meals, the one with the positive ROI, the breakfast clubs that no one knows what the fuck they mean, because this is what Labour comms is in 2023.
Yeah, I despair at it. I genuinely kind of just I don't know if it's fully the comms team's fault. I think it's Starmer's fault, honestly, because he's not figured this thing out. I think that's the main problem. He's
He
not.
doesn't know, he's not politically minded, right? Do you
Yeah,
remember the story that he had to get given a crash course Economics 101 by Lord Falkner when he became leader, because he realised he didn't have a clue what he was talking about?
I'm not. I don't know. I,
That was very funny, because yeah, like Sienna Rogers was pointing this out during the leadership election in 2020, saying this is a man who has
right.
no political opinions. He just follows whatever his handlers tell him to say.
Yeah, honestly, that leadership contest was such a disaster. That was, yeah. I think the lack of talent on display there was very evident, very
Yeah,
very
yeah.
evident, and I think
And when I'm
that's
forced to vote for Rebecca Long Bailey, like I'm just like,
yeah. She's not very bright, and I don't
no,
mean that in a mean way. I think some people are just
no.
limited, and I think she's one of them.
It's a shame that John McDonnell was so prominent as shadow chancellor in the Corbyn years. I think he would have made a great leader.
Yeah, I think
Really
that.
big fan of John McDonnell.
Uh,
Remember watching a speech from 2015, when George Osborne was introducing the welfare bill, and he started off his speech in Parliament with the genuine phrase, I would swim through vomit to
Yeah,
vote against this bill, which I thought was pretty funny. But
I yeah.
rhetorically, he was always really good, and his mind was focused on winning as well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny as well. And he was like, when they asked him, as he said after the election loss, it's like, look, any time you're a socialist, you don't get shot in a football field or something like that is a good day, something like that. Or when you try and do a socialist revolution, you're not killed. It's a good day. So, I would have seen if we could have had this version of Ed Miliband, I would have voted for him like straight. I would have become a member just to vote, honestly, if we could have this version of him now. But he was just the wrong guy at the wrong time, which is unfortunate.
Yeah,
But there is a real lack of talent. I don't remember who else was there. I think Nandi was there. And I think that I don't know who the fourth
Thornbury.
person was. Um, it was so bad.
The issue I have though as well is that even then, all of these candidates are all just people from like middle class managerial
Yeah,
backgrounds as well.
PMCs,
That's
isn't
another
it?
problem Labour have at the moment is this kind of metropolitan kind of vibes that they get from the party when you're
Yeah,
like you got people from consultancies or you've got barristers and QCs and that those this is your choice of people for potential leaders of a working man's party. That doesn't make any sense, right? At least with Angela Rayner as deputy leader, we've got someone who was working as who was a single mum who became a
yeah,
carer. There are more high profile working class background people in the Conservative front benches than there are on the Labour front benches. Like for a very long time, you had Nadine Dorries and Maria Caulfield, idiots granted,
hmm
but at least those people who worked as nurses. Um,
yeah.
when there's no one who is similar on the Labour front bench
I, th-
apart from Angela Rayner.
I think I don't have as big an issue with that, but I think it's just when you look at some of the stuff Rayner comes out with, I'm just like, okay, buddy, which is backing a lot of the stuff Starmer is saying, which I know she's in a bit of a box, but she's also in an unelected position, so Starmer can't actually get rid of her. And
That's
maybe
the
she's
problem.
doing it for the good of the party to make the party look united, but at the same time, somewhere you've got to draw the line, especially when they're briefing against you so brazenly.
Oh god, it's tragic. It's really tragic. I still, after everything that she's done, I still fully believe that Angela Rayner's heart is in. I think that she's just been sucked into a party machine. I made a point of this on Twitter when she keeps getting briefed against whilst
Mhm.
doggedly trying to push through her like New Deal for working people that's the kind of why she's in the position that she's in the moment. And I feel like that whilst after stabbing the left in the back, so to speak, of the party to get into the position that she's in, to be sitting at the adults table
Yeah,
with the quote unquote adults in the room, and they in response the adults then pulling the chair out every time she tries to sit down and laughing
yeah,
at her, and it's so depressing watching it because I want there to be, a working class background woman from the north who can be in a front facing role for the Labour Party, and they've turned her into fucking Bez. She's Flavor Flav from Public Enemy,
yeah.
being wheeled out to look like the image of the party whilst having no
I,
actual power.
for me, I don't mind like if you have QCs and whatever like in charge, as long as they kind of get it, because you can have empathy. You don't have to live through someone's life to understand it, but it's just we don't have that. And we have a lot of people who just don't understand, like especially when Labour like pushing this whole we'll do better on the channel crossings, like how you can do that. It's like we'll deal with the backlog. Is like, so you're gonna do no safe points of entry. It's like correct, and you're just like,
Mm.
right, okay, you're not gonna solve anything then, because you will still get channel crossings.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then that's where I'm at. It'll be a more humane kind of destruction of the system of people, and I don't appreciate it for the life of me. Um, Someone saying they'd like Andy Burnham again. Andy Burnham said a lot of dumb shit when he was an MP, so I don't know if I'd want Andy Burnham. But he seems to
I
be
mean,
doing all right now. Um,
yeah, you see someone who's walked the walk now, right?
yeah,
He can have left wing credentials and run with them because of the B network.
yeah,
As mayor of Greater Manchester, he can stand as a leader and say, "I nationalise the buses. The left can now trust me to have some policy concessions for them, because I have the record of what I've done as mayor." In the way that Jamie Driscoll could
yeah,
have done if Labour weren't deliberately trying to sabotage anybody to the left of Augusto Pinochet, like because he has walked the walk and has done things in his own community.
yeah.
But of course, that's too left wing for Labour. That's why they're briefing against all their metro. Sadiq Khan, for
Yeah.
fuck's sake, is too left. The
It's
current
because
Labour
these guys
establishment.
they don't have to listen to the Central Labour Party. That's why. That's why they're
Yeah.
doing what they're doing this. And like Sadiq Khan, I think he's trying to push for free school meals for all London kids, like primary
Oh,
school
it's
kids.
already gone through. From
I,
September, there will be free school meals for all primary school kids in London, paid for with and a windfall on he had extra business rates money lying around for him to be able to spend.
good.
That is going out now. He is, and this isn't like an extreme policy, but it's too left wing the Labour
Yeah,
Party,
they briefed
Labour
against him for it.
establishment.
Yeah, Andy Burnham, I think, spoke about it in that Guardian piece where he was saying like every time he does something positive, the spin machine goes against him, and it's just like, oh, it makes sense. So, like even that poster fiasco when Yvette Cooper was like, I didn't approve of these posters, as in I didn't like, they didn't have my approval, as in she wasn't for them or against them, and they briefed against her as well, and they told her if she don't want to be here, she can leave. I'm like, right, if you don't support xenophobic posters who portray the other side as nonce protectors, you can leave the Labour Party.
Mm.
Don't know if I want to be a part of that.
It's so totalitarian what they're doing. Like exactly how I compared it before to Stalin's time as a general secretary of the Central Committee. Like
Yeah,
this is exactly the kind of we got the kind of the centralized opinion and the internal party purges, right?
yeah, the purification of the Politburo at this point, and
Yeah.
especially when as soon as I see Annalise Dodds go and he put Rachel Reeves, I was like, it's Joe over for us. It's finished. We're done. We're done.
Mm.
Just, it's over. And as
Over.
much as I want to do like a bit on why we should have hope, I think we are at the bit in Resident Evil where I die and it's abandon all hope territory. The Chainsaw Man wins this one, honestly, because I don't know where we go from here. I genuinely don't.
I mean, like I say, support the good local candidates in council and mayoral elections and vote Green in the general election. That's all. That's my only plan, other than to try and change people's opinions through the content that I make by making the case for policy positions. Because when it comes to electoral politics, there is no ground. Like when I did that tweet, why people say, "Oh, we have to vote for Starmer, but we'll then hold his feet to the fire when
Oh, I
he's in
saw
office."
that.
I'm like, how? What mechanism do you have for doing this? There isn't any. He won't listen to anybody other than the voters because all he cares about is power.
Yeah,
When you
no.
have these people, when you have these people who all only care about power, all you can do is challenge their power. That's it, right? Someone in the comments replied and saying, "We will only negotiate with him once we've given him everything that he wants," and that's the perfect way of describing it.
I think for me the other thing is like as soon as he gets into power, all he's going to say is you either vote for me or the Tories come back in, and you have no response to it. Like genuinely, what else are you supposed to say at that point? Do you know what I mean? Like that's the problem with those arguments of like if you don't leverage your vote or at least try to, at least pretend to do it. What's the point? If I say to my local Labour candidate, I'm going to vote for you because I hate the Tories, they're going to be like you've pointed out, it's okay. He's a lock. We need to find someone who's indecisive, or someone who's a Tory, and listen to them and try and appeal to them. That's the thing that these people don't get.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. As a young person, should I consider the real possibility of moving elsewhere? Will we see real effective changes going to get worse and worse? I would move. If you have the means to move, I would do it.
If you can get secure employment, if you've got like a dual national thing or something, I would say go. I would say abandon all hope. Honestly, at this point,
But basically, any like strong European country is probably worth your while going to, or New Zealand, Australia.
yeah, I'd avoid Germany for now because they're in economic decline or pretty close to it.
Even so, it's still better than here, right? At
Try
least you
and
have
find a
good culture
Scandi
in
country.
Germany.
If you don't mind the winter, go to a Scandi country. As long as you're not a minority, you'll be alright. Like an ethnic minority, like a brown person.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it was me, if I was going to choose somewhere to go, I'd probably choose Denmark or Norway. I like Denmark. It's a clean place. Lots
Yeah,
of cyclists.
I
It's
don't
a
like
lovely
the snow.
place.
So,
Copenhagen was. I went for Colley. It was a really nice place.
I'd probably go Spain. I think Spain's a country that might be on the up. They seem to be doing a lot of positive things.
Also, Spain is number one in the world for being pro LGBTQ. So,
Yeah, okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. So
that's got that going for it. Even if Vox are getting 12% of the vote, at least because remember Vox ran with the like the gay ghost like emoji that then became like a meme.
yeah, someone's asking. Even Tory journalists are saying we should move. You should move.
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, it's over. It's over.
It's true.
It's finished.
Yeah.
Like the game is done. Like we are the sick man of Europe again, and we're going to be ill for a while. This is long COVID that we have got now, and it's not going to be great.
Long austerity.
Yeah, honestly, feels that way. The lungs are busted up, and there's not much breathing space.
Yeah. Imagine if Corbyn had won in 2017 and we got PQE for the 3 years up to the pandemic.
Don't
Imagine how different the economy would be.
imagine we had a leader who didn't say let the bodies pile high in their thousands or whatever, or he might as well said he might as well quit Ivan Drago. If he dies, he dies. It's like, oh, grandma needs to die so the economy can live.
Red line go up equals world more gooder.
Honestly, like, it's just like with the Tories, they're crap. Like that's fine. Like we expect that from them. With Labour, it's like I want you to not be trash, and they've decided to be trash. So
It'd be so easy. It's so easy for Labour just to have like a handful of good
we've
policies
named five
that would
that they
make
could
people
have.
vote for them. They've nothing, literally
I think
nothing.
the only two I can say that are good are nationalising the railways when the contracts end. That's good. The other one is getting rid of the charity status for schools, private schools, so they have to pay VAT. Those are decent.
I mean, yeah, it's a fine policy,
Yeah.
the VAT on schools, but it's not something that's going to sway me. The nationalisation of railway is good, but then again, like the Tories are already setting up like a publicly owned, like
Yeah, because they don't have a choice.
yeah, because they're trying to say that that's why I won't give Labour props for renationalising the railways
Yeah,
because it was going to happen regardless, no matter who was in
it's
power.
the
Because it's
rails have
just
gotten so toxic
dumb.
that they don't have a choice because the companies
Yeah,
have just
yeah.
run it so badly. Like people despise
The
some of these
issue
companies.
the issue is really is obviously they're going to take over the franchises to run the railway, but are they going to buy back the rolling stock? Because if they're not buying back the rolling stock, it's pointless. 'Cause that's where loads of the money goes in the railway, with paying fucking train landlords.
Oh, I see the actual infrastructure.
No, the trains, the actual
Oh, the
physical
trains.
trains themselves, are leased from rolling stock companies that are owned by public and by private investment firms in like Austria and Germany and South Korea.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
And we lease those trains off of those companies, right? It's
Such a
ridiculous.
dumb system.
Alex Gordon from the president of the RMT was talking about it.
Right, I didn't even know that. Yeah, that's just it's just so stupid. It's like we run things the most stupid ways where people can just siphon off profit at every level. Like when they talk about other
Train
countries
territory.
being corrupt, like the Russians and stuff like that. 100% they're corrupt, but Britain is it's just so dodgy the things going on. It's so
I'm
bad.
sorry.
No, it's just sorry, to cut out. Just saying, like we talk about other countries being like incredibly corrupt, like Russia and stuff like that. But the corruption in Britain is just so bad and it's so built in that it's just so.
Exactly. When people talk about like the shock therapy in Russia, where after the downfall of the Soviet Union, it's basically what happened in the UK in the 70s, in the 80s. Sorry, like we were like the guinea pigs for what they were going to do to the ex-Eastern Bloc states when communism fell.
It's just trash. Honestly, I wonder if Labour will bring back PFI contracts. Do you reckon they will?
No, I don't think so. I think it's too politically toxic to do so.
Do you think they'll sneak it?
I think they'll just leave. They'll just continue with the same kind of public sector decline that we have at the moment because they're not going to change the budgets.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think people. Maybe people aren't wise enough to PFIs. The amount of people I say about PFIs, I might people I tell them about this, and they will then say, oh, "I didn't know this was a thing.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
thought the Blair years were great for the NHS." And I'm like, "Yeah, it was a fucking ticking time bomb, mate.
yeah.
Right? They sold off so much of it. So much of our public services has got like completely strapped for cash because of it, and it's such cynical policy because you are."
That
Costing votes later to buy votes now by
that
pushing the debt, real actual debt, onto future taxpayers,
yeah, that's one
which
of the
is
things. One of the guys,
it's absolutely fucking gross.
one of the guys that doesn't do YouTube any effect not fiction. He told me like Tony Blair got rid of a lot of the beds, and I was like, what? I never knew this. And that's one of the reasons we ran into so many problems because they didn't have the capacity. Which is it's crazy. Like I don't even know that happened under New Labour. Like and the thing is, they could have kept those. Now, fair enough, the Tories would have got rid of them, but at least it wouldn't have been you that did it.
I want to do like I don't do video essays on my channel. I just basically do live streams. But if I do a video essay, I want to do like a massively long deep dive about why New Labour were garbage, because so many people talk about everything was great in the Labour years. I'm like half of that was just like a gigantic time bomb waiting to happen, like the housing market, the financialization, the deindustrialization, PFIs, all of this stuff. Which so much of this was just a gigantic house of cards that could have collapsed any moment, and then was made like massively worse by the austerity period as well. But
Yeah,
Blair and Brown were just not good at managing the economy in a sustainable long-term way. It was great during the boom years, right?
yeah,
But the gigantic irony of Brown saying that he'd ended boom and bust when really he'd made us the biggest bust we could possibly be after the financial crisis. But he did take the good mitigating
yeah.
actions to try and fix that afterwards. But even so,
Yeah, no, 100%. The financial crash was it wasn't completely avoidable, but we could have taken much better steps to avoid the problems that we had. and other countries kind of dealt with it a lot better. You know, the Canadians and other groups kind of dealt with it a lot better than we did, and it's because we didn't have the regulations. And the problem was that we had the biggest financial center in Europe. So you know, when it crashed, it was going to crash real hard because we were so reliant. We are still so reliant on the City of London to carry the economy, and it wasn't looked after properly.
Yeah, again, and the deindustrialization that created the gigantic north-south one made it even worse than it
Yeah.
was because Blair was in bed with the financial sector. And what's crazy about this is that Anthony Giddens, who was kind of the brainchild of the third way kind of free market welfare state model of the kind of the Blair period, said that you can get in bed with the free market and have a socially progressive society, but you have to rein in the financial sector. And Blair fucking didn't do it. It was like the cornerstone of the third way ideology, and he didn't do it, and it blew up in his face.
Yeah, it's just a disaster, and I think that at least kind of the European Union and the British government kind of learned a bit from the financial crash with Solvency II and did put some regulations in place. I don't know if they go far enough because I'm not an expert in that field, but at least they did something. But I think we're just in so much trouble at the moment. Like this economy is so knackered, and there's nothing that unless Labour go big, there is not much they can do in the space of 5 years to really make changes. And the problem is like the media just wouldn't allow it because they're gonna be like, oh, you're borrowing stupid amounts of money, and I'll be like, yeah, you're economically illiterate. Your journalism degree does not teach you about Keynesian economics. Like you've got some required reading to do, son. Time to start.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Well, that's getting up to 12:30 now,
Yeah,
so I should probably jet off.
it's
I'll
probably the
probably
most
leave my
depressing stream
Reform
I've done in
UK
a while.
criticism for tomorrow.
Yeah, I've got a lot of content I need to do tomorrow. Yeah, sorry, I didn't think we'd go for this long. It's a mistake.
So right, I had fun. It's been a good stream. And there's probably plenty of stuff that I've got here to be able to clip out and make some segments out of. I think actually the stuff we were talking at the start about why the Conservative Party is so shit at managing the probably worth
Yeah.
being able to clip out and put together something of some kind of narrative to be able to have a YouTube segment out of, which was pretty good.
Any day
So
we can
I think
debunk the Tories and economies, and being good with the economy is a good day. Any day that anyone can debunk it is a good day because that's so ingrained in people's brains that Labour are better for like poor people, but the Tories are better for the economy. Like it needs to die. Do a video essay, my man. Like Dongte, yeah, you don't know how long it takes to do a video essay. Like, bro, I have done video essays. They are the most painful things to do because they'll take you about a week and they'll get 0 views because people don't want essays. They want reactionary content.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Also, there's someone in my chat calling me a woke idiot because I have a university degree that doesn't get me a job that I'm trying to justify. And I'm like, did I say that I wanted to try and justify? I think my time at university was fucking wasted. I didn't give a shit.
I didn't do management, so you know I don't know what your point is.
Yeah,
Maybe if you went to university,
management,
you'd learn how to capitalize words and better grammar and how to write sentences properly. So you know maybe there's a reason you didn't go to university, son. You wouldn't have been able to write an essay.
But we're done what the wittering on about, whatever.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's the teachers that tell us anyways. You know, if you tell kids that 16 and 17 you have to go to university to do a good job, and you go to university, is that your fault for going, or is it the fact that the educational system pushes you to go to university with no actual decent outcomes? Like, you can see why bro is faceless, because you know, if I had to face and push stupid ideas like that, I'd be kind of, you know, I'd get clowned pretty aggressively. This has been an awesome stream. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's been pretty good. The only time we can do this again if there's a holiday or something like that, because honestly, if I had to go work tomorrow, I'd be dead.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think I'm in work. I think because I'd booked up a bunch of days, and there were some days I couldn't book off because there wasn't as time available. So I'm working like 2 days this week, I think, and then I got another few days off before next week to the job that I fucking despise. But that should be interesting at the very least, anyway. But thank you very much. Thank you everybody for chatting. Thank you. Go ahead. Like I think we maxed out at like over 100 viewers today with all the raids and people off both YouTube and Twitch. So it's been pretty good. Thank you for all the super chats and all the gifted memberships and all the bits and all the subs and all the primes. Much appreciate everybody. Thank you very much, Madge. We'll definitely do this again sometime.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, see ya.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.